If one day you logged into a game like you always do, and 2 weeks later, every monster from that game appeared in the real world, what would you do? The gods descended, cities fell, billions died. But there was one man who knew it was all coming. He didn't try to save the world. Instead, he relentlessly hunted monsters, seized every resource he could, and grew stronger at any cost. Until the final day, when even the gods themselves were forced to kneel before him. This is the story of me, Qin Feng. Sitting in my cramped, dingy rental, I glared at the monitor, where several headlines stared back, with experts furiously debunking the gods and demons game as a cheap capitalistic cash grab or high-tech scam. Load of crap, I spat, my voice raspy, before I sat up straight, sneering at the screen. These idiots called it a hoax, but I knew better, because this wasn't just a game, it was the prologue to the end of the world. Gods and demons had appeared from nowhere, no marketing, yet it swept the globe in days. 3 months after launch, the game world merged with reality. Monsters of nightmare proportions and terrifying wraiths began harvesting lives, and human order crumbled like a soggy cookie. Only those who gained power in-game stood a chance. In my past life, I'd listened to those experts and dismissed the game as trash, which led me to wait a month to start. Spent my days cowering in my bedroom, and eventually got backstabbed by the Longsing Guild in a dungeon for a measly hidden reward. Wang Longxing. In this life, I'm settling every single debt. The clock struck 10, prompting me to lunge into my game pod and seal the hatch as my consciousness shifted into a void. Scanning. Player logged in. Initiating talent awakening. Error. Error. The voice was cold, like a siren blaring in my brain, while the void warped around me. Unknown error detected. System auto-updating. Please wait. My heart hammered against my ribs as I wondered if an unknown error didn't happen in my past life. Did my rebirth break something? 10 minutes later, the chime returned. Version updated. Please check the notices. Player talent identified as unknowable. System cannot fully stimulate. Providing temporary solution. Receive a new SSS-rank talent every 30 days. Accept. My jaw dropped, wondering if every 30 days was possible when, in my last life, players with a single SSS-rank talent could be counted on one hand. I was built different, apparently, so I smashed the accept button without a second thought. Talent activated. Thief of Heaven. Upon choosing your class, the first SSS-rank talent will manifest, detecting affinity for 3 hidden classes. Please select. I forced my racing heart to slow, eyes locked on the options. The first was Lord of Illusions, a nightmare on the battlefield, while the second was King of Poisons, a class that single-handedly wiped out hundreds in my past life. Both were soul-crushingly powerful, but my focus settled on the third, Fate Thief. Thief was etched into my soul, it was my bread and butter, and Fate sounded like a game-breaking rule-bender that felt destined, so I clicked it instantly. Class confirmed. Fate Thief. First SSS rank talent activated. Fate Treasury. Effect 1. Experience gain increased by 10x. Effect 2. Skills can be upgraded using Fate points. Effect 3. Monthly resurrection to a set day and full health. Fate points are earned by stealing key items or completing major events. I nearly lost it at 10 times the experience, knowing I'd be lapping other players before they even figured out the controls. The skill upgrades broke the game's logic, and that resurrection effect was basically a cheat code for immortality, giving main character energy. Gods and Demons is now live. Enjoy your game. The system chime faded, and a flood of players poured into the novice village. Bro, the lighting effects? This is pure black magic, one guy shouted. My talent is only F rank? I'm gonna be cannon fodder, another wailed. Ha, I got a legendary strength buff. I'm the main character now. I ignored the chaos, checking my status panel, because I didn't come here to make friends, I came to cook. Player, Qin Xiao, class, Fate Thief, level, 0, strength, 16, stamina, 16, spirit, 16, agility, 21, HP, 100/100 MP, 100/100 skills, sneak, steal, talents, Fate Treasury, unique, Fate points, 0. I smiled, seeing that the math wasn't mathing for everyone else, but for me, the game was already over. I checked my starting skills, finding that Shadow Stab dealt 150% critical damage and applied a Fate mark. At 3 stacks, I could detonate them up to 13 stacks. Shadow Step turned me invisible, and boosted speed by 10%, adding 2 marks if I attacked from stealth, while finally, Shadow Theft offered an 80% chance to snag random loot. Compared to the trashy skills of average thieves in my last life, this was a god-tier kit. I grinned. If base skills were this lethal, I couldn't wait to see the high-level ones. Plus, I had Fate points to burn, so I didn't hesitate to upgrade Shadow Theft, watching it mutate into Fate Hand. Fate Hand, level 1, theft success rate is 100%. If I steal twice, I'm almost guaranteed to get the target's most valuable item, and stealing S-rank items grants Fate points. My pulse spiked, realizing it wasn't just limited to food, but this could potentially strip away skills, stats, or even binding contracts. That thought spread through my mind like wildfire, confirming it was time to cook. I headed toward the outskirts, where the beginner village was swarming with players fighting level 1 to 2 boars or goblins. They were struggling, because dying here cost 1% of your real-life lifespan, which was a pretty heavy price to pay for a skill issue. I ignored them, slipping into the shadows with Shadow Step until I reached a valley reeking of rot, home to level 4 malformed monsters. These guys hit like trucks, and their heart-piercing horn skill usually one-shotted tanks, meaning nobody farmed here, which was good because that meant more loot for me. I crept up behind a lone monster and unleashed Fate Hand. Theft successful, gained 5 copper coins. The monster twitched, looking around confused, but I didn't stop as I activated Fate Hand again. Theft successful, gained 7 copper coins. By the time I drained it of its loose change, the beast was panicked and erratic, prompting me to flash behind it and trigger Shadow Stab. Crit, 52. 7 marks stacked. I detonated them, causing a massive boom. Crit, 632. The monster exploded into gibs as I hit level 2 instantly, the rush of energy washing away my fatigue. With my 10x XP multiplier, I was clearing levels while everyone else was busy touching grass. I dumped my stat points into agility and strength, then pumped my skill points into Shadow Stab and Shadow Step. Soon, I was a blur of motion, dancing through the valley, where every strike was a death sentence. Ding. You have reached level 2. I leveled up fast, my stats skyrocketing, until by the time I hit level 3, the monsters weren't even a challenge. I was feeling great until a roar shattered the air and a hunched figure emerged from the deep valley, wearing tattered robes and sporting a face full of scars. Boss, Mutant Freak King Bark level 8. HP, Lima Rebo, ATK, Dalakan Pun, SPD, Sapula, Def, Limapol. Who dares mess with my subjects? It shrieked. He was intimidating, but I was just getting started, so I entered stealth, reached out, and executed Fate Hand. Theft successful, gained Bark's Frenzy Potion. A red vial appeared in my hand, granting 30% more attack at the cost of 50% defense for 30 seconds. A glass cannon's dream, though it wasn't really my style, so I tucked it away and, seeing the cooldown had reset, reached out for another grab. Bark scrambled, his eyes darting wildly as he scanned the fog, shrieking, "Who's there? Show yourself, you coward." With a roar, he unleashed a thick cloud of toxic gas, choking the valley. I stiffened. His reaction time was faster than I'd anticipated, but I wasn't just standing there. I pulled a flask of Bark's antidote from my inventory and downed it, a chilling sensation flooding my body as the poison dissipated the moment it touched my skin, like it had just run into its natural predator. Interesting skill, I muttered with a cold smirk, but not enough. I slipped back into the shadows, dance-stepping around his perimeter, landing a quick Fate Hand swipe before fading away. "Damn you, where are you?" Bark raged, the toxic fog thickening until it felt almost solid. I was a ghost at his back, my movements fueled by the cold, ruthless instinct honed in my past life's death struggles. 11 stacks meant game over. "Die," I whispered, the word a death sentence as I drove my dagger into Bark's throat, slamming home 2 more fate marks. Boom. The energy erupted like a volcano. Bark shrieked, but the explosion of over 1,000 critical damage erased his remaining life force, causing him to collapse in a heap of dust and broken pride. Ding. Elite Monster, Mutant Freak, King Bark defeated. Gained, B-grade chest X1, XP bonus 500%. You have reached level 5. New title, Chicken Killer Extraordinaire. Not bad, I thought, eyeing the metallic sheen of the B-grade chest. In Gods and Demons, normal loot drops as items, but elites were the only ones that condensed their rewards into treasure chests, meaning the chest grade matched my talent level. Lucky me. I ignored the chest for a moment to dump my level up points, since 2 levels gave me 10 attribute points and 5 skill points. I poured them into agility and strength, then pumped 3 points into Shadow Stab, making my crit damage hit a monstrous 300%. The remaining 2 points went into Shadow Step, pushing my movement speed buff to 30%, signaling that I was ready. "Let's see what you've got for me," I murmured, resting my hand on the chest to activate Fate Hand. Theft successful, gained equipment, Hatred Dagger, B grade 1/2. Hatred Dagger, ATK 80 to 130 plus 5 strength. Effect, plus 30% crit damage and inflicts bleed. Note, Bark hates everything, including you. It was a jagged, dark red blade, and my eyes lit up because the 1/2 tag meant it was part of a set, making getting a set piece from a random elite insane luck. The chest was cracked and dull, but it held 1 more charge, so I reached in again. Theft successful, gained equipment, Hatred Boots, B grade 2/2. Hatred Boots, plus 5 agility. Effect, speed buffs are 30% more effective, plus 5% crit rate. If crit rate is capped, gain plus 15% crit damage. I donned the gear immediately, causing a notification to appear. Set effect activated, Hatred's Poison, plus 1 to all stats. All attacks now inflict bleed. A warm glow enveloped me, making me feel stronger, faster, and more lethal. I swapped out my trashy starter gear for the loot, feeling like a completely different person because I was no longer the desperate amateur from my past life. I was a hunter. It was time to hit my next target, a place that would ensure no other player would ever catch up to me. Meanwhile, the novice chat was on fire. "Bro, these goblins hit like a freight train. I'm level 2 and got 1 shot. Tell me about it. I've been grinding for hours and my XP bar barely moved 1%. Quit whining and find a party. Soloing is a death sentence. How are the guys on the leaderboard leveling up like they're using cheat codes?" I closed the chat, ignoring the noise, because let them struggle, since I had work to do. Who knows? Probably whales or players backed by professional studios, someone in the chat griped, adding, us normies should just stick to the basics. I ignored the noise, letting them gossip, because I had a dungeon to raid. Beyond a rocky, desolate wasteland, I found the entrance to the Gloom cavern, which was tucked away, overgrown with vines and jagged stones, the only dungeon in the Sincho village. It was crawling with level 7 wolves, led by a level 10 elite, the Gloom Wolf Lord. Warning. Player level 2 low. Enter Gloom cavern? I didn't hesitate to type, yes. A flash of light deposited me into the dank, humid tunnel where the air tasted like rot, and the rhythmic drip-drip of water echoed against the slick stone. Ahead, several muscular wolves with eerie, dark purple fur twitched their ears, snarling at my presence. Gloom Wolf. Level 7, HP, 450, ATK, 45, SPD, 12, Def, 30, Skill, Bite, Chance to inflict bleed. I triggered Shadow Step, fading into the darkness before they could react, then ghosted behind a lone wolf, my dagger finding its mark for a Shadow Stab Fate Mark Detonate combo. Ding. Defeated Gloom Wolf. XP, 35%. Ding. Stole passive skill, Bloodlust, 10%. Life Steal. Nice, I thought, as I cut through the pack, my level skyrocketing. By the time I reached the cavern's heart, I was level 7, so I dumped every skill point into Shadow Stab. At level 7, I could feel the skill nearing a qualitative breakthrough. When it hit 10, it would be game-breaking. The final chamber opened up, and in the center lay the boss, twice the size of a normal wolf, its purple fur like jagged steel, tail tipped with deadly bone spikes. Gloom Wolf Lord Elite, level 10, HP, 12,000, ATK, 120, SPD, 15, Def, 80, Skills, Shadowmire, Gloom Roar, Summon Pack. Flanking him were 3 guard beasts Elite, level 7, whose passive, Wolf Pack mentality, was a nightmare that granted the Lord 300 points of physical and magical defense and 3,000 bonus HP. Even worse, if the Lord dropped below 50% HP, they'd sacrifice themselves to heal him for 5,000. It was a classic impossible raid for most players. In my past life, this cavern claimed thousands of lives, with average players dying at least 3 times before clearing it. You couldn't kill the boss first because of the guard beast's buffs, but killing the guards first triggered the Lord's lone wolf passive, turning him into a berserker. But they didn't have Fate Hand. I moved like a shadow, dancing through the chamber as I flicked my fingers, tagging the Wolf Lord and all 3 guards with a Fate mark. I didn't detonate them yet, because instead, I focused on the guards. With my B-grade gear and my 100% crit rate, every strike was a surgical hit. A woo. 1 guard beast went down before it could even howl, disintegrated by a black flash of critical energy, which made the Wolf Lord roar in fury, slamming a pool of dark shadow energy toward me. It was on. The Gloom Wolf Lord's claws tore through the air with a piercing whistle, but I'd already predicted the move and ghosted to the side, letting the strike whistle pass my skin without losing a hair. This was the rogue's dance, graceful, lethal, and perfectly calculated. While I toyed with the Lord, my dagger kept harvesting his guards. With every guard that collapsed into white light, my fate marks on the boss stacked higher. When the final guard perished, 11 marks were branded onto the beast's soul, prompting me to flash a cold, sharp smile. Time's up. I lunged like a sword drawn from its sheath, my blade glittering as I drove it into the boss's throat for a shadow stab, detonating all 13 marks at once. Boom. The resulting chain reaction of energy was apocalyptic, meaning the Lord didn't even have time to trigger his lone wolf passive before the force reduced his massive frame to fragments of meat. Ding. Global first clear. Gloom Cavern. Preparing global announcement. Rewards. Normal grade first clear chest X1. Boss kill. B grade chest X1. You have reached level 8. Notifications flooded my brain like a bomb blast, but I just kept smiling. In Gods and Demons, dungeons had 4 tiers. Normal, Nightmare, Hard, and Hell. You had to clear the prerequisite to unlock the next, but if you were fast enough, you could sweep all 4 in one go and claim all 4 first clear rewards. As for the global announcement, I couldn't care less. I knew the drill. The Longshan Guild had built their reputation on these announcements in my past life, but that fame was useless to a solo player since I was only interested in the rewards. I stared at the silver glow of the first clear reward, knowing that if I remembered correctly, this should grant extra skill points. I used Fate Hand on the light. Ding. Target unselectable. Unselectable? I frowned, disappointed, but I crushed the light in my palm anyway. 2 skill points appeared in my stats, which was simple, but I'd take it. Next was the B-grade chest, so I pressed my hand against it and triggered Fate Hand. Theft successful. Gained equipment, Gloom Crossbow, B-grade 1/4, offhand. It was a level 7 piece with 100 to 125 ATK and an auto-reload feature that fired a piercing bolt every 3 seconds. As a main weapon, it was trash, but as an offhand, it was a decent bit of extra chip damage, so I ignored it and tapped the cracking chest again. Theft successful. Gained item, Gloom Cavern Master's Token. A red wolf head emblem appeared, signifying it was a quest item. I pocketed it and reached in one last time. Theft successful. Gained item, Dawn City property deed. The chest shattered completely, leaving me holding a scroll in my hands. Dawn City was an NPC-run hub where players could buy gear and take shelter, but only if they were residents, making this deed a golden ticket. It was useless right now, but a luxury for later. I moved on to my stats, pushing agility to 46 and strength to 27 before I stopped there, because once any attribute hit 50, it would hit a hard cap, requiring a trial quest to break. No need to hit the wall yet. With the gear sorted and the stats set, I didn't take a breath, because it was time to clear the next difficulty. Back at the novice village, a tall, sharp-featured man was already staring at the notification board in disbelief. The goblin shrieked as the man's blade carved into its skull. With a swift follow-up, the man delivered a killing strike to the creature's throat, spraying blood across the ground like a careless painter's splash. He remained unmoved, while his retinue erupted into applause, shouting, "Boss Wang, you're a legend! 2 hits!" Wang Longxing ignored the praise, though I'd recognize him anywhere, the president of the world's top guild, Longxing. Rumor had it, his S-rank talent, lone authority, scaled with the number of followers he commanded, meaning the more meat shields he had, the stronger he became. "Knock it off," Wang snapped, adding, "It's just a trash mob. Keep moving, I want higher-level monsters." His lackeys nodded obediently, clearing the path, which meant they shredded the mobs until they were one-hit kills for Wang to scavenge. They didn't mind, because he paid well, and they were chasing their own greeds. Wang easily cut down the softened goblins, his level already sitting at 5. Efficiency was key. With this setup, claiming the top spot in the game was basically a hobby. Suddenly, a system notification flared globally. Global announcement, player Qin Xiao has cleared the Gloom cavern dungeon for the first time. Wang's smug smile twitched because it was impossible, since he'd spent a fortune, used dozens of lackeys, and leveraged his S-rank talent, yet he was only level 5. How was someone faster, making him wonder if someone was hacking? His face darkened, for he didn't believe in talent gaps. He believed in secrets. "You guys keep grinding," he ordered his team, then pulled a player aside, whispering, "Log off. Have my people find out who this Qin Xiao is." The announcement echoed worldwide. In the grasslands, an archer froze mid-draw. In the forests, a sorcerer's incantation died on his lips. Even high-level players, deep in dungeons, halted their blades, staring into the void. The mystery of Qin Xiao sent shockwaves through the elite community. Some high-level players were so distracted they actually died to their mobs. Meanwhile, I was busy finishing the job. I stood before the final boss of the Hell difficulty dungeon, the Master of Gloom Cavern. It was a massive, porcupine-like nightmare, with quills that pulsed with every breath and jagged bone spikes on its tail. If this monster hit the novice village, it would be a massacre, but it was just me and the beast, and despite its terrifying aura, it was bleeding out while I didn't have a speck of dust on me. The boss roared not a howl, but a tiger's rage, and lunged. I used Shadow Step, vanishing like a phantom while the beast twisted, jaws snapping at empty air. This Hell mode boss could one-shot a level 10 player, but I wasn't panicked, so I just smiled and whispered, "Detonate." The 11 fate marks I'd planted erupted. The shockwave sounded like thunder, spraying gore across the cavern while I was already 10 feet away, avoiding the mess. A golden light bathed me. I was level 9. Whew, Hell mode was no joke, because one scratch would have ended me, meaning I'd had to play it perfectly to solo this. I turned to the loot, and my heart skipped because the chest wasn't silver, it was gold, meaning it was an S-rank chest. Even with my luck, this was a massive win, especially since I'd already collected 3 pieces of the Gloom set, the A-rank Cloak of Agility, and the A-rank Belt of Capacity, and I was praying for a 4th. I claimed the Hell mode first clear reward, and since Fate Hand couldn't target it, I crushed the light. Ding. You have obtained the special affix, Assassin's Star. Skill damage increased by 15%. Requirement: solo clear Hell mode dungeon without taking damage. Nice, I noted, because not even the elites in my past life had scored this. I turned to the S-rank chest, knowing this was the main event, so I pressed my palm to the gold surface and activated Fate Hand. Ding. Theft successful. Obtained equipment, Gloom Necklace, A-rank 1/4. Gloom Necklace, +5 strength, +5 stamina. Skill, Gloom Barrier, generates a protective shield. It's giving main character energy, which was true since my set was almost complete. The Gloom set bonus was active, granting me +1 to all stats and imbuing every attack with the power of Gloom. This wasn't just a stat boost, it meant my strikes ranged, melee, even poisoning carried a piercing effect. Imagine an enemy drinking a cup of poison, only for their internal organs to rupture from the latent Gloom energy before the toxins even took hold. Even a master detective would be baffled, which proved that's crazy work. I pushed aside the thrill and kept using Fate Hand on the loot. Ding. Theft successful. Obtained item, Arya's Ruby. I stared at the gem in my palm, stunned, because this ruby had a drop rate so low, it was practically a myth. While its public description claimed it was worth 20 gold coins, its real utility was far more valuable, so my smile widened since this was better than any piece of gear. I decided to keep going. Ding. Theft successful. Obtained item, Dawn City map. I unfolded the parchment, which traced a jagged, treacherous path to Dawn City, a route so circuitous that anyone attempting the journey without this guide would almost certainly die. Finding this felt like finding a cheat code for the early game, and my restraint was slipping. Even a hardened pro like me couldn't help but grin at this haul. I reached out for one more. Ding, theft successful. Obtained S-rank skill book, Blink. Blink was a short-range, 100-meter teleport with a 1.5-second cooldown. My emotions whiplashed from shock to delight to pure ecstasy. It wasn't just the S-rank item that sent me over the edge, it was the system prompt. Player successfully stole S-rank item, gained 1 fate point. I had enough to upgrade a skill, and though Blink was god tier, my Shadow Step was already covering my mobility needs, so I decided to pull the trigger on Shadow Stab instead. Consume 1 fate point to upgrade Shadow Stab? Yes. As the system processed the command, my muscles spasmed, straining and relaxing in rapid, agonizing cycles. It wasn't just training, it felt like total reconstruction, and when it finished, the skill had evolved. Skill upgraded to Fate's Dirge, S-rank passive. Effect: every strike deals 300% critical damage. Additionally, any damage source instantly detonates all existing fate marks. If the target has no marks, the skill deals triple mark detonation damage and immediately applies 3 new marks. Are you kidding me? I whispered, my brain struggling to process the math. This turned Shadow Stab into a basic attack powerhouse, meaning I didn't even need to use skills. 2 normal hits would trigger 6 stacks of marked damage. If I had possessed this against the Gloom Cavern Master, I could have deleted the Hell difficulty boss in 2 strikes. Because this wasn't a player skill, it was a raid boss tier mechanic. I checked my expression, forcing myself to stay grounded, telling myself I need to calm down. Talent is common, and who knew what other monsters with SSS rank potential were lurking in the shadows, making it a skill issue to assume I'm the only one with an edge. I sharpened my gaze toward the darkest, unexplored path of the cavern, and since I was level 9, it was time to hit the level 10 cap, so I disappeared into the gloom. Meanwhile, back in the forest, Wang Longxing's frustration had finally cooled, only to be replaced by a new notification. Regional announcement: due to your excessive slaughter of goblins, the local camp has dispatched a punitive force of 10 goblin warriors and 1 goblin champion to hunt you down. The region-wide alert flashed. A punitive party of 10 elite goblin warriors and 1 goblin champion had been dispatched to hunt players. Wang Longxing didn't flinch, and in fact, he looked delighted, shouting, "Ha! If others can get a global announcement, so can I." His entourage immediately scrambled to stroke his ego, saying, "Exactly, boss. That kid just got lucky. Real power is what you've got, Boss Wang. That Qin guy probably just found some exploit in the game's code." The bootlicking was so thick I could practically smell the desperation, but for some reason, Wang actually seemed to enjoy it today. Suddenly, the rustling of bushes cut their conversation short, and 11 goblins emerged, but these weren't the loincloth-wearing fodder we were used to. These were clad in thick cotton, armed with battered steel blades and shields, while standing at the center, a brute in iron bull-horned armor and chainmail clutched a massive double-bladed axe. A player charged forward, swinging his blade, but the lead goblin parried with lightning speed and countered, dealing 200 damage, which caused the player's health bar to instantly halve. "Retreat, it's a level 5 elite squad," Wang shouted. We all scrambled back, because even Wang knew better than to solo a level 5 elite team. "Form up, don't get isolated," he commanded, while his mind raced, wondering if that Qin player could really be dealing with threats this difficult. No way, he reasoned, since he probably just got lucky with a single boss, meaning if I wipe this squad, I'll prove I'm better than him. Under Wang's direction, his dozens of players tightened their phalanx frontline shield bearers backed by spearmen, creating a disciplined formation that held, barely. Wang darted through the gaps, his silver longsword carving arcs through the air like lethal shooting stars, and he was terrifyingly efficient, dropping a level 5 elite every 7 strikes. As he fought, his mind calmed, reasoning that a first global announcement meant nothing since his S-rank talent put him on a path to surpass this rival easily and claim his place as the apex. With a final flourish, Wang slit the last warrior's throat, leaving only the goblin champion, who stood motionless with eyes closed before snapping them open with a glare of pure malice. "Let me handle him," Wang roared, charging forward with a glowing blade, but the champion didn't even blink as he swung his massive axe, sending Wang's sword flying. A follow-up blow connected with a sickening thud, launching Wang like a cannonball into his own lines, inflicting 800 damage and causing his health bar to plummet to near zero. "All of you, attack," Wang gasped, scrambling to his feet as the air filled with projectiles, most of which the champion deflected with effortless, lazy swipes of his axe. Although he couldn't stop them all, and arrows peppered his hide, Wang downed a few health potions, lunged into the opening, and unleashed a silver blade aura that carved 300 points of damage into the boss. Boss Wang is invincible. The surrounding players cheered, and for once, there was a shred of genuine awe, considering it was a level 5 boss, after all. Eventually, the arrogant champion crumbled under the weight of numbers, and a silver chest manifested on the blood-soaked earth, prompting Wang to strut over, throw the lid open, and pull out a 4-foot-long, plain-looking sword. Goblin Greatsword, C rank, level 5, +1 strength, effect, plus 10% damage on critical hits. Not bad, Wang smirked, his eyes burning with ambition as he thought that with this, the next global announcement would be mine. Global announcement: player Qin Xiao has become the first player in the server to reach level 10. Wang's smile died, realizing it had happened again, while the server erupted with players asking, "Who is this guy? Is he hacking? I'm barely level 2. Meanwhile, deep in the Gloom cavern, I stared at the corpse of a level 10 elite I just vaporized, blinking in confusion because I hadn't even been watching my XP bar. I just fired a shot, and suddenly I was level 10. What a waste, I thought, since I'd wanted a boss kill to make the level up feel ceremonial, but instead, I just squandered the milestone on a random mob. I sighed and checked the loot chest, finding a B-rank longsword inside, which made me shake my head and toss it into my inventory space, since, as a rogue, a B-rank weapon was just too weak to care about. My brain has too many tabs open for this nonsense, I muttered, before opening my personal panel and distributing my stat points with a focus on agility and strength. Player, Qin Xiao, Fate Thief, level, 10100% XP, stats, STR 59, STA 25, SPR 15, AGI 62, HP 2500, MP, Yitzen Wubat. I scanned the numbers with satisfaction, knowing that reaching the stat cap at level 10 was unheard of, as most players wouldn't touch this threshold until level 20 or beyond. In my past life, my level 10 self had been absolute trash compared to this, yet even then, I'd climbed to the peak, meaning that now, with my knowledge and this god-tier build, the path to being the absolute strongest was laid bare. I stretched, my frame feeling dense and powerful, like forged iron, before my dark eyes hardened with resolve and I mused. With this power, I can take what I need and crush those who oppose me. I won't let you die for me again. I pushed aside the sentimental weight and focused, knowing I had no time to waste, until a notification chime pulled me back, revealing my friend request list was at 999 plus. I hovered over the close button until a highlighted message caught my eye. Qin Xiao, let's talk. Interested in a deal, Qin Feng. I paused, remembering that in the early game, a floating broadcast cost a gold coin, a fortune for most, but for Qin Feng, it was pocket change. In my previous life, his name was Money God, and he was a titan among players whom even the massive Longxing Guild couldn't touch regarding liquid assets. Yet, unlike other corporate sharks, he was surprisingly decent, often funding struggling players. Collaborating with him felt like the right move, so I accepted the request. Qin Feng, big brother, why not join our team? I'll give you top-tier treatment, first pick of all gear, and a salary of 5 million cash a month. I smirked, knowing that if I hadn't been a reincarnator, I would have jumped at 5 million a month without a second thought. But cash was about to become worthless. Your offer is generous, but I'm a lone wolf. I don't do teams, I replied, prompting Qin Feng to ask, understandable, is there any other way we can work together? I have gear, I replied, adding, I don't need cash, but I'll take gold coins, at a wholesale price of 10 gold for standard, level 5 gear, and 20 gold for C-rank quality. Qin Feng agreed with a quick, deal. On the other side of the screen, a rotund, jovial young man grinned at his dozen squad members, saying, Big brother says he's sending us gear. Captain, are you sure he's not just dumping trash on us? A masked man sneered, adding, he's just one guy. Respectfully, no, a female archer countered, explaining, he's a level 10 anomaly, so let's see what he's got. A massive treasure chest materialized before Qin Feng via a system mail drop, and he popped it open to reveal 15 pieces of gear representing every weapon category, all of which were C-rank. Wild Boar Blade, C-rank, 40 to 50 DMG, plus 2 STR, effect, chance to trigger a 50% damage follow-up attack. Qin Feng's jaw dropped at these insane stats, seeing that most of his team were currently scraping by with inferior equipment, and he now had enough to arm his entire squad. C. The female archer noted as she snatched up a wolf hunt bow, her eyes widening as the stats displayed plus 2 agility and a 10% critical damage boost, which was nearly double the power of her current weapon. A level 10 god-tier player doesn't lie to us, she added, making the masked man fall silent and humbled, while Qin Feng was busy finalizing the transaction. He didn't blink while transferring 300 gold coins, for even though it was a steep price, the strategic advantage was priceless. Qin Feng has sent you 300 gold coins. I watched the funds hit my account and nodded, knowing I needed the gold and I needed a lot of it because when the game's reality merged with the world, gold coins would be the only currency that mattered. In that future, 15 tons of gold couldn't buy a single coin. I cracked my knuckles, the joints popping like dry wood, realizing it was time because after hitting level 10 inches my past life, I'd foolishly left the novice village and missed the greatest hidden opportunity in the game. This time, I wasn't going anywhere until I claimed it, so I vanished from the spot, my flash skill carrying me across the plains in an instant. The wind whipped through the tall grass, and suddenly, I materialized in the heart of the wild. Not bad, I mused, glancing back at the distance I'd covered, because without mounts or specialized gear in the starting zone, Flash was essentially a cheat code for travel. Other players used it to run away from trouble, but that wasn't really my style since, usually, I'm the one telling them to run. I strolled through the Fengxi wilds with an easy, unhurried pace, knowing that as the server's only level 10 wielding an SSS-rank talent, the rest of the novice village would lose their minds if I looked panicked. A lone player who had just finished off a wolf stared at me, dumbstruck, since it's hard to ignore someone with Qin Shao glowing in massive letters above their head. I didn't bother hiding my name. You can't do that in the novice zone anyway, and I certainly didn't care about the attention. The player immediately forgot his loot and opened the chat channel to type, "Guys, I just saw Qin Shao in Fengshi Wilds. Why is he still here? He's level 10 already." The channel blew up with users replying, "Fengshi? That place is crawling with level 5 poison snakes. The loot's trash, and the XP is garbage. Why would a god-tier player be there?" On the other side of the zone, the news reached Wang Longxing, who was currently busy bossing around his guild members, causing him to frown and say, "He's in Fengshi? That place is a death trap, and unless you enjoy constant health drain and zero rewards, nobody goes there." "Shall we follow him, President?" a subordinate asked, suggesting, "We might finally learn how he gets so strong." Wang smirked and ordered, "Fine. Everyone, stop what you're doing. We're heading to Fengxi." His 100-man guild, well-funded and disciplined, moved instantly, making them the exact opposite of my lone wolf vibe, because my patience is under maintenance whenever I have to deal with groups. Meanwhile, Kong Fang's team was watching the same chat chaos, prompting the masked member to suggest, "Captain, should we go? We might snag something." Kong Fang shook his head and replied, "No, we're partners, not vultures. Let the others fight over the scraps while we focus on our own grind." Back in the center of the Fengshi Wilds, I slipped into shadow walking mode and moved like smoke, ensuring no monster dared to aggro me. The level gap was so wide that if they could actually spot me, I'd be embarrassed to call myself a thief. I stopped before a cluster of massive boulders arranged like a Stonehenge nightmare, a spot mostly ignored in my past life except by one persistent player who had stumbled upon the area's secret. By realigning these rocks to match the Big Dipper, he'd accidentally summoned the ultimate novice zone hidden quest, the Nilly Snake Demon projection from the first layer of hell. I began to move the stones, and even though each boulder weighed several tons, my strength stats made the heaving look effortless. Adulting is soup, and I'm a fork, I thought, heaving the final rock into place, and as I clicked it into position, the 7 stones erupted in blinding light, columns of black energy piercing the sky. Global announcement: player Qin Shao has successfully summoned the hellish monster projection, Nilly Snake Demon. The ground cracked as a massive, scaled horror with a human torso, a serpent's tail, and 4 powerful arms slithered out of a dark void. But I didn't stay to fight and immediately dissolved into the shadows. From the edge of the wilds, Wang Longxing saw the black pillars of light and roared. I knew it. He found a hidden quest. "Move faster. Everyone, let's steal his kill." A dozen other guilds rushed forward, fueled by greed and ignorance, while Kong Fang, watching from afar, just sighed and said, "Let them fight. Trying to steal a kill from Qin Shao is crazy work, and they're just going to lose their investment." I stayed hidden in the darkness, watching the chaos as the Nilly Snake Demon acted as a chaotic neutral force, mindlessly slaughtering the local poison snakes with horrifying efficiency. Nilly Snake Demon, Hell Projection, Level 10 Boss, HP 14,500, MP 3,200, ATK 500. It possessed 2 terrifying skills: Sovereign of the Poisonous Tongue, which created a zone where magic was useless, and Snake Tail Earthquake, a shockwave attack powered by the fires of hell. Let the guilds come, I thought, knowing they were about to learn that some monsters are better left alone. The Nilly Snake Demon was a nightmare of mechanics because, beyond its bloated, unfair stats, its skill set was designed to break anyone with zone denial magic to silence mages, toxins to cripple warriors, and massive area of effect attacks. It's giving main character energy, but the wrong kind, I thought. Even I had to move carefully, my eyes locking onto the shedding trait, which was an auto-revive that restored the beast to full health. It was a rare, high-tier survival skill, one that, according to my past knowledge, could be used as a crafting material for even more powerful items, so I had to have it. But I didn't need to lift a finger yet, as a chaotic horde of hundreds of players surged into the plains, slaughtering everything in their path. The Nilly Snake Demon, a 10-foot behemoth with 4 arms and 4 spears, didn't hesitate as it whipped its serpentine body around, its crimson eyes fixed on the encroaching mass. "Is that the boss?" one player asked, stepping too close, right before a spear impaled him like a kebab. Blood sprayed across the front line, dealing a clean 2,000 damage, which caused the crowd to recoil. But the demon was already moving, using its spears like clubs to sweep through the ranks and turn the battlefield into a meat grinder. "Mages back! Warriors, hold the line!" someone screamed, but the formation had already shattered into a panicked stampede. Wang Longxing, leading his 100-man squad, finally arrived and bellowed, "All units, consolidate on me," which caused the smaller groups to scramble toward him in terror. The demon paused, pulling its spear from the ground to face Wang's unified force, prompting Wang to smirk and think, "Glad I didn't rush in alone." He stepped forward, putting on a mask of selfless leadership, and announced, "Everyone, this boss is too strong to solo, so let's join forces and we'll distribute the rewards based on contribution. Agreed?" A hand-picked captain immediately cheered. We followed President Wang, and the others, lacking spines, quickly fell in line. "Spearmen, front. Archers and mages, focus fire," Wang ordered, drawing his sword to lead the charge, while thinking that this is a PR dream for the Longxing Guild. Dozens of arrows and fireballs rained down, and though the demon parried the arrows with its spears, the fireballs landed true, causing damage numbers like 50, 71, and 50 to blossom over its head. The players grew bold, convinced they were grinding it down, until the demon roared, sending a wave of silence washing over the casters that made their chants die in their throats. Anti-magic zone. Switch to melee, Wang yelled, lunging forward to land a strike for 250 damage as the melee classes swarmed the boss, turning the fight into a bloody, frenetic mess. The demon claimed lives with every swing, but the sheer volume of attacks, especially from the archers sniping its eyes, was shredding its health bar. I speak fluent sarcasm, but watching them try to coordinate is just comedy. I mused from the shadows of a nearby boulder where I sat popping a honey candy into my mouth. The sweetness was a nice distraction from the carnage, and I watched my STR stat tick up by 15, noting that while the Chef God hidden class was a waste of time for combat, these temporary buffs were decent enough for killing time. I activated my Fate's left-hand skill, and the system notified me. System, you have successfully stolen, hellish maggot. A palm-sized, human-headed maggot materialized in my hand, prompting me to think that it was disgusting and that hell biology is straight-up cursed. Two stole my snack. The demon's voice, raspy and reeking of sulfur, echoed across the field, leaving the players frozen and confused by a boss that complained about theft. Focus, Wang screamed, panic bubbling in his voice, and he added, don't get distracted. The demon raised its massive tail and yelled, die, you pests, before unleashing an earthquake strike. The tail slammed into the earth, and a shockwave rippled out that sent dozens of warriors flying as 500 damage caused their health bars to vanish in a blink, proving it was a one-shot machine. I ignored the slaughter and triggered my skill again, receiving the notification. System, you have successfully stolen boiled hawk-clawed demon egg. A fist-sized egg appeared in my palm, reminding me that the cycle of vengeance between these two species was legendary. And now, it was all mine. I snatched the snake egg item as soon as it dropped, ignoring the demon's frantic, bestial shrieking while it scanned the area with its slit pupil eyes. I remained perfectly camouflaged in the shadows, and finding no target, the boss channeled its rage into the only living things it could see, Wang Longxing's team. Wang squinted, confused, because this shouldn't be possible since the crowd here wasn't strong enough to provoke a level 10 boss into a frenzy, yet he knew the boss's aggression was a gift, since an angry boss loses its rhythm. Rogues, drop traps. Warriors, back off. Archers, keep dragging it. Wang bellowed, exploiting the demon's inability to comprehend his commands. The demon hesitated for a split second, eyeing the traps, but its remaining sanity shattered under the heat of its own rage as it roared, I'll kill you all, while emerald venom dripped from its fangs to corrode the grass. System, you have successfully stolen Nilly Snake Ring, A rank. Nilly Snake Ring, A rank, plus 6 AGI. Effect, plus 50 backpack space. Skill, Nilly Trap, restrict target speed and movement. My eyes widened at this incredible find, because accessories were notoriously expensive since, unlike weapons, you could theoretically equip rings on every finger and toe, making inventory management a real delulu is the solulu scenario. This ring addressed my exact weaknesses, so I equipped it and turned back to the battlefield. The demon's health was bottoming out, and Wang Longxing, sensing the finish line, shoved his way to the front and ordered, everyone, move, stand aside. He confronted the demon, roaring, stay, and the command hit like a physical shockwave that froze the demon in place due to the A-rank skill, command and prohibit. It was a brutal control ability that cost 1 second of movement for every 100 people the user commanded. Die, Wang screamed, unleashing a glowing sword light that carved 250 damage into the beast and sent the demon crashing to the ground in a cloud of dust. But before anyone could cheer, a sinister red aura flared around the body, and bone-chilling cracking sounds filled the air as black scales sloughed off to reveal vibrant, blood-red ones that signaled a resurrection. Don't stop, it's on its last life, Wang commanded, and the players, honed by the fight, surged forward. The boss melted under the renewed assault while I watched from the sidelines, drumming my fingers on my knees and thinking that they were surprisingly competent for level 5s, but this kill was mine. I snapped my fingers, and with a loud boom, the demon's lower half and chest cavity detonated from within, deleting the last 1000 HP instantly. Baby, despicable. The demon gurgled as its upper half crumbled into dust, and it added, when hell descends, I will hunt you down. Global announcement, player Qin Xiao has successfully slain the hellish monster projection, Nilly Snake Demon. Silence fell over the plains, prompting Wang to gape and say, how? He was one-shotted, while scouring the area for me until his face twisted into a mask of pure, unadulterated rage. QNXIO, come out and face us, you thief, he screamed. I stepped out from behind a boulder with my black cloak fluttering in the wind, and even though I looked tiny against the massive rock formation, the players' gazes drifted to me with a mix of awe and hatred. System, you have gained 2 points of luck, total, 12. You obtained B-rank trait, Snake of Rotation, 30% HP, auto-revive on lethal damage, 3-0, day cooldown. You obtained S-rank chest X1. Wang stomped toward me, his face purple with fury, and demanded, you have some nerve stealing our kill. Where's your dignity, you server-first coward? The crowd joined in with a cacophony of insults about trash and stealing, but I didn't flinch and just stood with my hands behind my back, a look of bored indifference on my face. "You idiots," I said, my voice cutting through the noise like ice, and I added, "I summoned this boss. So, how is it stealing when I claim my own prize? You're the ones who tried to jump in on my hunt." Wang stuttered, unable to argue, but one of his cronies, Manhwa, stepped up and countered, "Like that matters. This isn't your personal property, and the server announcement proves it's a public challenge since, if it was yours, why did everyone get the notification? Sounds like a future me problem," I thought, suppressing a smirk because it's giving main character energy, but they just don't know it yet. "You're full of it," I countered, explaining. "The server announcement doesn't grant you ownership, and if it was yours, why didn't you kill it yourselves? You're just mad because you couldn't handle the heat." The Longshan Guild members bristled with blades drawn, showcasing major main character energy gone wrong, which prompted me to coolly ask, "Are you threatening me?" while keeping my hands behind my back to exude an arrogance that triggered them further. "Don't think you're special just because you're level 10. Manhwa spat, noting, "There's 100 of us, and you can't kill us all." I watched them, letting my gaze drift away as if I were bored, which made Manhwa smirk and say, "Scared? Hand over the chest, and maybe we'll let you live. Common sense is like deodorant, and the people who need it most never use it." I let out a sharp, mocking laugh, called them idiots, and without even drawing a weapon, simply dissolved into the shadows to leave them grasping at thin air. As the adrenaline faded, a sense of clarity washed over the crowd, and one of the spearmen finally lowered his weapon, frowning as he asked, "Wait, he's level 10 and can leave the newbie zone whenever he wants, so why are we even fighting him?" "Yeah," an assassin chimed in, adding, "and the newbie zone is a PK-free zone anyway, so how are we even supposed to touch him?" The realization rippled through the group, causing them to start side-eyeing Wang Longxing and Manhwa until a captain sighed, "You guys were just stirring the pot, weren't you? He's the server's first level 10, so fighting him would be like trying to solo the boss ourselves. Let it go." The groups began to disperse, with someone whispering, "You think he's gonna stay mad?" while another snorted, "He's a dog chasing cars, and honestly, he looks more like a monkey." I was already long gone, stepping onto the teleportation array to Tianyao City, where my form coalesced into existence within a massive city plaza paved in white stone that radiated a holy aura. My brain has too many tabs open, I thought, taking it all in, but this place, it feels right. "You're Qin Shao, right? You're early." My hand snapped to my dagger instinctively as my muscles coiled like a spring, locking onto a woman in black leather who was leaning against a pillar and idly tossing a dagger into the air. She was a striking beauty, but my intuition screamed at me because even though I'd faced wolf demons and snake monsters with relative ease, my body was trembling in the presence of this predator. "Are you a magician? Because everyone disappears when I look at you," I thought, though the mood was far from romantic. "Who are you?" I demanded, knowing I'd spent my previous life in Tianyao City and knew every powerhouse by name, yet this woman didn't exist in my memories. She flashed a playful, dark-eyed smile and said, "You newbies have so much curiosity. I am Arya, from the Shadow Sect, and I'm here to escort you to our headquarters." The name Shadow Sect rang a bell regarding a gem of Arya I'd picked up earlier, indicating she mistook me for a shadow assassin, a rare, deadly hidden class that thrived in the darkness. It was a convenient misunderstanding, but one that raised a question I'd never solved in my last life. How did these instructors track us down so precisely? "Let's go," she said, sensing my hesitation and heading toward the city gates without looking back, which prompted me to follow while keeping my guard up for whatever lay ahead. I kept pace with Arya, our high AGI builds making us blur through the streets of Tianyao City, where, because most residents draped themselves in white robes, our sleek, all-black gear turned every head like we were rare specimens in a zoo. Arya finally stopped before a monolithic black building and announced, "This is the Shadow Sect headquarters, where I'll guide you through the initiation, provide the catalyst for your level 10 breakthrough, and unlock unique sect skills." She leaned in, her dark eyes becoming crescent moons of curiosity, and asked, "Do you choose to join us?" "I do," I answered without hesitation. Joining a faction upon reaching level 10 was the golden rule of Heavenly Game, because while you could technically stay a solo player, you'd be relegated to mediocrity without the resources to reach elite tiers, and I wasn't interested in being average. Inside, we entered a dim room, dominated by a shrine where a mysterious statue sat hidden beneath a black cloth, flanked by two thick candles that burned with a pungent, heavy incense. Arya bowed toward the darkness and said, "Elder, I have brought the newbie as requested." Before she finished, a hooded figure materialized in front of me, with a movement so instantaneous that even the candlelight didn't flicker. "Interesting," the elder rumbled, his voice low and raspy, and he added, "You instinctively prepared for battle rather than retreat, newbie, so you have guts." I didn't answer, my eyes locked on his face, because even though I should have been able to see him, his features remained a swirling void of shadow that felt entirely unnerving. Suddenly, the elder leaned in, his gray eyes piercing through the gloom, and muttered, "Wait." Arya gripped her dagger, tensely asking, "Elder, is something wrong?" The shadows clinging to the elder's face dissolved like mist, revealing a map of deep, ancient wrinkles and hawk-sharp eyes that were now filled with utter shock. The shadow of fate? Remarkable, he murmured, before turning to Arya and chuckling softly. You've brought me someone truly extraordinary. Extraordinary? Arya tilted her head, explaining, he possesses pure shadow force, and I confirmed it. He's definitely a shadow assassin. The elder shook his head, his gaze shifting back to me as he said, Arya, do not fret, for this is the greatest of blessings, since I see a presence far greater than mere shadow. This is the shadow cast by fate itself, and only a thief of fate could project such a thing. Arya's face went pale, and she subconsciously backed away from me, whispering, a thief of fate? If the Fates' Shadow Society found out, they'd hunt him to the ends of the earth. I stayed silent, realizing this felt like a cutscene I was destined to watch rather than influence, while the elder turned to Arya with a commanding tone. Swear to the shadow, he ordered, adding, you are never to reveal this boy's nature, and if you break this oath, the shadow will claim your life. Arya bowed low, reciting the binding oath without hesitation, and once she was dismissed, the elder turned his focus entirely to me, warning that I was lucky, though I must remember this was both a blessing and a curse, and stating he would explain the rest only after I passed the trial. He flicked his wrist, and an ornate, dark silver tag manifested in his palm as he commanded, take this, newbie. System, you have triggered the trial quest, Shadow Sect Initiation. The objective was simple, requiring me to reach at least 30% completion in the Shadow Secret Realm instance, meaning that success would break the level 10 cap and officially allow me to enter the true game world. My heart raced, not from nerves, but from pure, unadulterated excitement, because passing this meant my body would begin synchronizing with the game's power, eventually allowing me to surpass the limitations of the gaming pod and manifest my strength in reality. One final tip, the elder added as I secured the tag, advising, before you enter, ask Arya for details about the trial, as it will serve you well. I nodded, caught off guard because I'd expected to be thrown straight into the fire, but he was giving me a lifeline, making me wonder if this was the privilege of an SSS-rank talent. In a blink, the elder was gone, and I hadn't even seen him move, nor had the candles shifted an inch. Staring into space, Arya asked as she stepped back into the room, tossing her dagger into the air. Nothing, I said, shaking off the awe. Arya caught the blade and sheathed it, remarking, you're quite the favorite, aren't you? Because the elder is usually ruthless, and he's kicked out people for far less than a moment of hesitation. Arya was surprisingly thorough, breaking down the shadow trial into such granular detail that I felt like a student being coached for finals rather than a player entering a dungeon. When she finally finished, I nodded in thanks and asked, one more thing, though, have you ever been to the Abyssal Cave? Arya's eyes widened as she demanded, what's that supposed to mean? Nothing, I said, smiling as I pulled a crimson pigeon blood ruby from my palm, tossed it to her, and added, just returning this. She caught the gem, her expression unreadable as she clutched it tight and asked, how did you get this? Found it in the cave, I shrugged, adding, it's yours. With that, I turned to the trial and stated, I'm heading in. Arya hesitated, then stepped forward, advising, shadow trials are unpredictable, but you're strong enough to survive, though if you want a high completion rating, you should focus on mastering your own skills. I nodded my thanks and crushed the silver pendant, causing shadow energy to swirl and swallow my vision, but when I opened my eyes, I was adrift in a world of thick, oppressive mist where my visibility was cut to 50 meters, a death sentence for any archer or mage. It's giving main character energy, but I'd rather be the guy who survives. I sensed a shift in the air and bolted just as a black arrow shattered the ground where I'd stood, and a pitch-black, asphalt-like figure emerged from the fog, wielding a bow made of solidified shadow. Forgotten Archer's Shadow, LV11, HP, 15,000. The creature unleashed a barrage of shadow energy, causing my muscles to tighten as I realized Arya was right, because without shadow cloaking or high movement speed, this trial would be a slaughter, yet I didn't panic since I thrived on this. I vanished into the mist, thinking to myself that I'm not lazy, but just on energy-saving mode. I reappeared behind the archer, my dagger slicing its neck as inky shadow sprayed out, but it ignored the wound and swung its bow at me, prompting me to dance away while carving marks into its hide with every pass. By the 13th strike, I triggered detonate, causing the archer to explode into a cloud of shadow. Suddenly, a dozen more shadows surrounded me, but I chuckled, activated Shadow Step, and dove deep into the abyss with my movement speed spiking. To these mobs, I was effectively non-existent, so I wove through their ranks without engaging, knowing that with my current level, the XP gain from them would be negligible anyway. The landscape was a desolate expanse of gray, shadow-condensed soil, and I eventually found a jagged, ancient stele carved with shifting glyphs that read, everything has a shadow, it is the dark side of all things. System, shadow intense stele discovered, exploration, 5%. New trial taker, a voice croaked. A faint, ink-like shadow shimmered into view, revealing the lost trial official, Kalo, who looked pained and clutched his head as he stammered, I am the ruler of the Dawn world. No, wait. I am the shadow intent trial official. His voice hardened into cold steel as he demanded, trial taker, why have you summoned me? I suspected a hidden quest, and knowing that to maximize my completion score I had to play along, I replied, I'm here to raise my trial completion, so what should I do? Kalo trudged off mechanically and I followed, remaining just out of reach because I wasn't worried about an ambush while wearing the S-rank Nilly snake leather armor, plus 300 def, knowing that if he tried anything, he'd find out the hard way why it's a bad idea to attack a guy with a tanky build. We reached a barren, sand-swept desert that stretched to the horizon, a place that was bleak, desolate, and utterly unforgiving, the perfect place for a trial. The shifting, broken stelae littering this desert were far more intriguing than the endless sand, as each jagged stone, some mere fragments, seemed to record a fractured, forgotten past. System: you have discovered the Valley of Buried Souls. Exploration: 41%. Nice. Following Kalo had been the right move, and I couldn't help but appreciate Arya's advice, since without her warning about the utility of Shadow Step, the mobs along the way would have turned me into a pincushion hours ago. As Kalo entered the center of the graveyard, the air curdled, and shadows erupted from the headstones, not the hollow ink blots I'd fought before, but entities pulsing with raw, suffocating resentment. Kalo turned to me, his voice hollow as he stated, "Everything you seek is here." Before he even finished, a roar shattered the silence, shaking the very dunes. "Kill him!" I gripped my daggers, my eyes scanning the battlefield as dozens of hulking, distorted figures lunged from the sand with rusted, jagged weapons radiating lethal intent, making them terrifying. But for me, this was just another day at the office. Detonate. I blazed through 3 of the shadows in a heartbeat, their forms erupting into black, ink-like blood that splattered the sand. I danced through their ranks, my movements so erratic and precise that their wild swings only struck their own comrades, showcasing the discipline of a T1 player. Because even though I was a month late to the game, here I was, playing it better than the people who started at launch. I'm not lazy, I'm just on energy-saving mode. I locked onto a warrior composed entirely of shifting, dark mass. Forgotten Knight's Shadow, Lostra, LV-15 Elite, HP, 20,000. He was a nightmare of stats, carrying a heavy shield and a spear that ignored 30% of my armor, making him the strongest thing I'd faced. Yet I didn't blink as I moved toward him and our paths intersected. He struck first with piercing spear, but I ghosted aside with Shadow Step, causing the spear to crater the sand where I'd stood, and although he swung again in a screeching arc of shadow, I didn't retreat but leaned in, closing the distance to negate the reach of his weapon. 1 inch longer, 1 inch more dangerous, 1 inch closer, and you're mine. I carved deep into his plate, spraying ink blood across the desert, and with strike after strike, I chipped away his health, stacking the mark of fate until I hit the cap and commanded, "Detonate." Loster disintegrated into a wisp of black mist, but I didn't stop to gloat, turning instead to the remaining shadows and carving through them like a butcher, my blades moving too fast for the naked eye to follow. Kalo, standing on the sidelines, seemed to be regaining a spark of sentience through sheer shock. System: trial completion increased to 73%. Suddenly, a massive crimson-black pillar of light erupted from the depths of the graveyard, sending shockwaves of sand rippling across the horizon as a gargantuan, clawed hand tore through the dunes, and the nearby stelae began to feed their shadow energy into a single point. The sand collapsed, and from the abyss rose a figure 5 meters tall, who wore a twisted crown and tattered royal robes, wielding a massive dual-handed sword. Shadow of the Lost King, LV-20 Elite, HP, 30,000, ATK, 1,500. His skill, Blood of the King, instantly suppressed all movement skills within a 100-meter radius, signaling a hidden, impossible challenge, which caused my heart to hammer against my ribs, not from fear, but from the intoxicating rush of the hunt. Bro understood the assignment. I couldn't tank this because he'd flattened me in 3 hits, so I pulled up my interface and dumped my accumulated fate points into Shadow Step without a second thought. System: consume 1 fate point to upgrade Shadow Step. Confirm. Back in the dim prayer room, Arya and the elders stared at the flickering altar candles, whose flames began to warp as the shadows beneath them twisted violently. The elder's eyes went wide as he gasped, "Is he trying for 100% completion? Impossible." Arya gasped, her face pale as she asked, "Has anyone in our sect ever managed such a feat, even at this stage?" "All things are possible," the elder murmured, his voice trembling despite his attempt at composure, adding, "especially for the Shadow of Fate." System: congratulations, the skill Shadow Step has evolved into Shadow Cape of Fate. Shadow Cape of Fate, S-rank active skill. Effect: you are favored by fate and shadow, meaning your current location becomes your personal domain of darkness, where even the scorching sun cannot diminish your essence, allowing you to enter a permanent stealth state that cannot be detected by skills below S-rank. Passive: plus 100% movement speed, no cooldown, no mana cost. Note: thanks to the Shadow's blessing, your agility ignores all attribute caps, and additionally, every attack performed in stealth adds 3 stacks of the Mark of Fate. Terrifying was the only word for it, because if I combined this with my other fate-based skills, especially Fate's Greed, every single strike, even a basic attack, would apply 6 stacks of the mark, creating a sheer damage potential leagues beyond any player at my level. Even high-level elites without special talents wouldn't stand a chance against this level of scaling. I looked up at the Shadow of the Lost King as the dark fire of ambition ignited in my eyes, noting that while before I had been calculating how many hits I could survive, now the only question was how long this king would last against me. I smiled and my form dissolved, because if my old shadow step was like wiping a water droplet off a table, this new shadow cape of fate was like a drop of ink vanishing into the deep ocean, making it seamless, total, and untraceable. I was no longer a guy in a stealth suit trying to blend into a neon city, but I was the absolute darkness where no eye could reach. Kalo, watching from afar, froze because the trial taker had simply ceased to exist, and while to a shadow-born entity like him, conventional stealth was a parlor trick, this defied the logic of his rigid, mechanical existence, leaving him unable to process it. Even the King of Shadows paused, his massive greatsword held high as he scanned the dunes for a foe that had vanished into thin air, bellowing, "Come out," with a voice so powerful it sent ripples of sand cascading across the desert like a tidal wave. I stepped through the shadows, ignoring his display of raw power, and slashed my blade across his leg, causing black ichor to spray the sand until, with a loud boom, the detonate triggered and shredded his health bar. Kalo gasped, wondering at that damage at this level, and asking himself who the monster here was. The king roared, his dignity insulted by a thief, and he slammed his greatsword into the sand to trigger Blood of the King, creating a suffocating field of shadow that locked down all movement skills within 100 meters, leaving even Kalo's movements sluggish. "Where are you? Show yourself," the king bellowed, swinging his 5-meter blade wildly and turning the very sand to ash. I stood just outside his reach, watching the chaos, and thinking to myself that I'm not arguing, but I'm explaining why I'm right. When the wind died down, I vanished again, moving like a phantom and dancing around the giant, while carving deeper with every pass, which caused his health to plummet through 1,020, 1,310, and 1,570, while he couldn't lay a single finger on me. Frustration turned to blind, homicidal rage, prompting the King of Shadows to trigger his second skill, Sword of the Fallen, which unleashed a circular shockwave of black energy that pulverized everything in its path, yet he still missed. As he plunged his sword into the earth for a final roar, black flames ignited across his body, burning the desert floor into oblivion, and although he prepared to leap, an arrow of pure shadow pierced his back. He faltered. 3,000. The towering monarch couldn't finish his final sentence as his body shattered into a rain of black blood. "System, you have slain the elite monster, Shadow of the Lost King, and received an S-rank chest, bringing the trial completion to 98%. I exhaled, my heart finally slowing as I realized that was close, because if he'd actually landed a hit, it would have been a one-shot. But victory was mine, and the S-rank chest meant more sweet fate points. But why was I stuck at 98%? Kalo approached, his voice no longer mechanical, but thick with awe as he noted, "So, you are not a servant of the dark, but of something far greater," which explains how a mere trial taker could slay a king. I turned my gaze to him, my eyes sharp as tempered steel, and countered. "The completion is still missing 2%, and it wouldn't happen to be attached to you, would it?" I didn't need to finish the threat, because the edge of my blade spoke for me, leaving Kalo to look at me, completely at peace, as he answered, "Yes, for if you kill me, the trial will finally be complete." "Sorry," I whispered. Before the word even left my lips, I blurred into motion, my dagger piercing Kalo's chest and sending a clear 1,200 damage marker into the air, which caused Kalo's eyes to widen as shock froze his features. "Remember, the shadow intent is deeper than it seems," he gasped, his body fragmenting into light as he added, "Go to Dawn City." Then, he exploded, leaving my gear splattered with black ichor, which made me hesitate as a twinge of guilt pricked at me, wondering if I moved too fast since he clearly had more to say, but my combat instincts had overridden my brain the moment the prompt appeared. I'm great at multitasking, because I can waste time and be unproductive at once. System, Shadow Trial completion, 100%, trial finished. System, congratulations. You are the first player in the world to reach level 11, and a global announcement is pending. Deep in the abyssal cave, Wang Longsing was mid-grind, ruthlessly driving his party through waves of abyssal wolf demons with his eyes burning, with the singular goal of hitting level 10 to hunt me down and make me pay. Global announcement, congratulations to player Qin Feng for reaching level 11 first. Wang Longsing froze, his face twisting into a mask of pure, unadulterated fury as he roared. That bastard, he must have been stealing our mobs. With an anger so intense, it felt like his blood was boiling. Meanwhile, in another part of the wilds, Qin Feng was leading her own squad, and her archer's arrow went wide, burying itself into the dirt at the chime of the announcement. "Level 11, she whispered, staring at the sky in disbelief, noting that her team was barely level 8, which made our hard work suddenly feel like a punchline to a bad joke. She took a deep steadying breath, balling her fists behind her back, and mused that the growth speed is inhuman. Back at the Shadow Sect, a bubble of shadow popped in the dim room, and I stepped out to find the Elder and Arya waiting. "How?" The Elder grabbed my shoulders, his usual composure shattered as he demanded, 100% completion. "Even the God-chosen can't hit that." Arya stood frozen, her mind clearly in another dimension, and although I tried to catch her eye, she was completely checked out, making me think, respectfully, no. The Elder didn't care, his eyes burning with fanaticism as he declared, "With this result, you are no longer a standard heavenly being, but you are granted the status of apostle. Arya snapped back to reality, sputtering, "A apostle? That's my rank," because she was the sect's primary aide, and she wasn't thrilled about some newbie sliding into her social strata. The elder silenced her with a look of chilling indifference, then turned back to me, advising, "Focus on leveling up, as the sect will provide, and in 3 months, you'll understand why this support is vital." I nodded, knowing the timeline well, because in 3 months, the heavenly game would descend into reality, and without the backing of these major factions, players wouldn't stand a chance against the horrors to come. Suddenly, the elder frowned, his attention shifting to the abyss as he muttered, "A disturbance in the abyss. Arya, you handle his training, and the skill scrolls are in the treasury," after which, with a flicker, he vanished, leaving me to process everything. Arya led me to a surprisingly cozy room that featured a desk, an oil lamp, and an actual bed with soft linens. Sleep is my favorite hobby. After she dissolved into shadows, I sat down and pulled out the S-rank treasure chest to employ fate's real hand. System: stole King's pendant. A worn golden keepsake, valuable to collectors but largely useless to me. System: stole shadow fruit. Grants 5% crit and movement speed and stealth for 30 minutes. Meh. I kept going. System: stole King's blood ring, S-rank accessory. I blinked at the stats, which showed +5 to all attributes, and a skill called Blood Revenge that lets you mark up to 3 targets so that for 72 hours, their position is revealed, and they suffer -30% dual resistance when attacked. A ring of crimson, like fresh pigeon blood, sat in my palm, causing my jaw to almost hit the floor as I thought, that's crazy work. Because this wasn't just good, it was broken. This ring wasn't just a tracking tool, but it was a god-tier asset, because with no level restriction, even a complete novice could use it to dismantle high-level bosses, thanks to the 30% dual resistance shred. But for me, the ring was just a bonus, since the real prize was the additional fate point I'd stolen, because with it, I could ascend another skill to S-rank or higher scaling that would grow alongside my power. I took a steadying breath, acknowledging that my growth had been blistering, far outpacing my past life, so I let myself savor the win for a moment, thinking that life is short, so smile while you still have teeth. Now, it was time for the trial rewards, so I opened the panel and tapped claim. System: you have acquired A-rank skill, Shadow Judgment. Effect: declare judgment upon your enemies with shadow power, dealing 200% shadow damage, cooldown, 2 minutes, mana cost, 400. I blinked, reasoning that 200% scaling, base stats, weapon damage, and hidden class modifiers combined with my critical hits and fate stacks meant this wasn't just an A-rank skill, but it was essentially S-rank, and the best part was that there were no range restrictions. Knock, knock, knock. My respite was short-lived, and I opened the door to find Arya looking uncharacteristically flustered as she held a crimson gemstone, dark as pigeon blood, and murmured, "I'm sorry to intrude, but I'm bewildered by this," while gesturing to the stone and asking, "You found this in the abyssal cave?" I nodded and replied, "Off a wolf demon." Arya went pale, declaring, "Impossible, because I gave this stone to my brother before he left for the City of Dawn, and since he vanished, I've never seen it, yet it bears my unique mark, so there's no second one." I hesitated, knowing the truth wasn't pretty, and asked, "Could your brother have been that wolf demon?" while pulling out the Cave Lord's proof and the City of Dawn's property deed. Arya shook her head firmly, countering, "No, because my brother was a level 60 monk, meaning he was worlds apart from a low-level monster, even in death." I had to agree, since the gap between level 5 and level 60 was practically celestial, so I shifted the conversation by asking, "What exactly is the City of Dawn?" "It's the beginning of everything," Arya said, her eyes heavy with concern as she added, "The secrets there are too deep even for me, let alone you, so don't go, not yet." She paused, then added, "But if you can reach level 30 within 3 months, you'll have a shot and a massive advantage in the coming cataclysm." Is the city linked to the game descending into reality? My mind raced as Arya left me to my thoughts, promising to start my formal sect training tomorrow. Later, in the East District of Tianyao City, I slammed a basketball-sized heart onto a merchant's counter, causing the shopkeeper's eyes to light up as he gasped, "A demon lord's heart. I haven't seen one in 3 years." I stared him down and commanded, "Pay up." "Nice gold pieces." He tried to haggle, but thinking to myself that I'm not arguing, I'm explaining why I'm right, I slapped the bounty notice against his forehead and ordered, "Pay the 10, or I find another way to collect." The merchant chuckled, handing over the coins, which marked the task completed, yielding experience plus 10% and level up, 19. I exhaled, reflecting that reaching level 19 inches a month was a brutal grind fueled by sect tasks and every contract I could scavenge in Tianyao City, so I opened my interface to plan my build. Player, Qin Feng, Fate Thief, level, 19, Strength, 94, Vitality, 41, Spirit, 16, Agility, 122, Luck, 12, HP, 10,000, Mana, 5,000. Core Skills, Fate's Anthem, SSS, Shadow Cape of Fate, SSS, Fate's Left Hand, SSS, Flash, S, Advanced Appraisal, B. Equipment, Snake Demon Skin Armor, Shadow of the Lost King's Ring, Serpent Ring. Inventory, Map of City of Dawn, King's Pendant, Hell Worm. Talents, 1 Fate Point, 100% crit rate, 2x attribute, skill point gain, death defiance, snake, assassin star, 15% skill dim boost. My stats were incredibly lopsided, making me basically a glass cannon, but given that every enemy I faced was stronger than me, balance wasn't the goal, since survival was. Investing in stats other than agility and strength was a waste, because even if I dumped every point into vitality, a boss would still one-shot me, meaning it was better to double down on what worked. I also only had one additional skill slot, a bottleneck for everyone until reaching higher levels, and I'd use that precious space on advanced appraisal, which was vital for identifying gear details that the basic system descriptions glossed over. Just as I prepared to head out, a deafening sound shattered the air. Global announcement. 30% of players have reached level 10, meaning the system is formally activated, and the auction house and leaderboards are now live. Global announcement. The first large-scale instance, World Descent, will occur in 60 days. The notifications kept rolling in like artillery fire, so I calmly opened the leaderboard to inspect the rankings. Qin Feng, level 19, Wang Longxing, level 11, Kong Fang, level 10. I raised an eyebrow, noting that the gap between me and the rest of the pack was 8 full levels, which meant I was effectively in a league of my own when suddenly, a private message pinged from my only contact, Kong Feng. Boss, do you know anything about the World Descent? Kong Feng asked, adding that the name sounds haunting, before inquiring. Also, level 19? You aren't a dev, are you? Because my team is losing their minds trying to figure out how you're leveling so fast. Nearby, Kong Fang stood in the wilderness, fielding a barrage of panicked questions from her team while looking exhausted, and when a member tapped her shoulder, she waved them off and ordered, "Quiet, I'm waiting for something." I looked at the message with a smirk tugging at my lips, recognizing that she really did have the sharp instincts that made her a top-tier player in my past life, so I typed 4 words, "It is as you fear." Across the field, Kong Fang read the text, and every hair on her body stood up as a cold, suffocating dread washed over her, turning her face ghost white and making her struggle to breathe. "Captain, what's wrong?" Her team crowded around as panic began rising among them. Kong Fang steadied herself and looked at her trusted comrades, people she knew personally in the real world, reasoning that she owed them the truth as she stated, "The sky is changing." "What do you mean?" the archer asked, bewildered. "I mean the real world," Kong Fang whispered, explaining. "We all know no existing technology could create a game like this, and since every time a game pod activates, security cameras go dark, this isn't just a game, it's a portal. Meaning the world is going to be rewritten in 60 days when the game descends into reality." Her words hit them like a physical blow, and the skepticism in their eyes flickered and died, replaced by a raw, primal fear, because they knew Kong Fang was not a liar, and she didn't speculate without cause. "Then what do we do?" the archer whimpered. "We grind," Kong Fang said, her voice turning steel hard as she added, "Every level we gain is a better chance at survival in 2 months, so let's move, as we're leaving the beginner village." Elsewhere, Wang Longxing sat on a park bench, his eyes narrowed as he processed the same announcement, muttering, "So, it's true, 60 days, before a wild, ambitious grin split his face, and he thought, "I can't waste a second, as I need to climb to the top before the world turns upside down." Back in Tianyao City, I'd bled the local area dry, finishing every worthwhile quest, including the Shadow Sect's missions, until the city was completely tapped out. I looked toward the horizon, a hunger for battle stirring in my gut as I decided it was time to hit the Falling Moon River. It was the city's primary water source, but it was heavily guarded by 10 massive iron gates and squads of spearmen for a reason. Since the river was infested with high-level monsters, making it a death trap for anyone else, but for me, it was the perfect place to level up. Perched on a towering branch, I scanned the landscape below with cold, analytical eyes, noticing near the river a pack of silver-armored mermen level 22 mobs with scales as tough as ancient plate armor who patrolled with iron harpoons, were aggressive and coordinated, and possessed an annoying call for help mechanic that could summon reinforcements from within 500 meters. Further out, a pride of Moonshadow giant wolves were tearing through a 10-meter-tall mammoth, illustrating the wild expanse beyond Tianyao City as a savage, monster-infested wilderness that forced humanity to huddle and isolated. Starlit cities connected by dangerous, long-forgotten paths. I dropped from the canopy, my dagger moving like a phantom and slicing through the mermen's impenetrable scales as if they were wet paper. They threw their harpoons, but they couldn't even graze me, allowing me to move through the carnage with the detached focus of a farmer harvesting wheat, methodically clearing the area and looting the chests that appeared in the wake of the fallen. Next, the wolves. Suddenly, the air pressure spiked, and the Falling Moon River surged as a massive 4-meter-tall figure erupted from the depths, revealing a silver-armored merman king who was a level 25 boss, dripping with moonlit radiance, his scales layered like jagged, impenetrable rock. Boss, silver-armored merman king. Skills, indestructible, def plus 20%, harpoon throw, 150% DMG, call for help, summon allies within 10 kilometers, master of the river. Oh, jackpot, I thought, realizing I'd triggered the monster red mist mechanic, which was a hidden system feature where killing too many of a species eventually forces their boss to emerge for vengeance. "Human, you dare slaughter my kin," the king roared, hurling a 6-meter harpoon that slammed into the earth and detonated with the force of a falling tree, turning 10 meters of ground to rubble in an instant. I blinked, shifting through the shadows, while the king's eyes went wide because my sudden vanishing act clearly hadn't been on his bingo card. Over here. I reappeared behind him, driving my dagger deep into his back, and though blood sprayed, my blade snagged on his reinforced scales as he triggered indestructible. But when a massive pillar of water slammed toward me, I was already gone. Task failed successfully, big guy. As he roared in frustration, the internal damage from my previous strikes detonated, and I treated him like a playground, darting from the shadows to leave a trail of bleeding wounds before slipping back into the dark, since he couldn't hit what he couldn't see. When his health finally hit 0, I triggered a final fate-marked detonation, causing the king to collapse into the mud, lifeless, with a heavy thud. A golden chest emerged from his remains, and I snapped my fingers, shrinking it into my palm. Fate's left hand, stealing. Item acquired, Falling Moon Carp King, def plus 10%. Item acquired, Merman Horn, be great offhand. I stowed the loot, noting that the Merman Horn was a solid pull, since it allowed me to summon a silver-armored merman to fight for me. I guess you could say we're feeling a connection, I mused, tucking the horn into my inventory as I acknowledged that the grind had only just begun. I frowned as another piece of trash loot dropped, wondering if my luck was finally hitting a dry spell, or if this was just the game being itself, until a notification pinged. System. You have successfully stolen item. Guild contract. My eyes locked onto the scroll appearing in my palm, which was indeed a guild contract. In the Chronicles of the Heavens, establishing a legitimate guild required leaving the starter village and triggering a formal quest with one of these, because without it, you were just a glorified group chat. Even the famous Longsing Guild was essentially a LARP, possessing no system recognition, no perks, and just a bunch of people running in the same direction. These things were the rarest drops in the early game, leading me to believe my luck must have finally peaked after all that garbage loot. I was a solo player, meaning that holding a guild charter was like being a fork in a world of soup, which made it useless. But then I glanced at the auction house interface, reasoning that while I didn't need a guild, plenty of wealthy players were desperate to become the first. Outside the city, Wang Longsing was having a rough day, commanding 100 players in a grueling siege against a pack of fire-spitting wolves whose flames were a nightmare of continuous, nasty damage over time effects that drained HP faster than a healer could spam water cure. Don't retreat, Wang Longsing screamed, dodging behind his front line because he wasn't about to die and lose his ranking. He charged forward, unleashing a silver blade of energy and barking, "Freeze." His commanding presence skill forced the wolves into a temporary paralysis, prompting him to yell, "Focus fire," after which his team dumped every cooldown they had, shredding the wolves until only a dozen remained. Once the slaughter ended, Wang Longsing impatiently tore through the loot chests, but since he wasn't looking for gear, he was hunting for that one vital item. Nothing. How is it just a C-grade sword? He snarled, clutching the pathetic loot. Boss, we'll get it next time, a lieutenant offered weakly. I'm not mad about the sword, Wang Longsing snapped, right before a global system notification flashed across his vision. Qin Feng is auctioning a guild contract. Check the auction house. Wang Longsing's face turned darker than a charcoal pit as he demanded, "Qin Feng, how does he have it?" Miles away, a hulking man named Lei Yu, the leader of the Thunder Guild, was busy carving through a giant bear, as he was a Class S berserker who treated the game like a sandbox for his own bloodlust. When a subordinate rushed over with news of the auction, Lei Yu didn't even flinch, but simply yanked his massive blade from the bear's corpse. A guild contract? Lei Yu grinned, adding, "If we don't grab it, some other clown will be running the show, so let's go." Across the major hubs, the heavy hitters were converging on the virtual auction house, which was a digital grand hall styled in everything from Gothic marble to traditional wooden architecture, designed to let players trade across server zones. I'd set the stage, and as the players materialized in their seats, the tension was palpable. Wang Longsing arrived with his scowl firmly in place, because although he hated my guts, he was a businessman first, and wasn't the only one there. Since Liu Shechuan, the leader of the Legion Guild and a notorious Class S champion, had also arrived. "Lei, you're here too?" Liu greeted him with a sharp smile, asking, "Care for a duel outside the walls later, as I want to see whose blade is faster?" "Maybe later," Lei Yu laughed. Then, a mage in ornate robes drifted into the conversation, revealing Yang Tingyu, the leader of the Scholars Guild, who was a Class S5 element warlock with pockets deep enough to drown in, the personality of a fly in a bowl of soup, and a reputation for ruthlessly outbidding anyone just to be a nuisance. "So," Yang Tingyu said, his voice dripping with condescension, "does anyone actually know who this Qin Feng is?" The three guild leaders looked at each other, but none of them had a clue. "Never heard of him," Lei Yu muttered. "Maybe he's from an overseas server?" Liu suggested. Wang Longsing remained silent, his grip tightening on his sword as he thought about Qin Feng, a name that was about to become the most expensive piece of intel in the game. "Is he trying to be mysterious?" Yang Tingyu muttered, tapping his fingers rhythmically against his armrest. Wang Longsing scoffed. "He's just playing mind games, since we've been here for ages, and he's still not showing up." As the words left his lips, a figure materialized on the auction platform, where I stood with eyes like black abysses, staring straight at Wang Longxing with utter indifference. "You're out," I said, my voice cold and dismissive, as if I were shooing away a stray dog rather than a top-tier guild leader. Wang Longxing's face turned purple, his mouth opening to retort, but I simply waved my hand and stated, "Woof." He vanished instantly, silenced mid-sentence, while the remaining players exchanged uneasy glances, not daring to breathe. I cleared my throat, dismissing the distraction, and announced, "Moving on, the guild contract, highest bidder wins." Lu Szechuan immediately set the tone, bidding 100 gold coins. Lei Yu barked a laugh, countering, "That's pocket change, Lu, so I'll start us at 500. The room erupted in gasps, because 500 gold was a fortune enough to buy several lives in this world, yet Lei Yu tossed it out like he was discarding trash. Lu Szechuan didn't blink, bidding 800. The silence that followed was heavy, because for most, this was their entire guild treasury, and bidding any higher would mean having zero funds left for supplies or gear, making the actual guild establishment quest impossible. Just as the momentum died, Yang Tingyu stepped in, bidding 900. 1,000. Lu Szechuan countered, his face flushing because this was his hard limit, and anything more would cripple his guild's growth. 1,100. Yang Tingyu said, bored. Liu slumped back into his chair, defeated, while Yang Tingyu looked relieved since that had been his absolute ceiling too. But before the gavel could drop, a thunderous voice boomed. 1,200. Lei Yu stood up, waving his hand. "Lei, you lunatic." Yang Tingyu nearly jumped out of his skin, shouting, "You'll bankrupt your entire organization." "My business, not yours," Lei Yu replied, cracking his neck before asking, "Any more bids?" No one dared, for it was already a price no reasonable guild could pay. I walked over and tossed the contract to Lei Yu, stating, "It's yours." "Qin Feng," Lu Szechuan called out as I turned to leave, offering, "If you're interested, join my guild, and you can have the presidency, as I'll settle for command duties." The room went deathly silent, since surrendering the throne was unprecedented. Even Yang Tingyu looked shell-shocked, offering, "I can't match that, but I'll happily serve under your direct command." I didn't break stride, replying, "I appreciate the offers, but I prefer flying solo." Lu Szechuan nodded, visibly disappointed but respectful, as he stated, "Understood, but if you find another contract, promise to contact me first." "Same here," Yang Tingyu added. As the auction cleared, the notifications pinged, "Transfer received, 1,200 gold coins." A smile finally touched my lips, because that amount of capital was exactly what I needed to power level my gear. Just then, a private message popped up from Qin Feng. "Boss, interested in a dungeon raid?" I paused and replied, "I'm in Tianyao City." "Perfect, me too. And have you ever heard of a void rift?" I stiffened, knowing that void rifts were chaotic, high-risk, high-reward anomalies that appeared randomly in the game world, acting essentially as unstable, temporary mini-dungeons that could be a gold mine or a death trap. Finding one alone was nearly impossible, but Qin Feng had stumbled onto one. "Where?" I typed. "Southgate, so meet us there." I found them waiting in a weed-choked alley near the Falling Moon River, where Qin Feng looked like a professional wrestler, accompanied by a nimble female archer, Shen Tinglan, and a hooded figure named Lu Jing. "Qin Feng, great to finally meet you," Qin Feng said, offering a handshake. I skipped the formalities and looked at the shivering, prismatic rift behind them, which looked like a tear in the fabric of reality, shimmering with mesmerizing, dangerous light. System, Void Rift. Difficulty, Unknown. Max players, 4. Warning, extreme instability, only one entry allowed. It hit me why they needed me, because a level 2-5 restricted rift was a death sentence for a group of teenagers still in their mid-teens, and if we wiped, the penalty would be more than just lost experience. I was walking into a gamble, and I was going to make sure the house didn't win. "Void rifts aren't just dangerous," I remarked, my tone flat, adding, "They drain your lifespan if things go south, not that most players realize it." Qin Feng gestured toward the shimmering distortion in the alleyway, asking, "You in, Qin Feng, or should we head back?" I glanced at his two companions and replied, "I'm fine with it, but are they?" Qin Feng shot me a reassuring look and stated, "They're the best I've got." I nodded, knowing that with a level 25 dungeon, even solo, I could breeze through it, so I stated, "Let's go." As I stepped toward the rift, Lu Jing blocked my path, asking, "What about the loot split, especially if we all contribute?" I stopped and looked at him, my eyes like black abysses, and asked, "What do you suggest?" Before Lu Jing could answer, Qin Feng barked, "Are you kidding me? Read the room." Lu Jing clamped his mouth shut, and Qin Feng turned to me with a sheepish grin, saying, "Sorry boss, as the kid doesn't know his place, so whatever drops, it's yours, and we're just happy to tag along." "We'll see," I replied, adding, "Let's clear the dungeon first." We stepped into the rift. Welcome to the historical fragment, the vampire's banquet. Condition, at least 2 players must survive until the banquet ends. The world shifted, and the city vanished, replaced by rolling mountains and dense forests under a blood-red moon that pulsed like a giant, veined eye, making it chilling just to look at. "This is a restriction-type fragment," Shen Tinglan whispered, her face pale as she explained. "I read about these in the library, and they're the hardest to survive, as some say you can even run into minor deities." Lu Jing looked at me, his lip curling in a smirk as his eyes seemed to say, "Let's see if the big shot can back up his ego now." Feng asked, "Any ideas, Qin Feng?" I pointed into the distance, because my senses, sharper than anyone else's, picked up a faint silhouette against the horizon. So I commanded, "There, the banquet hall. So move, as we don't want to be late." They squinted into the dark, seeing nothing, but they followed my lead anyway. A few hundred meters in, a nightmare emerged from the trees, revealing a silver-furred wolf that was 4 meters tall, its eyes glowing with predatory malice. Blood Moon-favored wolf, elite, level 25, HP, 60,000, skills, Blood Moon Fury, Howl, Silver Terror. Elite tier. Lu Jing's voice shook as he whimpered, "We're dead, and we shouldn't have come." The wolf locked eyes with us, and its gaze alone was enough to make the other's muscles seize in primal fear. "Run," Feng shouted, adding, "Split up, and survive if you can." He turned to flee, but stopped dead as Shen Tinglan stared forward, paralyzed, prompting her to ask, "Wait, where's Qin Feng?" I was already gone, because I didn't run, but I hunted, closing the distance in a blur of movement while they panicked. A deafening roar echoed through the forest, followed by a wet, heavy thud. When the dust settled, the massive wolf lay dead, and I stood atop its cooling carcass, my shadow cast long and thin under the blood moon. System: You have successfully slain Blood Moon-favored wolf. XP, 25%. Received, B-grade treasure chest. I didn't celebrate, but simply held out my hand as the notifications read, "Theft successful, Blood Banquet invitation." Then again, "Theft successful, Blood Wolf Heart." Finally, "Theft successful, Blood Fang Gauntlets, 15, attack 200 to 300. I tucked the gauntlets away, noting they were perfect for a martial artist, though a bit wasted on me. I turned to the 3 stunned teammates, who were standing frozen in the dirt, and asked, "What are you waiting for?" Because the party's starting. While looking back toward the distant hall, they scrambled to catch up, their private chat blowing up with disbelief. Feng, "Did you see that? He killed an elite in seconds." Shen Tinglan, "I couldn't even track his speed. How is that possible?" Lu Jing, "He has to be cheating. That level gap is insane." I ignored their chatter, knowing they'd get used to it, because after all, compared to what was waiting for us at the banquet, that wolf was just an appetizer. The manor loomed under the blood-red moon, acting as a masterpiece of white marble and Gothic spires. From our angle, the sharpest tower seemed to pierce the lunar orb itself, as if the castle were a needle ready to pop a balloon. At the entrance stood an ornate iron gate, its intricate patterns stained a disturbing, vivid crimson, leaving Feng and the others hesitated, paralyzed by the atmosphere, which was horror movie-level ominous. Who in their right mind would knock? I stepped forward and rang the bell. Ding ding ding. The sound sent a tremor through my teammates, and a moment later, a pale, stern-faced old man in pristine robes emerged, his eyes razor-sharp as they swept over us with unsettling precision. "I am the Count's butler," he announced, asking, "If you are here for the banquet, do you have your invitation?" An icy shiver raced down my spine, acting as a primal warning like a predator's teeth hovering inches from my neck, because this butler was leagues beyond us. I pulled the invitation from my coat, and the oppressive pressure vanished instantly. The butler bowed, his smile thin, as he stated, "The Count has awaited you, so enter." The interior was draped in plush red velvet, with servants scurrying about to prepare for the gala, showing that we weren't the only guests. A long table occupied the hall, already populated by an eclectic group featuring a hulking, elderly warrior in plate armor whose arms were thicker than logs, a pair of ethereal twins in black and white gowns, a captivating witch in black lace who looked 40 but moved with ageless grace, and a silent, pale youth who sat like a statue. The butler gestured toward the empty chairs, and I took my seat without hesitation, while my companions followed, looking like deer in headlights. "Count," the butler announced into the shadows, stating, "The guests have arrived." A man swept into the room, draped in opulent robes and sporting a tall red top hat, his eyes thin slits of calculated amusement that radiated a hunger which felt like a blade against my skin. He scanned us, then gave a slight nod and stated, "Let us begin." As he spoke, the butler and the servants vanished into air, leaving us alone with the Count and his mysterious guests. Feng nudged me under the table, a private message flashing on my UI. "Qin Feng, I think we hit the main story trigger, because this banquet is definitely a trap and the Count is 100% a vampire, giving classic Dracula vibes, so we need 2 survivors to finish this." I leaned back, barely suppressing a smirk, and replied, "Exactly, so stay sharp, since this isn't just a party, it's a blood-soaked gamble." The plate-armored warrior stood and stated, "Count, I came on one condition. Forgive the blood tax of Nightglow Town for a century." The twins followed, stating, "We seek the elixir of immortality." The witch rested her chin on her hand, smiling seductively as she added, "And I simply wish to leave my family's shadow." The Count ignored the silent youth and turned his gaze to us, musing, My, travelers from afar, and what are your requests?" The table went silent, as information boxes flooded our vision, showing that these guests were all level 40 and above monsters compared to us, which made Feng and the others go pale as they realized we were drowning in deep water. I didn't blink, but simply leaned forward, keeping my voice cool, and even as I stated, "On my way here, I killed a wolf, a blood moon-favored wolf, I believe. So Count, I'm curious, do you know what that creature actually is? The room went cold, and I felt Lu Jing stiffen beside me, his face draining of color. The Count's face darkened for a split second before his smile widened, sharper than before, as he explained, those beasts are merely evolved slaves, corrupted by the blood moon's influence, and they lack the capacity for true reverence. He chuckled, his teeth white and predatory, and added, but since you've slain one, you are honored guests, so your term will be last. Last? Qin Feng muttered, his brow furrowed as he asked, what's that supposed to mean? I didn't answer, instead watching as the Count bared his fangs and announced, the banquet begins. Instantly, the ceiling and floor bled a torrent of crimson light, and a scent, cloying and sickeningly sweet, flooded the hall. My eyes burned, and my ears lost all sense of sound, prompting me to draw my dagger, relying on my instincts, a habit of a veteran, and wait in the darkness. When my senses returned, the hall was gone, and I was sitting in a plush, high-backed chair overlooking a sprawling coliseum. Was this an illusion or reality? Below, Bartel, the hulking warrior, stood with his massive greatsword leveled against a hulking werewolf that stood on its hind legs. Curious about our little game? A soft, honeyed voice whispered. The white-gowned twin sister leaned toward me, her expression unreadable, as she asked, we fight for our deepest desires. So what is it that you seek? I don't know, I murmured, adding, maybe a 6-month nap? She blinked, momentarily stunned by my sarcasm, before scoffing. Only those whose wishes remain unfulfilled walk the path of the blood banquet, so win, and the Count grants your request, but fail. Well, death is a busy profession. The werewolf below was bathed in blood-red fur, its level hidden from our sight. Bartel lunged like a cannonball, his greatsword carving through the air with enough force to shatter stone, and though he cleaved the werewolf in two, a second later, the creature lunged from the shadows to retaliate. The battle was a dance of gore, because every time Bartel decapitated or bifurcated the beast, it simply dissolved into blood and reappeared elsewhere. How is he alive? Lu Jing stammered, his face white as he cried, that's cheating. I narrowed my eyes and explained, it's not cheating, but it's a trick, because the monster is already gone before the blade hits, meaning he's just cutting after images, so Bartel is good, but he's fighting a ghost. The others ignored me, convinced Bartel held the advantage, and even the witch chimed in, saying, he's winning, surely. But I knew better, because Bartel was holding the line through raw experience, yet he was being toyed with. Suddenly, Bartel roared, unleashing a storm of steel that blasted the werewolf against the Colosseum wall, cracking the marble. Is that it? Lu Jing cheered, shouting, he's finished it. The werewolf pulled itself from the wall, laughing, and stepped toward Bartel, its hand opening to reveal a pulpy, gore-stained mass that was Bartel's own heart. The veteran warrior looked down, his armor missing and his chest a ruin of torn flesh, and although he tried to speak, only a gurgle of blood escaped his lips before he collapsed. The silence in our gallery was deafening. The others were stunned, since they'd expected a victory, not a slaughter. They stared at me, wondering how I'd known the outcome from the start, but I didn't return their gaze. The fight had been rigged from the moment Bartel stepped into the arena, as he was countered in every way, delaying the inevitable only through sheer grit. The Count's voice boomed from the heavens, announcing, victory 1 point, so next contestant, please. The Chris sisters stood up from the viewing platform, their faces perfectly serene despite the gore. Beside me, Shen Tinglin shielded her eyes, terrified they'd meet Bartel's gruesome end. The blood wolf dragged Bartel's corpse away, and 2 massive blood bats descended into the arena. With a wingspan of 7 meters, they dwarfed the sisters. One bat glanced toward the Count's floating couch and asked, Lord Count, once I kill them, may I taste their blood, as it's been ages since I've had such exquisite vintage. The Count offered a thin, enigmatic smile and answered, the victor decides the spoils, so do as you wish. My thanks, my lord, the bat sneered, its grin so monstrous it made me want to scrub my eyes with bleach. Let's begin, Chris said, unbothered. The bats vanished, reappearing in the air instantly, and opened their maws to unleash a sonic blast so powerful it buckled the very air into layered ripples. It was a kill zone, meaning anything caught in that wave would be pulverized, but the sisters didn't flinch. As the sonic wall hit them, they didn't shatter into meat, but they burst into a swirling cloud of iridescent butterflies. The bats shrieked, snapping at the swarm, but the butterflies ignored the onslaught. They swarmed the beasts, and the moment they made contact, a series of deafening explosions rocked the arena, causing fire to bloom like a bouquet of destruction. When the smoke cleared, the charred husks of the 2 bats plummeted to the sand. The butterflies fluttered back to the seats and condensed, reforming into the sisters. A masterstroke, I noted aloud. That level of illusion combined with high explosive lethality was god tier, showing it was clearly a hidden class, though I couldn't pin down which one since the multiverse is just too big for even the most informed player to know everything. Victory, 1 point, the Count announced, adding, next. The witch stood, her movements fluid as she tapped her staff to the ground and descended into the arena like a floating umbrella. Her opponent, a gaunt man in blood-red robes, slipped in from the shadows. He was so thin, he looked like a coat rack draped in fabric, his silhouette beneath the cloth unsettlingly skeletal. The witch didn't hesitate, slamming her staff down until the earth groaned, erupting into a towering stone giant, and a heartbeat later, she summoned a quartet of 4-meter-tall fire giants. "Kill," she commanded. Fireballs, the size of boulders, rained down like mortar fire, turning the arena into a cratered hellscape, but just as the bombardment peaked, the robed man vanished. "Where is he?" the witch hissed, her eyes darting through the dust. A crescent of moonlight flashed as the man emerged from the shadows, his dual blades a blur of silver, and in a single second, he unleashed hundreds of strikes. The witch didn't even have time to scream, as she was reduced to a fine mist of blood and bone. The man crawled from the shadows, his lower body gone, dragging himself forward with his blades as he rasped, "I won, Lord Count." The Count waved a hand, a beam of bloodlight healing the man's mangled form as he observed. "Impressive, and you're lucky you're fast, or you'd be a corpse." "Next," the Count said, his gaze settling on the silent, pale young man in the white robe. The youth jumped into the arena without a word, prompting me to lean forward, intrigued, because my gut told me he was the biggest anomaly here, and now I'd finally see what he was hiding. Ding. System. 30 days have passed and you have gained a new SSS-rank talent, Fate Stealer. I quickly scanned the interface. Effect 1. Thief class XP gain X10. Effect 2. Enhanced skills with Fate points. Effect 3. Monthly resurrection at full health. Wait, there's more. Fate dice. SSS-rank talent. Effect 1. Plus 20 luck. Effect 2. Roll for 1 to 13 Fate points per battle to buff S-rank skills. Effect 3. Immune to all fatal damage. My jaw dropped at the immunity to fatal damage, because that meant even a level 100 boss couldn't one-shot me, proving this was broken. System. Congratulations, your skill Shadow Judgment has evolved into Fate Judgment, S-rank. Effect. Deal 200% attribute damage, triggering 3 times with a random attribute, with a cooldown of 1 minute. A massive warrior in heavy plate armor jumped into the arena, leveling a greatsword at the youth and bellowing, "Die." The youth didn't even shift his stance. He moved with a speed that defied physics, his fingers simply piercing the warrior's heavy plate as if it were parchment, after which he dug his hand into the man's chest, ripped out the beating heart, and let the corpse crumble. The youth tossed the heart aside, looked up, and stated, "Lord Count, I won." The Count beamed, his eyes glowing with predatory delight as he commanded, "Speak your request." "I admire your power, Count, so I wish to be part of the Blood Moon clan, as I want to be your heir." The Count paused, then smiled, descending into the arena while looking at the youth with newfound interest. "Come here," the Count whispered, adding, "I shall turn you into my own kin." The young man's smile was brighter than the sun as he knelt before him, but as the Count reached out, the man's right hand flared with blinding silver light. With the ease of a hot knife through butter, he plunged his hand into the Count's chest and tore out a heart that glimmered like a perfect ruby. The Count's reaction was terrifyingly fast, because before the man could retreat, the vampire unleashed a blow that sent him flying like a cannonball, blasting a 10-meter crater into the reinforced marble-like walls of the arena. A deafening roar shattered the air as a 5-meter-tall wolf, its coat glowing with the ethereal sheen of moonlight, leaped into the Colosseum. The young man in the crater was already gone. I wondered who it was, the Count rasped, floating upright. A chain of explosions erupted across the wolf's hide, shredding its fur and sending it sprawling. It clawed into the stone, dragging itself to a halt, and locked eyes with me, growling, you little cockroach." It charged, steady and murderous, but I didn't run. Instead, I fired a single bolt of energy from my hand, followed by a sudden, resounding boom. The explosion flipped the beast, but it was up in an instant, its silver eyes tracking me through the shadows. It spat a blade of light that cleaved the arena floor in two, vaporizing the very ground I stood on. I stood on the jagged edge of the crater, my cloak whipping in the wind, as the wolf braced its legs, ready to unleash its final, lethal pounce. It was a move that would kill anyone else, but for a fighter forged in blood and iron, it was just the opening I needed. The once ruined arena began to knit itself back together, looking less like mere construction and more like living flesh regrowing. The combat resumed, with Qin Feng stepping up to face a swamp monster, a glob of sentient sludge that lacked vital organs, forcing us to brute force its HP down, and it had the annoying habit of self-healing. It wasn't a powerhouse, just a migraine-inducing nuisance. Qin Feng flicked a coin into its mass, triggering a massive boom as a crater appeared in the monster's midsection. I sat on the viewing platform, nodding in approval since Qin Feng's damage output wasn't on my level, but his unique talent had its moments. Soon, he secured an easy victory. The Count, keeping his word, had clearly dialed down the difficulty. Next was Shen Tinglin, who gripped his longbow, dancing through the arena to evade a blood wolfman. Despite being the same breed as Bartle's killer, this one was a tier below in skill and level. Shen Tinglin darted around like he had a map. Honestly, I keep getting lost in his speed. He loosed an arrow that pierced the wolfman's skull, pinning it to the floor. 1,000. "I won, Captain. I won, Qin Feng." He cheered, and I gave him a curt nod. Suddenly, the system hummed. "Historical fragment. Vampire's banquet is clearing. Please prepare to exit." As the world blurred around us, the Count looked at me with a lingering, predatory smile, whispering, "I have a feeling we'll meet again." Before the portal finished pulling me out, I caught a final, horrific flash of the Count screaming as he collapsed, dissolving into a pool of blood. Above him, the blood moon morphed into a massive, jagged eye and it was staring straight at me. Congratulations, you have cleared Vampire's Banquet. Rewards: A-rank chest for Qin Feng, B-rank chest for Kong Feng and Shen Tinglan. Bonus: 500 reputation points for being the first party to eradicate a void lineage threat. Please report to the Tianyao City Lord's Manor for further rewards. I didn't care about the loot, especially since that eye in the sky was giving main character energy, and not in a good way. Should we hit the Lord's Manor? Kong Feng asked, breaking my focus. Sure, let's see what they've got, I agreed, noting it was a standard procedure in these games, though every city's bureaucracy had its own flavor. The Lord's Manor was a massive complex of white marble, and at the 10-meter high gate, 2 armored guards blocked our path with iron-tipped spears. Business, one grunted, his voice muffled by his helm. We're here to claim our reputation rewards, Kong Feng said, trying to sound authoritative. No orders received, the guard replied, colder than a landlord during rent week, before ordering. Come back when we hear something. Sounds like a future me problem, I muttered, turning to leave. But then a familiar voice chirped, Qin Feng, what are you doing here? Arya waved as she approached, and when I explained our roadblock, she blinked in confusion, saying, that's it, don't worry, come with me. She waved the guards away and added, next time, just tell them you're an apostle of the Shadow Sect, and they won't bother you. The guards immediately straightened, offering a crisp, terrified salute as they barked, apologies, apostle, we didn't know. Inside, a hunched old man behind a red mahogany desk handed us 3 golden crystals, explaining, identity tokens. Your 500 reputation automatically grants you residency. You can buy property, gear, or special items now, he added. I pressed the crystal to my forehead, causing a panel to flicker into existence. Tianyao Longsword, C-rank, 400 rep, plus 20 strength. The Guan attribute damage. Tianyao Vitality Potion, 50 rep. Heals 2% HP sec for 1 minute. Guild site purchase voucher 1000 rep. I scanned the list and closed it, realizing the gear was decent, but it couldn't touch what I already had. The guild items were useless to me, and the truly good stuff was way out of my price range. Finished? Arya asked, leaning back in her chair. I rested my chin on my hands, feigning boredom as I finished my report and said, I'm done. Arya's eyes turned into delighted crescents, and she bounced from her chair, declaring, let's head back to headquarters then. I nodded, gave Kong Feng and Shen Tinglan a quick farewell, and walked out of the Lord's Manor alongside Arya. What do you want to eat today? She asked. Anything works. I'm not picky. She pouted, genuinely concerned, and insisted, you can't be casual about food. A bad meal ruins the mood, and a bad mood ruins your combat performance. I don't let food influence my mood, I replied, keeping my pace steady. Back at the manor, Shen Tinglan couldn't hold it in any longer and asked, Captain, what's an apostle, and why were those guards suddenly so apologetic? Kong Feng, who had successfully passed the Golden Light sex trial with his S-rank talent, looked stumped as he confessed, I'm only a first-tier initiate, I don't have that kind of clearance. You heavenly beings wouldn't know, a cackling voice interrupted, as the hunched old man behind the desk hobbled over, his spine popping with every movement. An apostle is an emissary of the gods, a title held by even fewer people than a sect master, he explained. Shen Tinglan's eyes went wide as he noted, but the shadow sect master called Qin Feng an apostle. The old man froze, his back snapping straight with a loud crack, as he demanded, what did you say? That kid is an apostle? He stared at the path we'd taken, his face turning ghostly pale as he muttered, Tianyao City is about to get very interesting. Shen Tinglan smiled, feeling a surge of pride as he thought smugly, it's giving main character energy because now they know who they're dealing with. On the street, I turned to Arya and asked, what can you tell me about the blood moon, the blood god, and the blood taxes? Arya stopped dead, her expression shifting to one of intense focus as she conjured a black barrier around us, cutting off the world's noise. Tell me exactly what happened in that historical fragment, she commanded. I didn't hold back, laying out every detail of my encounter with the Count and the entities within. Arya listened with wide, amber eyes, staring at me like I was a rare artifact. You're insane, she whispered, adding, you came face to face with a god and walked away unscathed. The Count, I frowned, countering, he couldn't even handle a level 60 monster. It was him, and yet it wasn't, Arya replied cryptically, adding, but I'm more worried about those twins you met, as they sound like saints of the Gemini sect. Why would someone of that status beg a blood god for help? She wondered, looking at me sharply before warning, and don't let anyone else know, for the Gemini sect would see you as a thorn in their side. I think you misunderstood, I corrected, clarifying. They wanted to leave their family, not the sect. Arya rolled her eyes and countered, you clearly haven't read the Shadow Sect's bylaws, because to an apostle, a sect is a family. Marriage is likely just a code word for some obscure ritual, so just be careful, she advised. And the eye I saw at the end, I asked. Arya's face turned grim as she explained, that was a god, meaning the entire banquet was an offering to delight it, while the Count was just a vessel or perhaps a plaything. She dissipated the barrier and warned, don't dig deeper until you're stronger, because curiosity killed the cat, and it's even worse for players. I remained silent, weighing her words. If the Count was a vessel, who, or what was the real architect? I had no answers, and my previous life's memories were useless here. The only thing I knew for sure was the Count's parting promise. I have a feeling we'll meet again. Back at the Shadow Sect, Arya hurried off, leaving me to my own devices. I retreated to my room and pulled out the loot. The A-rank treasure chest glowed with a faint, gold light, prompting me to use Fate Thief. Stealth success. Blood Moon Serrated Dagger, A-rank. The weapon was a translucent, crimson blade, but the item description, a small toy for a god, felt like a threat. I didn't let it deter me, so I used the skill again. Stealth success. High-level Blood Banquet Invitation. Another red envelope appeared, this one adorned with complex, golden filigree, so I used the skill a third time. Stealth success. Mysterious Blood. A glass vial filled with glowing, red fluid appeared, making me frown as I wondered if the blood god was targeting me, since everything I pulled felt linked to its influence. Skill issue, I thought, pushing the unease aside as I resolved to use whatever power I could get my hands on. I put the vial and the invitation away, deciding to ask Arya about refining the blood wolf heart later. I took a shower, washing away the grime of the raid because it felt necessary. If I was going to open an SS-rank chest, I wanted to be ready. When I returned, the SS-rank chest pulsed with vibrant purple veins, prompting me to take a breath and trigger Fate Thief. Stealth success. Blood-wrought leather armor, A-rank. Defensive stats, 1,500. Special effect, auto-immunizes against damage under 3,000 every 3 seconds, making it essentially an S-rank piece in disguise. I used the skill again. Stealth success. Blood wolf legs, crafting material. I threw them on the bed, feeling like my luck was weirdly focused, before aiming the skill at the chest one last time. Stealth success. SS-rank skill book, Soul Shock. My heart hammered against my ribs. Soul Shock. Inflicts a soul-level stun for 2 seconds and deals 3x base attack damage, which cannot be resisted by anything below God tier. I stared at the screen, stunned because in a game where control skills were king, a stun that couldn't be resisted except by a god was broken. It was literally peak cinema. I equipped the armor and learned the skill immediately, unable to wait to test it. I rode out of the city and found a pack of Silver Moon wolves, where I aimed my crossbow and fired, creating a loud boom. The wolf disintegrated, a massive chunk of its HP bar vanishing instantly. If I hit a squishy mage player with this, they wouldn't just lose, they'd get deleted. As I readied another shot, the valley erupted in a chorus of howls, and over 100 Silver Moon wolves, each the size of an elephant, charged out of the fog like a landslide. I watched the Silver Moon wolves move with terrifying grace, noting that their dense forest home wasn't an obstacle, it was a fortress. I lowered my left hand and tightened my grip on the Blood Moon Serrated Dagger, deciding it was time to see if I'm as good as I think I am. I plunged into the pack, a blur of shadow where every swipe of my blade left a gruesome mark before the wolves could even register the movement. 10,000. This wasn't a fight, but rather a massacre, as the apex predators had suddenly become the prey. The wolves began to howl, creating a rising tide of sound that chilled the air. I frowned, realizing that at this rate, there were likely thousands of them nearby. Why wasn't Tianyo City clearing this out, since even a guild would struggle against a swarm this size? Fine by me, so let's cook. I triggered Fate Mark, causing the wolves to explode like gory fireworks with a boom that painted the ground in crimson. I stood in the center of the carnage, caked in black ichor, feeling like a demon born for war. Suddenly, a massive silver wolf stepped from the trees, standing twice the size of its kin, with its fangs twisted into horrific, serrated blades. Race Boss, Silver Moon Wolf King, level 25. HP, 100,000. Attack, 2,000. Skills, Fangs of Rage, Wolf Howl, Silver Moon Blade, King's Fury. The King's Fury skill, a 200% stat boost, was absurd for a level 25 boss, making it essentially cheating. I didn't wait, but lunged forward, my blade carving a deep, jagged canyon down the king's flank until blood sprayed in a mist. One hit was all it took to force its King's Fury state. I didn't stop there, but commanded, Soul Shock. The invisible force hit the king like a hammer, freezing it mid-stride, which allowed me to slide beneath its belly and carve another wound. In Zhu Tian, skills and basic attacks alike caused bleeding, but the recovery rate of high-level monsters usually negated it, though not here. Fate Mark, 8,000. Fate Judgment, 60,000. The first blow crippled it, while the second turned the beast into a pile of meat. I blinked, momentarily stunned by the overkill. The howling outside was growing deafening, it sounded like the entire wilderness was screaming. I don't know what's happening, but I'm out. I snagged the loot chest and vanished into the city, prioritizing safety first, since curiosity can wait for the afterlife. The next morning, a knock at my door revealed a visibly stressed Arya. Last night was a mess, she said, rubbing her temples as she noted, the wolves were howling all night, and the city defense army is on high alert. You wouldn't happen to know anything about that, would you? She asked. I played it cool, answering, I'm just a guy who likes a quiet neighborhood. She sighed, dropping the act, and declared, you're level 20 now, so it's time to fulfill your duties to the Shadow Sect. She leaned in and whispered, our core mission is simple, assassination. She handed me a parchment containing a high-definition portrait of a man, explaining, your target is a local councilman and family head named Bran. Someone put a 5,000 gold bounty on his head, and you get 50%, she added. 2,500 gold was more than I'd ever seen, so I said, say less. Before she left, I asked, know a good blacksmith? I have materials that need work. Head to the East District. Ask for Alfred at the Broken Hammer. The shop was a furnace, heat rolling out like a physical wall, where an old man with a bald head and a massive white beard stood over an anvil, swinging a hammer the size of an ox's skull. I need gear forged, I said. I don't serve strangers, he grunted. I'm an apostle of the Shadow Sect. He stopped, his eyes widening as he asked, the one who cleared the trial at 100%, before pacing around me, sizing me up and muttering, you don't look like much. I scanned him to reveal, Alfred, level 55, blacksmith master, which confirmed this guy was the real deal. I'll do it as a favor to Arya, he grumbled, adding, 2,000 gold, 800 up front, non-refundable. I handed over the coins and the bloody materials from the Wolf King, which he looked at with a strange, dark curiosity before instructing, go, I'll send word when it's done. Late that night, I crept into the Brand Manor, where security was tighter than usual, but the guards were busy complaining about their shifts and didn't even notice the shadows sliding past their gate. I moved through the estate with ease, noting that while Bran might be a small family head, this place was the definition of upper-class wealth, and I was going to enjoy this. Bran's Manor was a fortress, for even at midnight, 4 patrols each, 20 members strong and at least level 25 combed the grounds. The captain, a level 35 Holy Light Shield bearer, was the real headache, since his job wasn't just tanking, but using skills to reveal stealthed intruders. If a rogue were caught by him, they'd be minced meat. But for me, they didn't exist. I waltzed through the garden, pausing briefly to admire a rare flower before stopping at the main entrance, having scoped this out all day. I could have moved earlier, but I didn't want to risk the city defense army having some hidden detection specialist, concluding it was better safe than sorry. As I reached for the handle, a voice drifted through the door saying, Mr. Bran, regarding the events in 2 months. Asking myself if that is when the game merges with reality, my pulse quickened as I invoked advanced stealth, causing my body to dissolve into a shadow that seeped right through the doorframe. I wasn't just hidden, I was intangible. Inside, a lavish bedroom served as a makeshift meeting room, where Bran, a suave man with a handlebar mustache, sat at a tea table across from a figure draped in a black robe and mask. Bran, flower fencer, hidden class, level 25, HP, 20,000, skills, flower sword dance, heart's fury, duelist sword, armor-piercing sword. Being a flower fencer, he was built for dueling, making him a one-on-one nightmare who could temporarily skyrocket his own stats, meaning the only real counter was a firing squad of mages. I glanced at his companion, and my brow furrowed at the status screen which read, Exorcist, level 50, making me realize that's crazy work. It's not just Tiniao City, Bran was saying, adding, every major city wants a piece of the pie. Indeed, the robed figure replied, his voice dripping with greed as he continued, the wealth of the heavenly being's world is immense. But the entities we've been suppressing will break free soon. It's too dangerous to act alone. Join us, Mr. Bran. Don't you want to restore your family to its former glory? Bran hesitated, wringing his hands, before nodding and saying, fine, we'll cooperate. The robed man stood and said, good choice. Someone will contact you regarding the specifics. Once the door clicked shut, Bran lit a cigarette, a thick, intricately patterned stick that looked nothing like the ones back home, and took a long, moody drag. In 2 months, what are you planning? I asked, stepping out of the shadows. Bran whirled around, gasping, who, as his hand flew to his sword, but he was too slow because my dagger flashed like a crescent moon, slicing his throat. He gurgled, blood spraying as he tried to unsheath his blade. Fate mark. Boom. The explosion sent Bran and his chair flying, and before he could recover, I appeared again, commanding, Fate Judgment. Another blast occurred, causing Bran to disintegrate into a crimson mist, leaving me to think, task failed successfully for you, I guess. I searched the room quickly, snagging a notebook from the nightstand before slipping back into the dark, and though guards were shouting outside, it was too late. Shadow Sect mission complete, assassinate Bran, reward, 30% XP, 800 reputation. Hidden quest triggered, investigate the Advent event. The hidden quest reward was a test for a hidden class, making me think, not me doing that right now. The Advent was 2 months away, and with one witness dead and the other a level 50 monster, I needed to play the long game. Back at headquarters, Arya was leaning against my door with her arms crossed, murmuring, your stealth is getting scary, as her eyes darted to my blood-stained clothes before she asked, mission accomplished? The target is down, I said, ignoring her inquisitive gaze, before adding, Bran was plotting something called the Advent with a robed man. Arya's face turned stony as she explained, I know this conflict, for it's Bran's rival, Brid, who wants to slowly eat away at the world, while Bran wanted a full-scale conquest. They've been at each other's throats over this, she added. I nodded, keeping my own counsel, knowing that whether they were peaceful invaders or conquerors, they were all here to butcher my home, meaning I need more power. Give me more missions, I told her, adding, I want to be stronger. A month later, I found Arya mid-prayer. You're a pain to watch, she complained, standing up, before adding, you're too flashy, to the point that every major city is whispering about this genius assassin who never leaves a trace. They're even trying to poach you from me, she continued. I'm limited edition, I replied, my voice dry. She sighed, though her eyes twinkled as she told me, they've given you a nickname, the death-announcing bird, because death follows wherever you go. Congratulations, unique title acquired, death-announcing bird B rank. Effect, plus 1,500 regional reputation. Skill, voice of death, mark an enemy to deal delayed secondary damage. I checked my status to find I was level 27, 30% XP, proving I was growing fast. My stats were climbing, my gear was top tier, and my kill count was rising, leading me to think, let them come, I'm just getting started. My inventory was becoming a personal armory, containing the Blood Moon set, the King's Blood Ring, and the A-rank gear I'd commissioned from Alfred. With my unique Fate Point talent, maxed critical hit rate, and boosted skill growth, I was a walking powerhouse. I didn't need 3 months to hit level 30, because 2 weeks would suffice, after which I'd head straight for the City of Dawn to uncover the secrets of the upcoming advent. Outside the city, Wang Longsing was watching his guild members grind against fire-red apes. Still nothing on Qin Feng's identity, he growled, turning to a subordinate. The player wiped sweat from his brow and replied, nothing, guild leader, as we checked the official systems and every database available, but the name doesn't lead to anyone matching his description. Wang Longsing dug his nails into his palms, his eyes burning with pathetic fury at the audacity of that guy, as he roared, useless, you're all useless. The subordinate knelt, trembling, and promised, I'll do whatever it takes, and we'll track him down through the local underground if we have to. Wang Longsing sneered, his gaze shifting back to the battlefield, as he thought, Qin Feng, don't think a few levels make you a god, because there's always a bigger fish, and I'll make you pay for humiliating me. I was blissfully unaware of his temper tantrum, stalking through the forest of myriads east of Tianyao City, where the sun filtered through the canopy in dappled beams as I skirted past a herd of iron-horned bulls. They were massive, dual-tailed beasts with metallic horns and bone-spiked tails. Iron-horned bull, level 30, HP, 40,000, attack, 800, defense, 1,000, skill, savage charge, swarm, tail spike. These bulls were temperamental, yet they didn't even notice me. I was hunting something else, because I needed a mount not just for travel, but for combat. Legend spoke of a lucky player in this forest who found a growth-type flying mount, and if I wanted to survive the later stages of the game, I needed that edge. I finally reached Clear Spring Lake, the primary watering hole for the entire forest. It was a neutral zone where even apex predators curbed their bloodlust, lest they be swarmed by the rest of the thirsty pack. I climbed into a tree, book in hand, and waited. By dusk, the lake was a velvet crimson, and though I've seen wolves, tigers, and panthers, nothing was worth taming. Just as I was about to call it a day, the lake erupted into chaos as creatures scattered in terror, while a thunderous beating of wings echoed from above. A flock of giant eagles descended, their wingspans easily topping 10 meters, and their feathers shimmered with cold, metallic light. Iron Feather Eagle level 35, HP 50,000, attack 1,200, speed 400, defense 1,500. Realizing this was a jackpot, I knew this flock, and since their king's nest held the legendary egg, I didn't rush. I marked one with my ring as a tracking beacon and waited for them to drink before tailing them through the dense canopy. I moved like a phantom, using flash to keep pace with their terrifying flight speed. Half an hour later, I reached a jagged, isolated peak, where the cliffs were riddled with nests reinforced with scavenged steel swords, axes, spears, all woven together. In the center lay the prize, a massive, football-sized egg, guarded by the king. Iron Feather Eagle King, level 45 boss, HP 70,000, attack 4,500, speed 700, defense 4,500. The king was a 20-meter monstrosity of silver-hued feathers whose stats were absurd, leaving me to think that, instead of a skill issue, it was more like a don't-get-yourself-killed issue. I couldn't beat this thing in a straight fight, meaning I had one shot, sneak in, steal the egg, and pray the forest terrain could help me outrun a level 45 boss. The king was curled tight around the egg, eyes scanning the horizon. Even with stealth, getting past those talons was going to be the hardest thing I'd ever done. Stealing the egg was a nightmare, and since crawling beneath a level 45 boss to grab it was a suicide mission, and I wasn't that desperate, I settled for the cliffside. I pulled out a book from my inventory to study the world's politics and local customs while I waited for an opening, thinking to myself that my brain has too many tabs open. I spent 2 days observing the king's routine, noting that it hunted every morning between 7 and 8, returning with food within 5 to 10 minutes. That was my window, and because I couldn't afford to be optimistic, I had to plan for the worst-case scenario. On the third morning, the king took off, its wings whipping up a miniature storm. The shadow cloak muffled the sound of my movements as I scrambled into the nest, where I found a silver, football-sized egg etched with golden runes, nestled in a bizarre assortment of animal pelts and scavenged weapons. I snatched it. System: you have successfully stolen the A-rank Iron Feather Eagle egg which with proper care will likely hatch into a growth-type mount. Thinking of this as peak cinema, my heart soared as I bolted toward Tianyo City, spamming flash whenever the cooldown allowed, while grumbling that this cooldown is a you problem. Suddenly, a screech tore through the air, causing my skin to crawl as I lunged to the side just as a massive iron feather pulverized the tree I'd occupied seconds ago. The explosion was deafening, a 10-meter trunk vaporized into splinters, convincing me that bro is fighting demons. I didn't stick around, but hurled a bundle of throwing knives behind me, a one-time use item triggering a chain of explosions. But the king was still coming, backed by 100 subordinates. They rained destruction down, leveling the forest, while I ducked and weaved, using my agility to put the giant trees between me and the incoming fire. I needed a distraction, so I spotted a herd of level 30 iron spear porcupines, which were 5-meter-long beasts, bristling with thick quills. I vaulted into the middle of the herd, and as the eagles dove, the porcupines panicked and unleashed a volley of quills. The collision of iron quills and metal feathers turned the sky into a localized war zone, allowing me to push through the chaos and sprint toward the city walls. Behind me, the king ignored the porcupines, its gaze locked on me as its speed proved entirely unfair. I flashed forward just as its phantom clone slammed into my previous location, cratering the earth with enough force to shake the forest floor. I was almost out of the trees, and ahead, 2 guards on the wall were killing time. "So bored?" the tall one sighed, pausing his cigarette. "We're preparing for the advent," the stout guard replied, adding, "Fighting monsters now is just asking for." Before he stopped, his eyes going wide as he gasped, "What is that?" He pointed toward the horizon, where a gargantuan silver shape was tearing through the sky toward us. The alarm horn blared, and within seconds, the wall was swarming with soldiers wielding bows and staves. "Careful," the stout guard shouted, and then he squinted, asking, "Wait, is that a player on the ground?" I wasn't just running, I was dodging death by a hair's breadth. The king shrieked, sky's impact, stunning my brain for a fraction of a second, and it didn't miss. Dozens of feathers and clones descended, but I flashed the moment before impact, reappearing yards away, as the ground behind me turned into a molten pit. The king dove for one final mountain-breaking charge, gold light radiating from its wings, which told me it was time to see if this works. I activated Fate Mark and Fate Judgment in a split second, creating a blast that forced the king to bank hard, smashing it into the dirt just meters from me. It clawed its way out of the crater, bloodied and furious, preparing to dive again. "Stop!" the stout guard bellowed from the walls. "Warning, target has entered Tianyao territory. Stand down, or the city defense army will engage." The ballista swiveled, locking onto the eagle, causing the king to shriek in frustration upon seeing the wall of steel and bank toward the forest. I didn't wait, but flashed through the city gate, gasping for air. "System, you have obtained the A-rank Iron Feather Eagle Egg." The stout guard descended, staring at me as he asked, "Level 27? And you survived the king?" Before shaking his head in bafflement and demanding, "Are you some god's bastard child?" I didn't answer, but just slipped into the shadows, heading back to the Shadow Sect because I was alive and I had my mount. After absorbing every detail about the local bestiary, I realized how lucky I'd been, knowing that if I hadn't cleared out of the forest, I'd have been forced to burn my Snake of Rotation cooldown, or worse, wake up at a resurrection point. One king was a headache, whereas 100 enraged Iron Feather Eagles would have been a straight-up disaster. A knock at my door pulled me from my reading, and Arya stood there, looking uncharacteristically frazzled. "Don't leave the city for a while," she said, rubbing her temples as she explained. "Someone ticked off the Iron Feather Eagle King, and it almost sieged the city." "The city lord is furious," she added, warning. "The area around the Fallen Moon River is a death trap right now. Several heavenly beings have already been wiped out." I nodded, feeling a bit awkward, since it's giving main character energy, because I knew the mechanics. Monsters weren't just XP piñatas, they were living creatures with territorial instincts. I'd essentially blocked their progression, and they were taking it personally. Arya narrowed her eyes, scanning my face, and demanded, "You're acting suspicious. Wait, don't tell me you were the one who provoked it." "Guilty as charged," I admitted. She stared at me, her jaw dropping, as she gasped, "You went after that thing. Even though they're fast, they swarm, and they're a nightmare to deal with." I reached into my inventory and pulled out the egg, causing Arya's eyes to go wide as she looked like she'd seen a ghost or perhaps a very expensive omelet. "You stole the king's egg? How did you even find the nest?" I tapped my king's shadow ring and explained, marked a scout at the lake and tracked the flock back, where I spent 2 days studying their patrol patterns before making my move. Arya poked my chest, her gaze sharp, as she demanded, "Did you even check their skills? Because you're lucky. And if I were your level, I'd have been shredded in one hit." "How are you even alive?" she added. "I'm just built different," I said, offering a smirk. She rolled her eyes and countered, "You're insufferable," before asking, "How are you planning to hatch it?" "Standard incubation, I guess. Why not make it something special?" she suggested, poking the egg. "We can infuse it with shadow affinity," she explained, adding, "If we follow the old manuals, it could evolve into a shadow eagle faster, quieter, and capable of using our sect's arts. It's an elite mount," she concluded, thinking to myself, "Are you my charger? Because I'd die without you." I handed her the egg. She stumbled under its weight, shooting me a look of pure exasperation. You really know how to dump your chores on me, she grumbled, tucking it away. Anyway, the elder heard about your plans to head for the City of Dawn, she noted, adding, he's not stopping you. In fact, he wants to offer you a trial. A chance to power up, she concluded. My pulse quickened as she led me to the deepest part of the sect's hideout, where a jagged, humming fissure hung in the air, looking like a tear in reality that was dark and soul-sucking. An abyssal gap, Arya explained, continuing with a tone of reverence. It's a gift from the gods, and while other factions dream of owning one, only we do, because it's an entrance to a pocket dimension. Where does it lead? I asked, eyeing the swirling vortex with open skepticism. Arya shrugged nonchalantly and replied, the elder wouldn't say, claiming only that it's tied to our sect's origin, and though I went in once, it was just a fever dream of fragments I can't remember, with no loot and no guidance, so you're on your own. I took a deep breath, thinking that a deadline was more like a suggestion line, and knowing that if I wanted to survive the coming storm, I couldn't afford to be picky. I stepped into the rift. A nauseating blur washed over my senses before the air turned thick with the stench of sulfur, and I opened my eyes to a hellscape of basalt and slow-moving, serpent-like lava streams. System, you have entered the first layer of the Hell Phantom world. Condition, survive for 3 days. Thinking that 3 days meant my patience was under maintenance, the air warped before I could even adjust, and a 5-meter fireball whistled toward my head. I dove into the shadows, watching as the impact turned the solid ground into a massive crater, which prompted a soft, questioning HM from the darkness. A creature crawled out from the heat, a 6-armed horror, with a human torso and a snake's tail, its scales shimmering in the magma light. Hellrock Serpent Demon, level 30, HP, 35,000, attack, 900, defense, 1,000, skill, Hellfire Ball, Magma Mastery, Hellrock Explosion. It hissed as the heat intensified, making it clear that the party was starting, so I rolled the words Hell Projection Phantom World around in my head. The deeper I delved into this world, the more secrets unfurled before me, reminding me that the misty serpent in the beginner village had been a projection too, and now I was standing in the core of a hellish manifestation. I laughed at my own curiosity since I didn't have the answer, and honestly it didn't matter, so as the Hellrock Serpent Demon blindly thrashed about, searching for my scent, I struck. I moved like a phantom, my blade carving a jagged, bleeding wound into its thick hide, and though the beast roared, the sound vibrating through the nearby magma, I was already gone, weaving through its guard and leaving a trail of lacerations in my wake. Activating the Fate Mark, the demon's body erupted into gore with a deafening detonation. System, you have killed a level 30 Hellrock Serpent Demon, EXP gained 10%. My eyes glinted in the gloom because 10% for a level 30 monster, even with my tenfold experience buff, was insane. Considering a regular player would only get 1%, which was still leagues better than the 0.5% offered by standard mobs, proving that the task failed successfully. I didn't stop to loot since there were no chests here, so I pressed on until a bloated, pus-filled monstrosity blocked my path. Hellpus Nightmare, level 30, HP, 55,000, skill, flesh armor, exploding pustule, flesh cannon. The creature oozed foul odors, its every movement a display of grotesque decay, but I didn't hesitate as I sank into the shadows and struck, resulting in the creature disintegrating into a firework of blood and bile 3 heartbeats later. System, you have killed a level 30 Hellpus Nightmare, EXP gained, 10%. I carved a bloody path through the hellscape, felling a level 30 Hell Shadow Claw Demon for 10% EXP, shattering a level 30 Hell Rock Rat for 8% EXP, and decapitating a level 30 Hell Armor Ape for 5% EXP. Later, I huddled against a basalt pillar, skewering a chunk of meat over the flowing magma where it sizzled, releasing a weird, pungent aroma. I took a bite, wincing at the sulfurous aftertaste, and though my armor was tattered and my hair a mess, my gaze remained as steady as an abyss. These monsters were no joke, given that their combat AI was leagues beyond anything in the outside world, and I've nearly been wiped out in a 5-way ambush earlier, surviving only on a sliver of HP. But the risk was paying off, so I pulled up my panel, which displayed level 33, featuring stats that would make any other player weep. I finished my meal and stood up, ready for the next challenge, and deep in the shadows I stalked forward while, meanwhile, the outside world was losing its mind over the leaderboard update. Too easy, Lei Yu bellowed, his giant sword obliterating a massive rhinoceros, though he looked disappointed when the beast didn't even put up a fight, prompting him to complain. Why is everyone so weak? I want a real challenge. Guild leader, a subordinate sighed, the leaderboard just updated. Qin Feng is level 33. Lei Yu's excitement flared as he exclaimed, 33, that's wild. What kind of talent does he have? SS, maybe SSS. I want to spar with him, because I'm bored of these small fry. Respectfully, no, the subordinate countered, explaining that he is a strategic asset, not a plaything for your boredom. Lei Yu flopped onto his back, staring at the sky while muttering, one fight, that's all I want. Across the map, Wang Longsheng was watching the same update, his face contorting with rage as he spat, 33? How? I haven't slept, I've optimized every second, I've burned through every potion, how is he still pulling away? His advisors stayed silent while Wang Longsheng, who wasn't just angry but spiraling, declared, I don't care what it takes, so catch him, exceed him, because I don't care about the rank, I just can't stand the sight of him in first place. Back in the Hell Phantom world, I was busy observing my real target, a massive spider web that spanned a canyon, and at its heart sat a monstrosity 10 meters in diameter. Venomous Spider Queen, level 35 boss, HP 55,000, skill, Toxic Mist, Deadly Kiss, Web Shoot, Screaming Howl. Having 4 skills at level 35 was unheard of, since usually you didn't see that kind of kit until level 40, meaning I dodged a bullet by retreating earlier when this boss ambushed me mid-fight, spewing a web that nearly sealed my fate. Thinking that it was crazy work, I tightened my grip on my blade, knowing it was time to finish this. I'd hacked off a leg and fled, leaving the Venomous Spider Queen behind without checking its stats, because I was spent, and days of relentless grinding had exhausted my supplies, meaning that staying to fight would have been professional suicide. After a brief recovery, I returned to the shadows, stalking toward the boss without rushing, and I invoked my fate left hand, siphoning an item from the creature's hide. System: you have successfully stolen Frightened Spider Egg. Note: a high-protein, high-energy food source. These eggs only become viable if the queen dies. A grapefruit-sized egg materialized in my hand, and as I tucked it into my inventory, a sharp prickle at my brow warned me, causing me to lunge to the side just as a neon green web slammed into the basalt floor behind me, sizzling as it ate through the rock. Every time I moved, the Spider Queen's 8 sickly green eyes tracked me with unnerving precision, prompting me to think, are you a magician? Because everyone disappears when I look at you, but I knew this wasn't magic, since spiders didn't have eyes this keen, so I racked my brain for the strategy. Remembering that spiders sense the world through their silk, I realized the web I saw wasn't just a trap, it was an extension of the queen's nervous system. I tossed a handful of throwing knives into the air, and the mother-child chain blades fragmented, striking the ground in a wide arc, which instantly caused the queen to unleash a barrage of webs at the impact sites. Thinking that the task failed successfully, I knelt, carving through the basalt with my blade, only to find that beneath the surface, spider silk permeated the rock, forming a massive, interconnected network. As I severed a strand, the queen shrieked and scrambled down from its perch, confirming that I'd found the source of its senses, which was vibrations. As long as I moved, I was being tracked, and though for any other player, this realization would be a death sentence, I survived worse. I began to dance, stepping gingerly on my tiptoes while flicking heavy stone shards across the floor to create false vibrations. The queen went berserk, carpeting the area in acidic webs that hissed like searing meat, but I avoided them all, using flash to reposition, dancing around its fury until I was finally in kill range. I sprinted, compressing my body into a streamlined lance, and when the queen opened its maw, spewing a toxic mist that instantly corroded the rock, I leaped back, watching the poison cloud envelope the boss. It was a perfect defense until I drew my level 20 crossbow and fired a bolt. With a loud boom, the shockwave from my fate mark scattered the toxic fog, exposing the queen. I didn't hesitate as I triggered fate dice. The translucent cube settled on 3. Fate dice. 3. All S-rank or higher skills receive a 3x boost. I grinned, unleashing Soul Shock with its base stats of 2 seconds of stun and 3x damage, which, boosted, became 6 seconds of stun and 9x damage. The queen froze, rigid as stone, while I transformed into a blur of motion, carving deep, jagged wounds into its hulking frame. With a final, massive explosion, the queen's body disintegrated in a spray of blue-green blood. System: you have killed the level 35 Venomous Spider Queen. XP gained, 40%. You have reached level 34. The entire world began to crumble, and as the reality of the Hell Realm dissolved, I found myself back in the Shadow Sect's secret chamber. System: you have cleared the Hell Phantom world. Reward: Hell Invitation Letter. A pitch-black envelope with gold wax seals rested in my hand, causing me to stare at it and wonder, another one. Since the last time I cleared a void rift, I got a blood invitation. This was worth a fortune to anyone over level 40, as the True Hell was the premier leveling ground for elites, dangerous, isolated, and incredibly lucrative. Arya, who'd been waiting on a chair, jumped to her feet and asked, "Are you okay? Did you hit any trouble?" "Just grinding for EXP," I said, showing her the letter. Her eyes lit up, then dimmed as she fought back her desire for the item, advising me, "You have no idea how valuable that is for someone your level. Keep it safe." She turned serious, her expression hardening as she said, "Now, there's something else you need to hear. You've hit level 30 within 3 months, just as we agreed. Are you still planning to head for the City of Dawn?" I met Arya's gaze while the fire in my chest only burned brighter, and I replied, "Of course." She pulled a parchment from her cloak, a map far more detailed than my own, and handed it over, saying, "Take it. My brother used this one. Be careful out there." "Thanks for looking out for me," I said, offering a rare smile. As we parted ways, I opened my chat interface and sent a message to Qin Feng, stating, "I've got a batch of gear to move." Outside a troll camp, Qin Feng pointed his sword at the enemy lookout tower and commanded, "Little Shen, take out their scout. Lu Jing, hit them with a woodbine effect. The warriors will soak up the damage." "Copy that, Captain," they replied in unison. Just as Qin Feng prepared to issue his next command, a notification pinged, causing him to pause, his eyes widening as he read. "Captain, we're waiting," Shen Tinglin prompted. Hold on, Kong Feng muttered, his attention fully captured as he tapped out a reply. Qin Feng, you're serious? I replied, yep, interested. To which he immediately responded, definitely. What's the level requirement? I told him, around 20, prompting him to ask, what's your price? To which I stated, 300 gold per piece. Kong Feng's breathing hitched because 300 gold for level 20 gear in this market, where even white-tier trash was going for 270, was a steal, especially with the gear shortage rapidly approaching, so he didn't hesitate, quickly sealing the deal. Back in the forest, a massive treasure chest materialized before his team, causing a stir. Captain, more gear? Shen Tinglin gasped, her eyes shimmering as she popped the lid. The chest erupted in a multicolored glow, revealing a mountain of weapons, shields, and armor, which led her to pick up a bow, the Tyrant's longbow, and stare at the stats, noting it was level 20, with 600-700 attack, plus 20 strength, a 30% crit chance plus a 10% strength buff on every crit, and even a shield skill. Where did you even get these? She whispered. Qin Feng, Kong Feng said, frantically counting the haul of 15 pieces, which would have drained their entire treasury, though it was worth every coin. Lu Jing stood to the side, his jaw tight, because he couldn't stand Qin Feng, but even he couldn't deny the quality of the haul, so silence was the best he could offer. After the transaction went through a massive 4,500 gold transfer, Kong Feng messaged me again, asking, Qin Feng, moving this much gear, are you going somewhere? I answered, the City of Dawn. Kong Feng replied, the City of Dawn? That's the most mysterious city on the map. If you make it there, can you trade some intel? I'll pay. I simply stated, we'll see. I moved out, armed with Arya's map and my trusty blade, navigating a path that was a nightmare of mostly overgrown, thorny thickets that felt more like a suggestion than a trail. I didn't care, since I had a fate mark of resurrection keyed to my departure from Tianyo City, meaning death wasn't a failure, just a minor inconvenience, so I had nothing but time and a singular focus. Days later, the sight of smoke caught my attention, making me wonder. A village? In the middle of this death-trap forest? I approached with caution, greeted by an idyllic scene of golden wheat fields and turning water wheels, which looked peaceful, though something felt wrong. A notification flashed. You have discovered the Enforcer's Puppet Village. Obtained 50 reputation. The name Enforcer's Puppet Village tasted bitter. A middle-aged farmer walked up, carrying a hoe, and though he smiled, his eyes held nothing but venom as he said, Traveler, you look exhausted. Come in, have a meal. I shook my head, muscles tensing, because I'd played this game before, and I knew when someone was setting a trap. Not coming in? The farmer's smile didn't waver, but his voice sharpened with malice as he laughed a hollow, grating sound and turned toward the village. Warning, you can't escape, because everyone who sees this village becomes a villager, so do you think you can run? I turned to leave, but stopped dead upon realizing that I'd already crossed the fence and the space had shifted, making me think it was funny that they were changing the laws of physics. Rule 1. The farmer called back, his eyes gleaming with cruelty. All guests must enter. I drew my blood-shattered blade to slit my own throat and respawn, but the steel wouldn't connect because the distance between the blade and my skin felt like it had been stretched into infinity. Rule 2. The farmer mocked. Only the enforcer decides who lives and who dies, so suicide is forbidden. I stepped into the village, my expression a mask of indifference, because I wanted to see what kind of rule-maker could play God like this. As I passed the wheat field, hundreds of laws flooded my mind, commanding me to eat bread every morning, wash after using the latrine, speak loudly, and exercise daily, which meant I was essentially a marionette on invisible strings. The farmer approached, his face twisted into a grotesque, forced grin for Rule 174, which dictated to always smile, even at strangers, so I forced a smile of my own, while keeping my eyes as cold as a predator's. For 5 days, I lived the routine of work, eat, and sleep as the rules forced my body to move like a machine, but on the 6th day, the binding snapped. Morning, the farmer said, scraping pig hair off a carcass, to which I replied, morning, because Rule 10 commanded to always greet people. Rest day, he muttered, his eyes burning with hunger. Go ask around if you're curious. I spent the next 2 days as a social butterfly, talking to everyone from the fisherman at the creek to the woodcutter, until I finally cornered the village librarian, a petite girl with skin like porcelain. You've been here 127 years? I asked, and she nodded, her voice thin and tired as she replied. He never comes, so maybe this is just a playground to him, or maybe he's watching us right now, laughing. When I asked, don't you hate him? She looked up, her smile bright and terrifyingly hollow as she said, I've forgotten how to hate, because I've been here so long. The hatred just rotted away. Keep your illusions, traveler, and don't waste time trying to leave, but just pick a book from the library and wait for your turn to tell the next newcomer the rules, she added, pointing to the shelves. I've read them all, she stated, even the ones about killing a transcendental. I had torn through those dusty volumes until the pages were practically disintegrating, but I still hadn't found a single loophole in the village's laws. Just give up, the librarian said, her smile as radiant as ever, though her eyes remained pools of sorrow as she added, hope only leads to despair. Is that so? I offered a genuine, chilling smile of my own and countered I disagree, Because the Enforcer's rules aren't absolute, they're just poorly coded, and you lot are just too unimaginative to see the exploits. She tilted her head, confused, but I didn't wait for a rebuttal as I pulled an advance blood invitation from my robes, having read the fine print that nothing said a villager couldn't go out to dinner. I ripped the seal, and a blinding surge of crimson light instantly enveloped me before a loud crack echoed as a spatial rift tore open, dragging me into the void. A notification pinged in my mind. You have entered the blood feast. Please fulfill at least one request from the god of blood. Under the cold, pale moonlight, a decadent estate loomed at the end of the road, surrounded by a forest that was a nightmare of twisted, skeletal trees, while the periodic howls from the dark made it clear this wasn't a place for the faint of heart. I stood at the gates, eyeing the wide-open entrance, which was silent, save for the flickering candlelight deep within. With a crunch, the sound of wheels drew my attention as a classic, luxurious carriage, blood-red with intricate gold inlays, pulled up without any horses, revealing it to be a high-end magical construct. It stopped, and a woman stepped out wearing a white lace gown and a broad-brimmed hat, her soft, sapphire eyes twinkling with amusement. "Another guest for the feast?" she asked, tilting her head, but I ignored the pleasantry, my eyes scanning the carriage as I muttered mostly to myself, "Are you a magician? Because everyone seems to disappear when I look at them." "The feast is starting soon," she said, her red lips curving upward. "Late guests make the host very cranky." I nodded, following her toward the castle as she chirped, "I'm Xingxia, and you?" To which I replied, "Qin Feng." "A rare name," she hummed, prompting me to deadpan, "Are you Wi-Fi?" Because I'm feeling a connection, which made her blink, though her smile only grew brighter. Back in the village, a man ripped off his straw hat, staring at the empty library as he muttered, "Someone broke the rules? That's crazy work," before vanishing in a blink. At the castle gates, a butler in a crisp suit bowed us inside to a hall that was a riot of velvet carpets and decadent dancers, with guests sipping deep crimson wine. The music stuttered for a moment as we entered because the famous Chris sisters were staring at me, their curiosity palpable, but when I caught their gaze, they looked away, flustered. Then, the inner sanctum opened, and the Count emerged, resplendent in crimson robes and holding a scepter topped with a massive ruby, which he tapped against his wineglass, ting, 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 until the room went dead silent. "Welcome to my feast," he boomed, and the scenery shifted instantly as my mind reeled while the world solidified, revealing that we were standing on the surface of the Shibo Sea. The water beneath us was as hard as stone, vibrating under my boots, while above, the blood moon hung so low I felt I could reach up and touch it. "I never get tired of this," Xingxia sighed, pointing toward a jagged tower in the distance as she added, "The fairy-built Pantheon Sea Tower, which only exists on the Shibo Sea, is peak cinema, really. It's giving main character energy," I remarked, keeping my guard up while the Count began his introductions, mocking everyone from Xingxia to the assassin, Black. When he reached me, he drifted over, his grin stretching far too wide to be human as he hissed, "The traveler returns. So Destiny's pawn, we meet again." "I could have gone 6 months without seeing you," I said flatly, which made him let out a jagged, blood-spattered laugh. "Survive the feast, and the god of blood might grant your wish. But just remember, only 5 of you get to walk away," he warned before turning into a swarm of bats with a flap of wings and vanishing. With a splash, the sea turned soft as liquid, and a 100-meter geyser erupted as a man covered in fish scales roared from the center. "The Shibo Sea is my turf." Chaos exploded, so I didn't hesitate, as Xingxia and I exchanged a glance, a silent agreement to team up, before I blurred, triggering my fate mark while unleashing a bolt at a nearby contestant that sprayed blood across the waves. Xingxia followed up, her powerful legs snapping like a whip and sending another participant flying into the churning abyss, allowing us to fight back-to-back as a whirlwind of death. Whales summoned by the fishman breached the surface, crushing fighters beneath tons of water, while assassins blinked through the spray, their daggers glinting in the moonlight. I found myself face-to-face with the master assassin, Black, who tossed a severed head aside the fishman's and grinned, asking, "2 masters, 1 feast, so isn't this redundant?" "Skill issue," I said, firing a bolt that he deflected, though his arrogance vanished as he felt the force of the impact and retreated into the shadows. I followed until our blades met with a loud clang and a shower of sparks, prompting me to ignite my fate mark, ready to end it. The assassin master exploded like a balloon, scattering black, mud-like gore in every direction, which made me duck instinctively as my eyes tracked the data flickering in my peripheral vision. Name, Black Phantom Assassin. Level, 45. Stats, Start 180, Con 50, Int 40, AG 270, HP. Live in 4, Meme Messes Ral, MP. 15分之000. Knowing he was a nightmare of evasion with phantom displacement, shadow piercing, and the terrifying phantom domain that boosted his stats by 150% in a 100-meter radius, my heart raced, because this wasn't just a boss fight, but a masterclass. He was still out there, lurking in the shadows and waiting to carve me open, so I muttered. I speak fluent sarcasm, and spun around just in time for our daggers to lock with a loud clang that showered sparks into the air. His eyes widened because he wasn't used to anyone blocking his shadow piercing, so he spawned a phantom clone, which was a perfect shadow copy. I didn't hesitate, planting a bolt into it and detonating my fate mark, so that the phantom shattered instantly, losing 5,500 HP. But Black was already moving, weaving shadow traps that paralyzed my legs. He lunged, his shadow form impaling me from behind to deal 21,000 damage, which tore my leather armor and caused blood to spray from my lips. My bed and I are perfect together. I wheezed, but this is ruining my day. Black leaped back, expanding his dark domain until 100 meters of absolute shadow swallowed us, and he scoffed, "You're tough, kid, but the gap in our power is a canyon." I wiped the blood from my chin, looking at the crimson smear on my hand as I replied, "You're not bad, since you're the first assassin to actually make me bleed, so this'll be the highlight of your obituary. Are you brain damaged?" Black sneered, spawning dozens of clones that crawled out of the dark like oil while he boasted, "I hold your life in my hands." "Is that a fact?" I asked as I pulled out a translucent die that promptly settled on a 5, triggering a system notification that read, "Fate die, 5. All S-grade skills receive a 5x bonus," which led me to mutter, "Game over." I triggered Soul Shock, and the sheer pressure shattered his clones instantly, leaving Black frozen with his mind wiped blank by the sheer weight of my intent as I walked right up to him and said, "This is my strongest strike, so you should be proud." I unleashed Fate Judgment, causing Black to explode into a mist of blood before the domain collapsed and the external world rushed back in, leaving the survivors staring at me with pale faces because I had just killed a legend. The remaining 4 stood amidst the carnage of the sea, where scavengers were already picking at the limbs of the fallen, revealing Xingxia looking disheveled with her hat ruined, the Chris sisters unblemished but completely rattled, and John, a burly 50-level tank, looking like he'd been through a meat grinder. The Count descended from the sky, applauding as he boomed, "A magnificent feast. Now, state your requests." John knelt with his voice trembling as he said, "I ask for the protection of Nightglow City, and we'll pay the blood tax." "Nightglow City?" I asked, looking at him as I added, "Used to be Nightglow Town, didn't it?" The Count chuckled and replied, "Humanity loves its loops, so granted," before he turned to the twins and asked, "And you?" "We want to be separate," they said in unison. "You really don't want your sealed memories back," the Count teased. But they simply shook their heads and vanished with a flash of crimson, prompting him to turn to me and ask, "And you, traveler?" I answered, "I want the ability to leave the law enforcer's puppet village." The Count looked troubled as he muttered, "That's a divine field." But fine, and declaring it a gift from the Blood Moon, he handed me a crescent-shaped accessory that granted the S-grade skill, Blood's Guidance, forcibly exit any predicament. "Once a month. My patience is under maintenance," I said, making it clear that I was ready to go. "Wait," the Count grinned at Xingxia, asking, "Your request?" "I want to build a city," she said, her blue eyes steely as she added, "and I want the gods to keep their hands off it, and its name shall be Dawn." Thinking that it was peak cinema, the Count laughed and the world dissolved around us. I woke up back outside the library, but I didn't even have time to check my rewards before the world shifted and a boulder slammed into the ground where I'd been standing, leaving the farmer sitting on top of it, fanning himself with his straw hat. "Not me doing that," I whispered, sliding into the shadows. "You've been running through my mind," the farmer called out, his voice unnervingly calm as he snapped his wrist, sending white silk threads weaving through the air and turning the very atmosphere into a deadly web. I launched Mud Trap, Blood Vengeance, and Death Scythe Eagle in a single motion, and although he was stuck, he didn't panic as he stitched his own wounds shut with silk and turned the nearby stone rubble into massive, silk-strung puppets. I ignored the golems and blurred forward, my dagger slicing into the farmer's chest before I triggered the fate mark on his back, causing a loud boom as he blew apart into a tangle of thread. "Task failed successfully," I muttered to myself. Then I heard its small, light footsteps as the librarian approached, clutching a thick leather-bound book to her chest. "It's dangerous here," I warned, watching her emerald eyes sparkle with insatiable, terrifying curiosity. "Dangerous? To whom exactly?" I asked. The librarian circled me, eventually pointing a finger at her own chest as she said, "To me, I suppose. But you've walked right into my trap." She smiled, a sickly, sweet expression that didn't reach her eyes, and the instant she spoke, the ball of white silk she'd been cradling erupted, coiling around me like a boa constrictor until it hardened into a cocoon within seconds, trapping me completely so that only my head remained free. She stepped closer, tilting her head with a look of mock curiosity as she said, "I'm curious. So why do you smell like the god of blood?" I stared down at her, my expression as cold as a grave, and countered, "Want to know? Then answer me first. Why the victim act? Because if I didn't," she chirped, raising her book with a playful wink, "people would treat me with fake respect, which is boring, since I'm not just some bookworm, you know." "One more question," I said, my voice dropping as I asked, "Are you a man or a woman?" "Guess." Knowing that if she were a man, this would be repulsive, and if she were a woman, it was still nauseating as an old soul playing at cuteness, she asked, "Can you answer me now?" With her hands clasped behind her back. "Simple," I replied. "I have an invitation to the advanced feast." Her eyes widened, green pupils shimmering with genuine shock as she trailed off, murmuring, "That is incredibly rare," completely distracted and unaware that my gaze had already shifted. With a soft pop, the cocoon collapsed inward as if someone had yanked a zipper, allowing me to slip out and land safely on the stone path. The librarian's eyes bugged out as she felt the shift in the air, prompting me to instantly unleash Mud Trap, Blood Vengeance, and Death Scythe Eagle. The stone beneath her feet turned to sludge, pinning her instantly, which made her muse, "Interesting, so you escaped?" before she waved a hand, summoning a legion of stone golems while the silk cocoon disintegrated into a massive, village-wide web. I didn't hide as I stepped out from the shadows with a translucent die hovering in my palm that settled on a 6, triggering a system notification that read Fate Die. 6. All S-grade skills receive a 6x bonus. I exhaled, thinking that if it had been a 3, this would have been a slog, but a 6 meant that now we had a chance. "Still want to play?" I asked, and though she didn't respond, merely flipping open her book as her golems charged, I vanished. She gasped as my dagger sliced open her throat, prompting me to whisper. I was just waiting for Flash to cool down. Before the white light of her healing could activate, I triggered Fate Mark and Fate Judgment, causing a loud boom as she flew backward, her body cracking like porcelain under the concussive force. "Impossible," she choked out, dropping her heavy grimoire as she added, "At your level, you shouldn't be able to hit that hard." I didn't answer, choosing instead to unleash Soul Shock, which caused her ceramic body to shatter into absolute nothingness. Player has killed the librarian. Level up to 35. I saw strands of silk coiled within her remains, revealing her as another puppet, and as the ground began to tremble while distant villagers screamed about an earthquake, I didn't wait to see if more were coming, melting into the shadows to make for the exit. Just like before, the path looped, pulling me back toward the center of the village, as the tremors grew violent and stones shattered, as if something massive were approaching. Thinking that it was a you problem, I triggered the Blood's Guidance skill. Crimson light erupted, launching me like a rocket until I hit the ground outside the village with enough force to crater the earth, while behind me, a 100-meter-wide pit opened, making the nearby mountains look like anthills. I didn't pause to gawk, immediately diving into the shadows and shivering as a pair of massive, white eyes appeared in the clouds, a gaze like a vast, frozen ocean, scanning the earth. I stayed motionless, terrified that the owner would blink me out of existence, and once they vanished, I continued my trek, keeping to the shadows since it was safer to assume I was being hunted. System: player has successfully escaped the law enforcer's puppet village. Reward: S-rank chest. A golden chest appeared in my hands, and though I'd expected a fight, I hadn't anticipated a reward like this, so I used Fate Hand on the chest. Stolen: Puppet Master's Horn A-rank accessory. Effect: summons a puppet of your level. Limit: 1, level 60 cap. Realizing it was a decent meat shield but not enough, I reached in again. Stolen: Puppet Master's Gloves A-rank armor. Effect: enhances puppets by 150% and grants them one of the holder's skills. Thinking that bro understood the assignment, I reached in a third time, hoping for the jackpot. Stolen: Puppet Master's Class Change Doll. My heart skipped a beat at the sight of a hidden subclass, and without hesitation, I watched the doll dissolve into white light as a notification appeared. Subclass obtained: Puppet Mechanist. Stats Prus Trenta. I'd never heard of this class, but the stat jump was insane, so I tested the Puppet Silk skill immediately by shooting a silver thread from my finger that wrapped around a tree. With a flick, the massive trunk was sliced into clean blocks, revealing the skill parameters. Puppet Silk A-rank. Cuts through objects based on MP output and can animate inanimate objects into puppets of my level, with a limit of 2. With the horn and gloves, I could now field 3 puppets, each wielding my own skills, which represented a terrifying amount of utility, so I headed into the woods, scouting for a test subject. I found a mountain-piercing fish, a 4-5, level monstrosity tearing through a tree like it was a scallion, and its stats read: Stats: STR, 2000, 500, Def, 4000, Skills: Tunneling, Iron Armor Defense, Unbreakable. I stepped into view, and when the fish tossed a tree trunk at me, a single strand of puppet silk sliced the log into toothpicks. I whipped the silk around the fragments, instantly weaving them into a hulking wooden puppet. The wood golem slammed its fist into the fish's snout, drawing blood, and though the beast roared, swatting the golem away, the wooden frame clicked into place as it lunged. I grinned, activating Fate Mark. With a loud boom, the wooden puppet exploded, its armor shredded by the mountain-piercing fish's assault. I watched from the brush, nodding in approval because it was low-level, sure, but with the puppet mechanist's gloves, it held its own, proving that even a basic puppet could challenge high-tier monsters now. The beast roared, charging the fallen construct and tearing it to ribbons before letting out a huff of triumph, but I was already clapping as I remarked, "Impressive, so you really solved that problem." It lunged at me with wild eyes, prompting me to pull the horn from my belt and blow a sharp note. Instantly, the surrounding earth and wood coalesced into 3 earth-wood hybrids that swarmed the fish, turning its face into a bruised mess. It didn't take long for the creature to collapse in a heap, leading me to think it was a skill issue as I grabbed the loot box and moved on. I stopped playing hero with my own daggers, choosing instead to let my new puppets take the lead, hacking through thorns and tanking monsters, because even the best artisan needs practice, and I wasn't about to lose my edge. The trek to Dawn City was less of a journey and more of an endurance test, and at one point, I was forced to sprint for my life, spamming the horn to summon fodder while a golden feathered peng, a 6-0 level monstrosity rained liquid fire from above. I dove into a massive, hidden lake, shivering as the water began to boil, but a horned dragon surged up from the depths, clashing with the bird, giving me the window I needed. Thinking, thanks for the save, dragon bro. I sprinted until my lungs burned, reflecting on how I'd raided the Peng's nest on a whim, but the creature's return had nearly ended my run. A few days later, sitting on a puppet's shoulder, I chewed on some dried jerky, knowing that at level 37, I didn't need to eat, but a starving player's stats took a nosedive. This journey was a zoo of every mythological nightmare imaginable, from Eastern legends to Western horrors, until finally, a road of white stone appeared, marked by a sign, Dawn City. It stood like a fortress, an indestructible stone turtle guarding the landscape, but as I drew near, unease prickled my skin. The massive gates were wide open, yet there were no guards, no merchants, no movement at all, presenting itself as a graveyard of marble. I moved into the shadows, hand on my blood moon blade, because I hadn't come this far to turn back, knowing that if I didn't have the guts to walk into a death trap, I wouldn't have clawed my way to the top tier while starting a month behind everyone else. As I neared the gate, a system prompt chimed. Warning, high danger area, player level too low, proceed? I hesitated, because I was a T0 tier powerhouse, meaning if the game called me underleveled, this place was a meat grinder. But since I had the Blood's Guidance skill, I could force an exit if things went south, even if the gate was a dragon's gullet. Deciding that it sounds like a future me problem, I'd wait, because my escape skill was on cooldown for 2 more days, the start of a new month, and I had time to grind, with the 2-month mark almost here, which meant new talents and fresh cooldowns. Back at the Shadow Sect, the Elder was frantic as he roared at Arya. You let him go to Dawn City? That place isn't for the living anymore. Miles away, Wang Longxing was losing his mind, screaming at a subordinate. I want to know how Qin Feng is leveling, because no one is that fast, so find him and make him regret this in the real world. In a damp ruin, a scavenger named Panic stirred a pot of beef, his eyes fixed on the leaderboard, where first place showed level 37, causing him to mutter, hope you make it, kid. With only a month left until the game merged with reality, the world was going to burn, and we needed a monster like Qin Feng to hold the line when the old order collapsed. 2 days passed, and the new month dawned, so standing before the gates, I felt the familiar pull of the system. 30 days reached, new talent available. Acquire? Yes. Obtained, SSS-rank talent history recorder. Effect: 1. Gain massive advantages in historical dungeons. 2. Rewards multiplied by 2. 3. Summon past historical figures for aid. I stared at the screen, and every time I hit an SSS-rank talent, I realized I'd underestimated the ceiling of this game. History dungeons were notoriously opaque. Who could possibly know the intricacies of infinite worlds? But now, I had the keys to the kingdom. Since I'd started this game, I'd survived 2 historical dungeons, crossing paths with legends like the Saint of the Twin Sect and the founder of Dawn City, even brushing against the inscrutable god of blood. The history recorder talent was a game changer, making my advantage in future historical dungeons absurd. But the final effect was the real prize, the ability to summon figures from past dungeons to fight by my side, meaning if I paid the price however steep, I could theoretically summon a god. I took a steadying breath and checked my skills, noting that Blood's Guidance was ready. High danger zone, the system warned as I stepped toward the gate, repeating, level too low. Proceed? Confirm. As my foot touched the threshold, the silence broke with a sudden roar of commerce, as voices called out, fresh beef, buy 1 pound, get half a pound free, and wolf skins for a gold coin. The empty city I'd seen moments ago was now packed wall to wall, and 4 guards in plate armor stood at the gate, blocking my path as one barked. City restricted, so move along. I blinked, because I was entering the city, yet they acted as if I were leaving, making me wonder if this was illusion magic or spatial warping, which felt way out of my league. And if this was an illusion, why couldn't they see I just stepped in from the wilderness? And was the city truly this undefended? I nodded to the guard and pushed deeper into the city, my thoughts a tangled mess. The sights were a fever dream, featuring ancient Chinese noodle stalls, medieval European bakeries, and high-end, modern-looking restaurants all crammed together. I stopped in front of an open-air kitchen where a steak, thick as my palm, sizzled on the grill, brushed with a secret sauce that turned it an amber, mouth-watering glaze. I'd been eating bland, fire-roasted game for a month, making the aroma torture, but I held back, thinking, not me doing that, because I had to play it safe. Suddenly, a heavy, resonant bell tolled from deep within the city. In an instant, everyone froze, and like clockwork, merchants, civilians, and even the guards turned and marched toward their homes in a synchronized, robotic daze. Within seconds, the bustling street was a ghost town, until a raspy voice cracked the silence, asking, what are you doing out here? I spun around to find a bent, ancient crone leaning on a cane, her face a map of deep wrinkles, who warned, get home, child, or you'll be punished. Punished? I asked, latching onto the word as I followed up with, why? She looked toward the sound of the bell, her eyes clouded with dread, and replied, not here, so come home with me. I weighed my options, then shrugged and said, sure. Good boy, she smiled, leading me through a labyrinth of narrow alleys to a tidy, if dated, stone house where the furniture was worn smooth with age. I didn't beat around the bush, asking, why the curfew? What is the punishment? She grinned, revealing teeth like jagged stones, and explained, only outsiders ask that, because the bell signifies the hunt, meaning when it tolls, the hunters emerge, and anyone caught outside becomes prey. She leaned in, her smile growing unnatural, and added, but in this city, who isn't a hunter? Her face began to bloat, skin stretching as something monstrous writhed underneath, and she hissed, and now, I hunt. Thinking it was a skill issue, I unleashed puppet silk before she could move, white threads lashing out and carving her into pieces before she could even shriek. I followed up with Fate Mark and Fate Judgment, causing a loud boom as she exploded into gore. Player killed 4-0, level Dawn City Immigrants Remnant, housing residency granted. Outside, the air shivered, making me wonder if it was thunder, but realizing it was hoofbeats, I scrambled to the window. Dozens of humanoid horrors rode skeletal steeds down the street, covered in jagged bone spurs with skin hanging in rotting strips. Their mounts were beasts of nightmare, sporting tusks and scales that dripped blood. Dawn City Alienated Resident, level 60, attacks, Iron Cavalry Charge, sweeping/unstoppable. Knowing these things hit like a freight train, I held my breath, frozen in the shadows, while the pack slowed, their nostrils flaring as they circled my house. They paused, then trotted off. When the bell tolled again, they vanished toward the source of the sound like hounds on a leash. The city instantly reset as merchants reappeared, guards resumed patrols, and the crone reappeared in my living room, transparent and memory wiped, completely unaware of her own demise. I slipped out, sticking to the shadows as I tracked the bell, noting that the deeper I went, the more decayed the city became. The marble houses were cracked and weather-beaten, looming like gravestones in a forgotten cemetery, until at the end of the road stood a massive clock tower, choked in dust as if time itself had died here. Stop there, outsider, a raspy voice echoed. A figure in gray robes stood at the base of the tower, blending into the stones so perfectly he was practically invisible, though he hadn't spotted me and was just tossing warnings into the void. Third Sage, Alienated State. So you're stubborn, the sage spat, and he struck the tower, causing the bronze bell to groan. Instantly, the thunderous hoofbeats returned, and the hunters descended on the street like a swarm of locusts. One rider pulled his steed to a halt right next to my hiding spot, sniffing the air with a rotted, twitching nose. You can hide, the sage sneered from the tower. But these hounds are the city lord's masterpiece, meaning they'll dig you out of a tomb just to eat your bones. The hunter turned, its mount's massive iron-shod hooves slamming down directly toward my position. With a loud boom, the marble ground shattered under the impact, sending stone shards flying like shrapnel. I remained hidden in the shadows, unbothered, while the third sage, hovering nearby, tilted his head behind his mask, clearly surprised that his target hadn't been vaporized. The hunter-class monstrosity, however, was losing it, whipping its mount into a frenzy and tearing up the earth. I ignored the chaos, focusing on the system notification in my mind that read, Item stolen, Dawn City coins, X1560. A silk pouch materialized in my palm, so I stashed it in my inventory and triggered Fate Hand again. I didn't care if I got rich off these monsters, since I just needed to stay busy until the timing was perfect, and by the 13th theft, the hunter caught a glimpse of me. Its twisted eyes bulged with feral rage, signaling that it finally had its prey. I ignored its blood-curdling roar, focusing instead on the transparent die in my hand that settled on a 5, triggering the notification. Fate die. 5. All S-grade skills and above receive a 5x boost. Die, the hunter screamed, burning its own life force to power a suicidal charge. I simply thought it was a skill issue. Fate mark. Boom. The detonation ripped the hunter and its mount from the earth, sending the creature's rotting arm flying to pin itself to a house wall hundreds of meters away like a gruesome spear. The hunter scrambled to regain control, but the momentum was gone, so it leveled its iron spear at me with its one remaining arm. Despite the level gap, I stared it down with a cool and dismissive gaze, without even raising my dagger, because this wasn't bravado, but the absolute certainty of a predator. The hunter's remaining sliver of sanity snapped. It charged again, the vibration of the hooves feeling like a localized earthquake, but I didn't flinch, and just as it closed the distance, I smirked and whispered, Fate Judgment. With a loud boom, the explosion vaporized the mount instantly, causing the creature to crash to the ground, missing a leg, looking pathetic now that the roles had reversed and I was the predator. The hunter launched itself like a rocket, its spear tip vibrating with enough force to crater the ground 10 meters deep, but I sidestepped into the shadows, letting the steel whistle through empty air before plunging my dagger into the creature's throat. It tried to bite my arm off, but I jammed the muzzle of my crossbow into its eye socket and unleashed Fate Mark. The blast blew the top of its skull clean off. The third sage's eyes went wide because a level 60 elite being defeated by a level 37 player defied the laws of the game, prompting him to mutter, incredible, but they're called hounds for a reason. The hunter's neck, arm, and leg began to stretch like rubber, and it whipped its arm around so that the spear trailed behind it like a supersonic lash at a speed beyond my ability to track decades beyond the speed of sound. With a loud whack, I was sent flying, ribs burning and blood pooling in my mouth, until I slammed into the ground breathless. Yet, as I wiped the blood from my chin, I realized I was grinning because this was what I'd been missing. With no more boring one-sided stomps. The hunter was a wreck, but it was still fighting, so I dove back into the shadows, remembering that while I was an assassin, I usually fought like a warrior, hit hard, run, repeat, meaning I had to stay patient, waiting for the opening. I vaulted out, firing a crossbow bolt that activated Entangling Trap, which turned the hunter's feet to sludge and pinned it down, and though it tracked my movement, lashing out with its whip arm, I was already gone, mid-blink. Uttering Death's Note. Blood vengeance, my blade carved through its throat, causing a fountain of gore to erupt as I finalized the kill, and with a loud boom, its head spun through the air like a discarded toy. Player killed level 60 Dawn City Alienated Resident. Rewards, S-rank chest X2, level up to 38. Wait, 2 chests. I muttered, wondering if Dawn City was a secret historical dungeon. A capital crime. The third sage roared from the sky, exclaiming, "You dare kill a resident of Dawn City." The sky turned black, clouds churning with silver dragons of electricity, and though I sprinted, my lungs searing, the lightning began to rain down in a carpet bombing of pure energy that turned houses to dust and the ground into a honeycomb of craters. I dodged with everything I had, barely surviving, while the sage hovered above, sneering, "You're fast, but your luck ends here," before he raised his hand, gathering a bolt of lightning thick as a redwood. I fired my crossbow, but he swatted the bolt aside with a flick of his wrist and declared, "My turn." I didn't wait for his lightning to drop, using flash to appear right before his face as I unleashed soul shock. The sage froze, his eyes locked in place, and I raised my blade only to realize the lightning cloud above him had a fail-safe that made it detonate automatically. With a loud boom, my body was torn to ribbons in a flash of white light. Skill activated, Cycle of Rebirth. I respawned seconds later, breathless and stunned, while the sage blinked, shaking off the soul shock as his expression shifted from arrogance to genuine terror, prompting him to ask, "What skill was that? Even the strong don't possess such sorcery." He began to gather his lightning again, which made me sigh and say, "Fine, you asked for it." Target, Historical Dungeon Sinisha. Sacrifice, 1 level. I selected, yes, and as I dropped to level 37, I swiped the air, tearing a rift in reality that bled rainbow light, before reaching in to haul out a woman in a wide-brimmed hat and a white lace dress who was Sinisha. The sage's lightning fizzled out, and he stared at her before dropping to his knees in a bow of pure, agonizing reverence as he stammered, "My, City Lord, is that you?" Sinisha looked around, dazed, her eyes eventually landing on me as she whispered with a sad smile touching her lips, "Aha, I see. You have the power to call upon the ghosts of history." Sinisha recoiled, her gaze snapping to me as she asked, "Who are you, and where is this?" "Dawn City," I replied flatly, adding, "Many years later." Her pale blue eyes widened, then shifted to the third sage, causing her to frown as her expression darkened while taking in his ragged, alien appearance, prompting her to ask, "Carl, is that you? What happened to you? Why are you wearing that?" The third sage's eyes brimmed with frantic emotion as he explained, "City Lord, it's the blood tax. Because we thought we were safe after the Great Change, thought we were strong enough to stop paying, but once we stopped, the nightmares began." Before he paced with movements that were erratic and unhinged. I couldn't make heads or tails of his rambling, and Sinisha looked just as lost, so she interrupted, "Wait, blood tax? I know that's tied to my plea to the Blood Moon God, but how did it lead to this, since even centuries of unpaid tax shouldn't twist you into this?" "Because the blood vanished," he barked, adding, "The City Lord went into seclusion, and the High Sage decided we didn't need the tax anymore, because we were the center of humanity, we were arrogant, and thought we were untouchable." Sinisha's brow furrowed, allowing me to piece it together. After she built Dawn City under the Blood Moon God's protection, it became a powerhouse, but success bred hubris, so when the blood supply dried up and she vanished into seclusion, the High Sage cut ties with other cities, isolating Dawn City to hide the rot. She pressed her palms to her temples, her expression a mix of sorrow and frustration as she lectured, "I don't know whether to blame you or myself for not explaining clearly, because the blood tax isn't just a tribute. It's a bloodline curse that feeds on human essence, meaning refusing to pay or even delaying it invites violent retaliation. So how could you be so reckless?" The third sage hung his head, his mask hiding his shame as he confessed, "I should have stopped him, but I couldn't, because other cities would have questioned why the humanities center was paying tribute to a god," and the other 9 sages agreed, even if they were hesitant. He looked at me, a flicker of desperate hope in his eyes as he stated, "You appeared, City Lord, so you must have a way." "I'm just a historical projection," she sighed, her gaze drifting toward me with a touch of regret as she added, "I can't help you, but he might." After Sinisha's projection faded, the third sage led me deeper into the city, where the old streets were completely gone, replaced by a humid, shadow-drenched nightmare of rotting corpses with tentacles for heads and bloodshot eyes twitching in the filth. I noticed silver collars around their necks that pulsed with golden energy, acting as a leash for these abominations, which prompted me to test the waters by asking, "What is the level limit?" "Above 60, we are god ascendants," he replied coldly, explaining that 60 to 120 are legendary, 120 to 180 are god ascendants, and beyond 180 are true gods, with anything beyond that being something his mind can't even comprehend. When I asked, "And you?" he answered, "Level 117. I felt like an ant standing before a mountain, so thinking it was a certified hood classic, I suppressed a grimace, knowing he was a beast. "For your level, you're strong," he conceded, eyeing my gear as he added, "Few could reach this level of combat efficacy at your stage, since that last skill, it almost killed me." We reached the end of an alley where a pulsing, heart-like crimson cocoon hung, dripping with a sickly sweet stench of blood. Item: God Ascendant Vessel of the Blood Moon Lord. Status: living organism. "This is the cancer of Dawn City," the sage whispered, explaining that it drains the life force of every resident to sustain itself. And though they've tried everything magic, steel, spirit, it doesn't belong to this world, making it untouchable. Thinking that I'm not lazy, I'm just on energy-saving mode, the system pulsed, and Blood's guidance flared, causing the cocoon to beat like a war drum. "You do have a way," the sage breathed, falling to his knees as he pleaded. "Please, save our millions." I felt the strings of a grander design tightening, realizing I was a pawn in a game I hadn't agreed to play, but if they wanted a show, I'd give them one. So I muttered, "Fine, let's see what you're planning." I invoked the summon, and after Synesia appeared, I pulled the big gun. Summoning, Lord of Bloodswallow, cost, 5 levels, current, 31. A man in a flamboyant red robe and top hat stepped through a tear in space, his narrow eyes glinting with amusement as he greeted, "A pleasure, chosen of fate." The third sage recoiled, his body trembling because he was in the presence of something that made a level 117 powerhouse look like a child. The Count walked toward the cocoon, his lip curling in disgust as he muttered, "Greedy little parasite," before plunging his fingers into the mass. Thick, syrup-like blood poured out, and the blood moon in the sky ignited like a supernova. "Amused, aren't we?" he laughed, his voice turning feral as he sank his fangs into the cocoon and began to drink. Gulp, gulp. The cocoon shriveled, shrinking into nothingness until only a limp, empty skin remained. The tapestry of reality bled away, the crimson skin of the vessel vanishing as if it had never existed, until the Count picked up the discarded husk, crushed it into a palm-sized ball, and to my astonishment swallowed it whole. I stared, stunned, while the third sage looked even worse, because the unsolvable nightmare that had plagued his city for a millennium was gone, leaving him looking at me with eyes that seemed to scream, "Just who does this kid know?" The Count tapped his cane, weaving a scarlet rift in the air, and tipped his hat to me with a wry smile as he said, "Until next time, chosen of fate." He vanished, and though I turned to address the sage, the words died in my throat as reality itself began to fracture, buckling under the weight of accelerated time. Thousands of years flashed by in a heartbeat as trees bloomed and withered into dust, while seasons cycled from lush green to frozen rot in seconds, showing that the world was rewriting itself. System. Epic transition complete. I walked through the sturdy stone gates of Tianyao City, noting that the air felt thin and clean, a stark contrast to the living hell I'd just left, which made me feel like a human again back in the land of the living. The guards at the gate actually recognized me, calling out, "Natural, long time no see, so where have you been?" "Just a long trip," I replied, suppressing a shiver. I headed toward the Shadow Sect's base, where Alia was lounging on a bench, absent-mindedly shaving strands off her hair with a dagger to test its edge. But when she spotted me, she scrambled up, her eyes lighting up as she called out, "Natural." She sprinted over, then slowed, her expression darkening as she scanned me and demanded, "Level 40? Seriously? Did you exploit some glitch? Because that's not how leveling works." I rolled my eyes, replying, "Sure, I used a forbidden technique, so do you want to report me for cheating?" Muttering, "Bro is fighting demons," she clutched her dagger as if she'd actually consider it, looking so betrayed that I almost laughed. Before she added, "I was actually planning to test your new skills, but if you're a cheater, maybe I'll pass." I answered, "Cool, spare me the drama, so is the elder back?" She replied, "Yeah, and he freaked out when he heard you went to Dawn City, almost went bald from the stress, so he wants you in the prayer room." We navigated the narrow, dim corridors of the sect until we reached the elder, who was kneeling before a shrine with his back to us. But as he turned, his eyes suddenly turned bloodshot, hemorrhaging until they looked like twin craters of gore, while he gasped, clutching his face as streams of blood cascaded down his robes. Aaliyah shouted, "Elder." Clutching his weeping eyes, the elder wheezed with a terrifying, absolute authority, "Natural, listen to me. Never speak of what you saw in Dawn City, so forget you were ever there. Do you understand?" I answered, "Understood." He exhaled, still clutching his weeping eyes, and instructed, "Good, because the great change is less than a month away, so focus on your training." When I asked, "Can you tell me more about the change?" he said flatly, "No, because some things are better left unsaid." As I left the prayer room, my mind drifted to that abandoned investigation mission, the Descent of Change, which I'd shelved to grind levels, but now that the path was clear, I caught up to Alia and asked, "Any missions involving the Brand family?" She leaned back, her dark hair swaying like a pendulum as she smirked at me like a fox and teased, "You're fishing for something, aren't you?" "Fine," before she flipped her hand, making a scroll of parchment appear that contained an anonymous request, which was very rare. I unfolded it to find the words written in a jagged, crimson script that read, "Mission, exterminate the Brand family." I asked, "Who posted this?" To which she teased, guess, but if you really want to know, check the spin bar. The bar was a neon-drenched den of rumors where John, a bald, shiny-headed middle-aged man with a permanent smirk, was waiting for us in a sound-dampened booth. John chuckled. Right on time. So what can I do for you? I replied. I want to know who put the hit on the brands. John's smile vanished, and he countered. That's a high-stakes question, so why ask me, since you're with the Shadow Sect? I explained. It's anonymous, and I don't want to break protocol. He weighed the risks, then leaned back, sipping his drink as he proposed. Unless you do me a favor, because if you solve a problem for me, I'll give you the name. When I asked, who? He slid a holographic image across the table that showed a smug man with a pencil-thin mustache named Henry, who was a rival information broker and a master thief. John added, if you kill him, the name is yours, but be careful, because if he runs, he'll make your life a living hell. I answered, done, so where is he? Late that night, in a desolate house in the West District, I found the scene already ruined, as a figure in a black cloak stood over a corpse, her dagger slick with blood, but as she turned to leave, she caught sight of me and vanished into the shadows. I stepped into the room, spotted the photo of Henry, and smirked, thinking that the task had failed successfully. Before I could move, a blade hissed through the air, grazing my cheek, and a shadow clone of the assassin lunged, her movements fluid and lethal, prompting me to parry with blood's remnant as the clash of steel rang through the silent room. She was fast, but she relied too heavily on innate talent, whereas I was a veteran of 1,000 battles with a master technique refined in the fires of the real world. I began to press the advantage, my rhythm erratic and unpredictable, which forced her to retreat with ragged breathing, unable to match the sheer versatility of my style now that I had her on the ropes. I lunged, feigning a strike at her neck, but it was a trap, so as she lunged back, I swept her legs, sending her tumbling forward before I drove my dagger down, stopping the blade a hair's breadth from her throat. She breathed. I yielded. She stood, shedding her mask to reveal a stunning soft-featured face that hid the lethality of a viper, and remarked, so, you're the deathbird the sect keeps whispering about. I replied, guilty, but I didn't expect another shadow agent to be hunting my target, so I suppose our business here is done. She chuckled. Stealing my credit? You're a devious one. We both sensed our identical techniques the moment we met, knowing that had we actually engaged in a real fight, the entire house would have been leveled. She added, I'm Lillian, from Shanghai City. I chewed on the name, remembering it as a coastal city where the residents were renowned for their naval combat arts, which prompted me to ask, what brings you all the way here? She shrugged, a job, so what else? I said, fair enough, so catch you later, and melted into the shadows before she could reply, leaving Lillian to watch me go, her emerald eyes glinting with a curiosity that suggested we hadn't seen the last of each other. Back at the bar, I dropped the photographic evidence on the table, which made John rub his bald head and grin as he revealed, excellent, because the man who posted the anonymous hit is the former partner of Councilman Bran, a man named Ferrando. Qin Feng asked, who's that? John leaned back, nursing a glass of tongue of flame, and explained, a merchant, pure and simple, who doesn't touch politics directly, just pays off those who do, because his main trade is processing and selling monster pelts. He added, you heavenly types always bring back carcasses, and Ferrando is the guy who buys them. Qin Feng pressed, but, John answered, but his background is murky, because he's not from Tianyao City, and I can't find a trace of his origins. I swirled my crystal glass, the rough surface warm against my skin, thinking that it didn't matter, because he'll tell us everything we need to know. John muttered, try not to die, as we left. Dawn was breaking, but the world remained choked in shadow, so we parted ways, and I retreated to my room where the apartment was dusty, though it was good to be back to Control+Alt+Delete my responsibilities. I sat in the game pod, but this time, I didn't log in, because I needed a break. The lid hissed open, so I climbed out, feeling stronger as the virtual strength bled into reality. With a flick of my wrist, I summoned puppet threads, snagging a dust-covered cup from across the room, and blew a breath of air so powerful it cleared the entire room's dust in seconds. Thinking that productivity was loading, I spent the next hour cleaning, though I knew I wouldn't be staying, until a sharp knocking echoed against the door. A voice called out, Natural, you've been gone for 2 months. Are you trying to dodge the rent? I opened the door to find my landlady, Liu Yuegui, leaning against the frame, dressed in a violet gown with a figure as lush as a ripe peach. I teased, long time no see, landlady. She snapped, stop calling me that, though her eyes scanned me curiously before she asked, did you hit the gym because you look bigger? I leaned in and asked, is that all? She shoved my chest, but I stood like an iron pillar, unmoving, leaving her to blink in surprise as her expression said that the math ain't mathing. In my past life, she died protecting me during the monster surge, so seeing her alive and sharp-tongued, a wave of nostalgia hit me, making me resolve that I'd fix it this time. She asked, so, where have you been? And don't tell me you were just training. I answered, I was in a game, Chronoverse. She rolled her eyes and countered, you in that game, so don't tell me you didn't eat for 2 months. I replied, I was physically inside it. She looked at me like I'd lost my mind, stating, okay, genius, so prove it. I extended my hand, and a strand of white thread zipped out, snatched a cup from the table, and flew back to my palm. Stunned, she whispered, "Are you Spider-Man?" To which I replied, "Not quite." I grabbed a 2-kilogram iron dumbbell and crushed it into a glowing, molten sphere with my bare hands, before dropping the red-hot metal into a glass of water, which made the room hiss with steam. She stared, breathless, and asked, You brought that power back." I answered, "Everyone can, if you register." Exclaiming, "I'm signing up right now." She turned to bolt, but I grabbed her arm. I urged, "Wait, so let me get you a hidden class first. Something powerful." She paused, blushing slightly as she twirled a strand of hair, and asked, "Why be so good to me?" I replied, "Let's call it a thank you for the food and the missed rent." She laughed. "You're easily bought, aren't you?" Though there was a warmth in her eyes. I answered, "Maybe, so just promise me you'll take the class I pick." She said, "Deal." I retreated to my bed, summoning a puppet to handle the domestic chores, which tidied the room and hauled the trash, all while I sat back, exhausted. A rhythmic knocking at the door snapped me out of my trance. As Liu Yuegi called out, "I brought you some snacks." I opened the door, and there she stood, holding a food box as she added, "You haven't eaten in a while, right? Because I made a bit extra." I peeked inside to find braised lamb, beef with scallions, and cola chicken wings. The works which made me smirk and tease. "Just this? If you're trying to buy my loyalty." I was at least expecting bird's nest soup or steamed abalone. She glared, her eyes flashing with mock irritation, and countered, "Take it or leave it." Laughing, I said, I'm kidding. You're just like a cat, always ready to pounce," as I took the box with a bow and added, "I'll eat every bite, landlady." She snapped back, "How many times do I have to tell you? Don't call me landlady." I replied, "Got it, landlady," and slammed the door just before her temper hit critical mass. I sat down to eat, savoring the familiar flavors of her signature style, a bit spicy, a bit sweet, and polished off everything, including 2 bowls of rice. My high-level body didn't strictly need the calories, since I could output enough energy to level a building, but eating normal food felt like a long-lost luxury. Once finished, I commanded the puppet to clean the dishes, and just as I finished, a message from Qin Feng pinged on my interface, stating, "Found something, so meet me at the entrance to the commercial district." Realizing that was fast, I didn't hesitate to climb back into my game pod, because if Ferrando was just a petty merchant, I had to see where he got the capital to fund a total wipeout of the Brand family. The morning sun hung high over the commercial district as I moved through the crowd using a master-level concealment technique, which was an art of minimizing my presence that even high-level detection skills couldn't easily pierce. I found Qin Feng at a coffee shop near the entrance, sipping a brew that was suspiciously sweet, which prompted me to ask as I slid into the seat opposite him, "What's the verdict?" Qin Feng added a sugar cube to his cup and explained, "He's no mere merchant, because Ferrando is tied to Councilman Brand, and together, they're running a massive human trafficking ring involving a mercenary organization called the Greedy Pouch that deals in both legal and illicit slaves." Thinking of slavery, I stirred my coffee with an unreadable expression, knowing that in the Chronoverse, this was legal as long as the victims weren't official citizens of a major city. But Ferrando was trafficking citizens, which was a high-stakes, illegal gamble, making me wonder why they would go through the trouble, and if they were planning a cross-world slave trade after the change, causing the rumors from my past life to suddenly not seem like rumors anymore. Qin Feng's face was grim as he nodded toward a shop across the street and noted, "Ferrando is in there, so we could drop him in 5 breaths, but it's broad daylight in the busiest part of the city, meaning the city guard wouldn't just watch." I answered, "Then we wait," knowing that patience was a Sika's greatest weapon. Hours bled away until evening when suddenly, Qin Feng tapped my shoulder and whispered, "He's coming out." Ferrando emerged, clad in elegant blue silk with a monocle perched over his eye, and as a carriage pulled by 4 white horses waited for him, he scanned the street, climbed in, and departed, prompting us to give him some space before falling into pursuit. Clearly uneasy, Qin Feng whispered, "Why is he heading toward the gates? Since the wilderness is dangerous at night, so are they leading us into a trap?" I decided, "Stay here, because I'll track them." Once Qin Feng turned back, I melted into the shadows, matching the carriage's speed effortlessly, until they stopped at the edge of the city's jurisdiction, where the roads dissolved into overgrown weeds, allowing me to creep close enough to overhear the muffled conversation inside. A voice said, "The tail is gone, so let's talk business." It wasn't just Ferrando, meaning someone else was in there. The stranger asked, "How will you sell the goods after the cross-world transport? Because the heavenly ones reset when they die, which is a nuisance." The stranger replied, "Leave the logistics to us," which made me realize I know that voice. As they continued, "We've studied their world, and though their technology is advanced, their physical forms are pathetic since they rely entirely on gear, meaning as long as you keep them suppressed, they're easy to control." The other added, "Fine, for as long as the gold flows, I don't care about the details." The carriage door opened, and a masked man in black robes stepped out, scanned the empty road, and trekked into the mountains. I left the carriage and stalked the robed figure, who moved with supernatural speed, but since I was a veteran of the shadows, I shadowed him until we reached a hidden valley. I froze upon seeing a sprawling, white stone estate sitting in the middle of the wilderness, its walls stretching for miles, proving that this wasn't some ragtag bandit camp, but a fortress. As the masked man entered, The iron gates swung open. I slipped through the gate, feeling a faint ripple like passing through a membrane, and as the illusion dropped, the truth hit me like a physical blow. Hundreds of people in rough, white hemp robes were moving in a trance-like state, scrubbing stone floors that were already spotless and pruning bushes with mechanical, soulless precision. The luxury of the estate was just a mask for something far more terrifying. The people in the garden were eerily precise, as seen when a gardener pruned a shrub with such mechanical exactness that it defied human error. They weren't robots. I could sense their life force, yet their behavior was unsettling, until a sudden realization sent a chill down my spine: the cleansing arts. It was the signature skill of the Sapien sect, who preached that wisdom was the root of all suffering, and that stripping it away was the only path to nirvana. The sect was a notorious criminal organization, banned by every major city and plastered on every wanted poster alongside monsters like the Hell Dao and the original Sin Society. If these people were under the sect's control, I was dealing with a hive of brainwashed slaves, which made me think that bro is fighting demons as my mood darkened, knowing this was turning into a major headache. I followed the robed man, Stoker, deep into the manor, where two figures were waiting in a secluded chamber. Pouring a glass of crimson wine, a bald, gray-robed man said, "Stoker, you're late." "Down the wine in one go," Stoker replied. "Apologies, because I had to shake some flies off my trail." With a gaze sharp enough to cut glass, the bald man asked, "Did you leave any tracks?" To which Stoker replied, "None, since I looped through the mountains to be certain." The bald man asked, "Good, and the Brand family?" And Stoker confirmed, "Ferrando's mission is underway, so the Shadow sect will handle the rest soon." The gray-robed man chuckled darkly and said, "Excellent, because everything proceeds according to plan, so remember that every descent is a golden opportunity, the only path to godhood, and since the sect leader has waited ages for this, if anyone interferes, eliminate them, whether it's friends or family, it doesn't matter." Both masked figures bowed, answering, "Understood." The bald man pressed, "One more thing, because in 21 days, the descent begins, meaning we infiltrate the new world alongside the counselors, so did you secure their cooperation?" Stoker confirmed, "2/3 of the council is already bought, thanks to Breed." I listened, paralyzed, as my eye of destiny revealed the bald man's stats, and the sheer scale of his power, likely level 80 or higher, made my heart skip, ensuring I didn't dare even move my thoughts, since top-tier experts could sense hostile intent. Ding! Mission descent of change complete. Reward, hidden class qualification. I finally exhaled, and after confirming there was nothing else to learn, I slipped out when a servant entered, moving as silent as a ghost. I met Qin Feng at the cafe, finding him aggressively adding sugar to his coffee as I reported. The Sapien sect has infiltrated the council, meaning 2/3 are bought, and they're planning to enter the new world on the day of the descent. Qin Feng's hands shook so hard his coffee rippled, and he stammered, "The Sapien sect? They're total monsters. So to think they've got their hooks this deep into Tianyao City. This isn't just a small problem, it's a catastrophe." Sipping my own drink, I told him, "You look like you've seen a ghost, so just report it, and let the higher-ups sweat." He muttered, "It's not just fear, because if a radical group like them operates for profit, what about the legitimate organizations, meaning is the new world just a cake for them to slice up?" I didn't answer, realizing he was smarter than he looked. I headed to the Shadow sect base, finding Alia slumped on a bench, chewing on a malt candy. I told her, "You're bored? I've got work for you. So which council members are cozy with the Sapien sect?" Alia straightened up, her eyes narrowing as she asked, "Why the sudden interest?" I handed her the photographic evidence from the estate and explained, "I found a Sapien sect base, and they've compromised 2/3 of the council, meaning even Breed, who was supposed to be Brand's rival, is in on it." She looked at the photo, her face pale as she remarked, "This is beyond our pay grade, so we need the elder." We found him in the prayer room, his eyes bright and focused, as he listened to my report with an unnerving stillness, and declared, "The Sapien sect. Troublesome vermin, so I shall pay an old friend a visit to settle this." He moved, and in a blink, he was gone without a spatial flicker or sound, showing he was just gone, which made the sheer disparity in our power staggering. I said to Alia, "Now, about my level 40 class breakthrough." She sighed, "You idiot, you need a void fisher for that, and since the one in the basement is under maintenance, you'll have to find one on your own." I answered, "Fine, so any tips?" She grinned, her eyes glinting like a predator's, and teased, "Well, I could give you a crash course in high-level combat training, my treat." I watched her, knowing her stats were currently displayed as to my eyes, and asked, trying to bully a newbie. She teased, "It's not bullying, it's special instruction." We headed to the training hall, a massive, seamless steel dome where she promised, "I'll only fight at a level slightly above yours," her demeanor shifting into that of a master assassin. I answered, "Fair enough." I didn't wait, lunging from the shadows with my dagger leading, hoping to catch her off guard. Our blades met in a shower of sparks, and the training began as I thought. I came, I saw, I forgot what I was doing, while dodging a lethal strike to my neck, knowing this was going to be a long day. Slipping from the shadows, Alia said, "Area of effect suppression is effective, but overkill for you," as her daggers danced through the air like the fangs of a striking viper before she added, "Let's see what you've got." Ding! I parried, the shockwave vibrating up my arm, proving her strength was far beyond a slight increase. I deflected the strike, but she followed up instantly from above, and though I caught her opening with my eye of destiny, I chose to evade rather than counter. We traded blows, our blades clashing in a shower of sparks so intense it looked like a fireworks display. Aaliyah finally halted, wiping her forehead as she panted. Whew, suppressing my power is exhausting, so how about we go all out? I sheathed my daggers and concluded, I've had enough training, because you're just looking for an excuse to go wild. She pouted, looking strangely adorable, and remarked, You're such a bore. I answered, guilty as charged, because I'm the world's most boring man, before waving her off and adding, I need to find a void fisher. I sent a message to Qin Feng while Aaliyah watched me leave, her eyes flat and unreadable, asking, Can you help me find a void fisher? He replied, On it, because I'll have my team scouring the city, so if we find one, we'll buy it for you. I countered, Appreciate it, and I'll pay the commission. He answered, Sure, so just give us a discount on gear next time. I spent the next 2 days hunting for leads, because void fishers were notoriously fickle, unstable, unpredictable, and rare, meaning even John, the local info broker, looked like he'd swallowed a lemon when I asked, groaning, I'll ask around. But don't hold your breath. I was lounging on the cathedral balcony when Aaliyah joined me, asking, Still haven't found one. Sipping my juice, I asked, You've been sparring me for 48 hours straight, so are you not satisfied yet? She raised an eyebrow and replied, Sparring, since that was barely a warm-up, because if I actually went all out, I'd be worried about breaking you. I answered, Fair point. Suddenly, my private chat pinged because Qin Feng had found an uncontested find with no commission needed, prompting me to transfer 500 gold to his account without batting an eye. Aaliyah stood, stretching, and asked, Leaving? I replied, Yes, because after I clear this fisher, maybe we can spar for real. I dove from the cathedral roof, fading into the shadows as I tracked Qin Feng's coordinates to a derelict alleyway where the swirling, prismatic light of a void fisher hung in the air, leaving Qin Feng's team to watch, stunned, as I moved past them since they hadn't even sensed my approach. I stepped through the portal. Ding! Entering instance. Fragment of Lost History number 13. Mission: survive the 7 deadly sins for 7 days. Goal: stay alive. Thinking that surviving against the 7 deadly sins wasn't on my bingo card, the system talent historical chronicler triggered, stating, You have gained a starting advantage, and setting my identity as the son of the city lord of Wuyu City. My vision cleared to find that I was lying on a plush, velvet bed, a bitter vial of medicine sitting by my pillow. A voice called out, Young lord, you're awake. A mountain of a man stood over me, nearly 2 meters tall and clad in heavy plate armor, with a greatsword strapped to his back that looked big enough to serve as a dinner table. Name: Bellator, Berserker. Level: 97. Role: Grand Steward of Wuyu City, the Lord's right-hand man. That eased my tension, because if the man in charge of my security was my father's most loyal subordinate, I was safe, for now. I asked, feigning amnesia, What happened? Bellator sighed, his face a mask of misery, and explained, The city lord went missing, and you were attacked while taking over the management duties, meaning the city is in chaos, overrun by original sin cultists, while the council is playing dumb and refusing to help. I quickly pieced the situation together, realizing that the original sin sect, a group of fanatics who believed the 7 sins were the essence of humanity and should be amplified, not suppressed, had been infiltrating the city for months, proving the SSS-rank talent clearly wasn't kidding around since I'd been dropped right into the middle of a political powder keg. Suddenly, a guard burst in, shouting, Grand Steward, a mutiny has broken out in the city guard. Bellator's eyes flared as he declared, The guard is our backbone, so we can't lose them. Ignoring the phantom pain in my wounds, I said, I'm coming too, because my presence will stabilize them. We arrived at the eastern barracks to the sound of steel clashing, where hundreds of guards were butchering each other in the courtyard. Roaring like a dragon, Bellator bellowed, Stop, as he charged, swinging his massive blade to effortlessly disarm guards, and when someone dared attack him, he grabbed them and slammed them into the pavement, creating a crater deep enough to swallow a man. The fighting halted. Bellator barked, What is the meaning of this? Pointing at the other side, a soldier screamed, It's them, because they questioned our training, saying we were incompetent, even though we're veterans who followed the city lord through hell and back, meaning these rookies are just jealous. The other side retorted, Jealous? You're arrogant fossils. Thinking of arrogance and envy, I stepped into the courtyard, releasing a fraction of my soul shock. The psychic pressure snuffed out their bloodlust instantly, leaving the guards to blink as their rage was replaced by confusion. Impressed, Bellator looked at me and remarked, Young lord, I would have been fighting them all day. I said coldly, You wouldn't have succeeded, because this isn't just a feud, it's an infection. I looked at the men, knowing their hatred wasn't their own, but was fueled by outside influence, because a pair of cultists, one of pride, one of envy, had been seeding these thoughts, signaling that the original sin sect had arrived. A flash of steel erupted from the crowd, like a silver dragon surging from a frozen pool. Bellator bellowed, Look out, but he was too far away, and as I watched the blade arc toward me, feeling the rush of air, a loud boom echoed when the sword slammed into the ground, sending a geyser of stone and dust into the air. The assassin's eyes widened behind his helmet, sheer disbelief etched into his gaze as he wondered how he could have missed at point-blank range. But before he could recover, I flicked my wrist, sending a strand of white silk whipping through the air. It lashed around his thigh, and as I yanked it taut, blood geysered onto the stone, painting the ground crimson. The assassin scrambled to escape, but he didn't get far, because Bellator was already there. With a single, brutal thrust, he ran the assassin through, his greatsword emerging from the man's chest drenched in gore. With a casual swing, Bellator decapitated the cultist and turned to me, his expression shifting from rage to genuine concern as he asked, "Young lord, are you injured?" I answered, "I'm fine," because I kept my guard up. Bellator nodded, though he frowned and admitted, "I never imagined you were this fast." I cut in, "Forget that, because there are likely more original sin cultists hidden among the city guard, meaning we have to flush them out." Troubled, Bellator sighed and explained, "These cultists are indistinguishable from normal people, because their spells rely on emotional manipulation, so standard detection methods like the Holy Sect's evil detection are useless." The word emotion sparked a realization, prompting me to look at Bellator with a faint, chilling smile as I said, "I know how to smoke them out." I remembered a skill from my past life, a skill possessed by one of the world's top 10 powerhouses called Absolute Fervor, which suppressed all stray thoughts, funneling one's entire psyche into the heat of combat as the quintessential berserker skill. I added, "If they rely on controlling emotions, then we'll force them to experience an emotion they can't control." We cast a silence spell to keep our plan under wraps, and as Bellator raised his greatsword, a raw, invisible wave pulsed outward, slamming into the guards. In an instant, the courtyard shifted, because the guilt, envy, and pride that had been simmering in the air evaporated, replaced by a singular, overwhelming bloodlust. The guards roared, "Fight! Fight! Fight!" Veins bulged on their necks as their blood raced, and they turned to us, eyes burning with mindless zeal as they shouted, "Young lord, steward, let's go kill those coward cultists." Realizing it was the perfect trap, I watched their faces as the mob bayed for blood, noting a few soldiers who struggled to keep their expressions neutral, their faces reddening and veins pulsing as they fought to contain their reactions, which made me think, "Caught you." With a loud crack, Bellator launched himself like a mortar shell, his speed breaking the sound barrier as he slammed into one of the targets with such force that the impact turned the man into a bloody mist before he could even scream. I didn't waste time, targeting a warrior holding a short sword and a reinforced shield who looked tough, but since my Deadly Hawk skill was already active, as he braced for a fight, I vanished, reappearing in the shadows behind him, whispering, "My patience is under maintenance." I drove my dagger into the gap in his plate armor and unleashed fate's judgment, which made the blade bite deep as the cultist's armor groaned while his body ruptured from within, resulting in a kill that was clean and efficient. Bellator polished off the rest with terrifying efficiency, proving that as a level 97 powerhouse, his speed was simply on a different level. Stepping over the final corpse, Bellator announced, "All traitors neutralized, young lord." The remaining guards stared at us, terrified, because they hadn't seen the kill coming and were now afraid they were next, prompting me to step in with a calm and reassuring voice, saying, "Soldiers, fear not, because these were traitors in league with the original Sin sect, meaning you are loyal, and for your service, I am awarding each of you 10 gold coins." The courtyard erupted in cheers as they shouted, "Young lord lives," because they weren't just happy about the money, but the crushing psychological pressure had vanished, meaning they were safe. Later, in a quiet corner of the manor, I turned to Bellator and asked, "I still don't know how my father vanished, so have you investigated?" Bellator hesitated, then lowered his head and answered, "The Listening Sea Tower." I repeated, "The Listening Sea Tower." Knowing it was the highest point in the manor, a white marble spire that overlooked the entire city and the ocean beyond. Bellator explained, "He vanished while he was there alone, because he went up to enjoy the view and never came down, with no signs of a struggle and no broken locks, making it as if he'd simply stepped into the air." I ordered, "Let's go." We took a carriage to the tower, surrounded by a detachment of 500 guards, where the white marble interior was pristine, yet hauntingly empty. We climbed to the top, where the ocean glittered like gold under the sun, providing the perfect spot for contemplation or for an ambush. Bellator murmured. He was alone for half a month, but since he never missed a council meeting, it's impossible he just walked away. I walked the perimeter, scanning every stone, but Bellator was right, there was nothing, as no footprints, no blood, and no signs of a forced exit could be found. I mused. Perhaps he found something so dangerous he had to leave without telling anyone. Bellator stared at the horizon, trying to see what the city lord had seen, and muttered, "I've searched every inch, young lord, so there's nothing." I stayed still, staring at a patch of coastline far below, and countered, "Not here, but look at the angle from this spot." Bellator joined me, seeing nothing but the usual beach at first, but then he shifted his perspective and his eyes widened upon seeing a massive, sand-sculpted statue, dozens of meters tall and shaped like a sprawling, monstrous octopus, sitting on the sand where there had been nothing a moment ago. Bellator gasped, "What in the hell is that?" Bellator roared, but I remained silent, eyes locked on the system prompt stating, "Player has discovered an unknown artifact, idol of the Slaanesh Lord." The Slaanesh sect is the most powerful faction within the original Sin sect. So, the Lord of Slaanesh, one of the 7 gods of the cult, had manifested a sand statue on the coast, which explained why no wonder my father had vanished while investigating. Bellator asked, should we investigate the statue? I shook my head and advised, that's a trap, because we have no idea what power lies behind it, and if we go charging in, we're just handing them a victory. Since common sense is like deodorant, the people who need it most never use it. I added, our priority is securing the city guard and whipping the council into shape, because once we have control, my father's trail will emerge. Bellator looked shamed and admitted, I was blinded by concern, so you're right. I ordered, let's move, for it's time for the council meeting. Bellator's eyes widened as he asked, council meeting, so you mean? I marched toward the door with absolute resolve, stating, exactly, because I won't let these greedy old vultures swoop in and pick the city clean while I'm recovering. Even though this meeting could have been an email. The council chamber was a cavernous hall with 13 seats, 12 of which were filled, leaving only the Lord's chair vacant. Pounding the table, a balding elder with a Mediterranean hairstyle grumbled, who called this, the young lord, even though he's practically on his deathbed, so who does he think he is, calling a meeting? A gaunt, skeletal elder hissed, exactly, so we should vote for an interim leader, because we have the experience, while he's just a kid who hasn't even hit puberty yet. Before the balding elder could cackle, a hulking shadow fell over him, proving bro understood the assignment as a massive hand descended, slamming the man face first into the floor, shattering the marble tiles into a crater, and leaving the elder's eyes to nearly pop out of his skull. Stepping into the hall, I said, finally, some silence. The remaining elders stared, paralyzed by fear, as I strode to the center seat and sat down, finding it surprisingly comfortable, which made me realize no wonder people killed for this chair. I pointed at them one by one, saying, Wu Yu City is in chaos, and you are all to blame, because while I was unconscious, you did nothing. So did the original Sin cultists pay you off, or do you think they'll share the power? I leaned forward, my voice cutting through the air like a razor as I added, you're delusional, because they don't want partners, they want the whole city, and they certainly don't want a bunch of rotting, self-serving corpses like you. Bleeding on the floor, the balding elder snarled. I object, I said softly, I don't care. A flash of steel flickered because Bellator had moved, his great sword cleaving the elder in two top to bottom, with the sound of a wet towel hitting a floor, prompting me to think that the task failed successfully. I ordered, raid their family estates, and leave no one, which caused Bellator to bow and bark the command to the guards outside, leaving the remaining elders shaking so violently I thought they might shatter. I continued, now, who agrees with my decision to purge the cult? The skeletal elder applauded frantically and cried, I agree, total agreement, so those cultists must go. I pulled out a shallow bowl of blood oath steel, which was a common, utilitarian tool used by various sects to seal promises, prompting the elders to sigh in relief as they thought it was a bluff, cut their fingers, let their blood drip into the bowl, and recited my decree. As I channeled my mana, the steel began to hum, and a violent, crimson radiance exploded to fill the hall, causing the elders' faces to drain of color as they realized they had truly shackled themselves to a divine oath and were done. Meanwhile, in the slums, 3 figures in masks played chess. The Bishop of Pride muttered, something's wrong, because the council members have flipped, meaning we've lost dozens of agents in a single day. The Bishop of Slaanesh sighed, do try to be elegant, even in crisis. Moving a piece, the Bishop of Envy said, the cause is that brat, Sarid, because he woke up and neutralized our sleeper agents in the guard, meaning the council is terrified of him. Pride scoffed, a mediocre nobody, so fine, for if he's a problem, he's a corpse, meaning kill him. Back in the manor, I was reading, trying to fill the gaps in my knowledge, when a soft knock echoed and a voice said, young lord, I've brought tea. A stunning maid entered, making me think, are you a magician, because everyone disappears when I look at you. As she placed the tray down, I vanished from my chair, and a rusted blade plunged into the velvet cushion where I had been sitting a split second before, allowing me to reappear by the door with dagger drawn and ask, you again, so how many master assassins have died on my blade? Since I've lost count. She didn't answer, choosing instead to fling a handful of powder that ignited into a sea of fire, which forced me to step into the shadows and vanish completely. She triggered a purple spell on her eyes to track my mana, throwing a flying dagger at a flicker of shadow, but it hit nothing, allowing me to emerge behind her as a gray thread of energy already streaked toward her neck. Because of fate's judgment, the thread moved too fast for her to even blink. The bomb-laced sword detonated the moment it struck, tearing the maid's left arm into a mangled mess of shredded muscle and bone. But as my gaze remained indifferent, I didn't care for beauty since I only cared for the objective, prompting me to lunge forward, trigger my gear's blur trap, and transform the stone floor beneath her into a thick, sucking mire that anchored her in place. I moved in, my dagger, a blur of cold steel as I targeted her mangled limb with surgical precision, forcing her into a desperate, one-handed defense. Parsing her moves as I dissected her guard, I taunted, agility, decent, strength, abysmal, and counterattacking is absolutely pathetic, meaning you're a master-tier combatant, yet your technique is a disgrace. So your mentor should be embarrassed. She gasped, her movements stuttering as she cried, "Shut up, you heretic." Thinking of emotional manipulation, I felt a surge of arrogance bloom in my mind, making me feel like the sovereign of all and the master, to whom even gods were mere slaves. But knowing it was a heady, intoxicating, and utterly transparent sensation, I asked, "Is this the best the original Sin cult has to offer?" She sneered, her severed limb already knitting back together with the rapid regeneration of a level 50 professional, and asked, "Scared?" My voice flat, I countered, "I'm not scared, I'm bored," before I seized her arm and twisted until bones snapped like dry kindling, following up with a precision strike to her chin that shattered her jaw and scrambled her brain with the sheer force of the impact, causing the assassin to slump into unconsciousness. Bellator burst into the room, his eyes widening at the carnage as he asked, "I heard the noise, but it's already over?" Unmoved, I wiped my hands on a cloth and ordered, "Forget that, so wake her up, because she's the one who tried to jump me earlier." He pulled a metal chair and a vial of awakening draught from his ring, and the stimulant forced the assassin back to consciousness with a violent jolt, leaving her to look at me, her eyes filled with primal terror, and ask, "You're only level 45? So how? Who are you?" I didn't answer, and when Bellator drove a nerve-stimulating needle into her thigh, using pain designed to break even the hardest of men, she began to laugh, a high, shrill, broken sound, and mocked, "You think this will make me talk? When the Lord of Slaanesh will burn your souls in hellfire," before slumping forward, her neck snapping as her spirit triggered a self-destruct mechanism. I sighed. Well, that's rude. Thinking that the task failed successfully. Despite the humor, I was already analyzing the situation, realizing the Slaanesh sect was clearly the lead faction here, and since they were desperate, they were panicked enough to burn their own assets to keep me from the truth. I said, "Bellator, keep purging the cultists, because we've hit their nerve." He left, and as I returned to my book, noting 3 days down with 4 to go, I thought that if stress burned calories, I'd be a model, meaning I needed to stop playing defense and needed to hunt. The next day, we marched to the coast with 500 guards, who stood in formation like a forest of steel spears under the sun, while Bellator and I rode war-blooded steeds whose hides were armored with monster scales. I commanded, "Move out." We arrived at the beach, which was a place usually avoided due to sea drakes and ghouls, leaving the guards baffled because there was nothing but sand. Bellator tried a fury slash, vaporizing 10 meters of beach into glass, but as the statue didn't appear, he asked, "What now?" I didn't answer, stepping forward instead to cast Fate's left hand, which caused my palm to vibrate until suddenly, a handful of sand materialized in my grip, triggering the prompt, "Ding, item stolen, Slaanesh kill." The air shimmered, and a massive, twisted octopus-like statue rose from the void, looking repulsive, yet possessing a haunting, seductive beauty. I read the warnings. "Warning, you are under mental assault by the Lord of Slaanesh. Talent the unknown has negated the effect." I shuddered, knowing divine power was no joke, and ordered, "Everyone, retreat, so back to the city, now." Bewildered, Bellator asked, "But who will protect you?" I answered, "I don't need protection, so just go." He trusted my judgment, and once they were gone, I stood alone before the idol, reaching out again as Fate's left hand pulsed. Ding, item stolen, Slaanesh kill. The sand in my palm continued to multiply, but I didn't stop, keeping up the casting of Fate's left hand until the air itself grew heavy. Suddenly, the massive statue jerked to life, and as the idol of the Slaanesh Lord, that grotesque fusion of octopus and man, fixed its gaze on me, it raised a hand and, with a thunderous boom, the sky darkened while a shockwave of pure malice vaporized everything in its path. I flashed out of the blast zone, hiding in the shadows with sweat beading on my brow, knowing that was close, because if I'd been a second slower, I'd be nothing but red mist, which made me think my brain has too many tabs open for this. Fate's judgment. I roared, firing my stored blades while detonating the mark I'd planted on the statue. The idol exploded, spraying sand like blood, but as the debris settled, I saw the truth that it was barely a scratch, making it feel like I just flicked a piece of dandruff off a giant. The Slaanesh Lord flicked a finger, and a black beam of light tore through the air, hitting the sand where instantly, a legion of 2-meter-tall octopus men clawed their way out, armed with jagged sand weapons. They swarmed every inch of the beach in a suffocating, saturated assault, which made me think that's crazy work. Even as a shadow stepper, I have mass, meaning if they hit me, I bleed, and if I bleed, I die. The idol's tactical intuition was terrifying. It had neutralized my mobility in seconds. Fine, I gritted out, stepping from the shadows and added, "If you want a war, let's play." I triggered Blur Trap, trapping the idol's massive legs in a deep, viscous mire, and then I pulled out a glowing die that spun and settled on the number 7, activating Fate's dice for a 7x bonus to S-rank skills. I lunged, following Blood Revenge by Death's Requiem to shred its defenses, and then I slammed my strongest attack home, Soul Shock. The idol stiffened, paralyzed, allowing me to move in with my dagger Fate's Verdict and detonate its head in a deafening blast. I didn't cheer, because I watched in horror as the sand pulled itself back together, reforming its head within seconds, though one tentacle remained missing. It didn't have one life, it had hundreds, proving that it was a skill issue, indeed. Fighting this thing was a death sentence. especially since I'd burned my best cooldowns and barely scratched it. Stay back, I shouted to Bellator and the approaching guard, knowing they were useless here and would only be more targets. I sighed, because I hated using this, and opened the system menu that stated, Summoning, Lord of Blood Flames, cost, 2 character levels, pay. I accepted, dropping to level 38 as a jagged, dark rift tore open in the air where a scepter emerged first, followed by a top hat and a figure stepping out with effortless grace. Long time, traveler, the Earl murmured, his eyes crinkling. But then he saw the idol and his smile vanished as he added, You really know how to find the worst trouble, don't you? For first, the law enforcer, then the divine scion, and now one of the 7 deadly sins. I ordered, Talk later, so kill it first. The Earl bowed and replied, As you wish, historian. The idol glared at him, sensing a predator far beyond its own league, until the Earl tapped his scepter, causing a blood-red moon to blossom in the sky as thousands of fanged, monstrous bats swarmed the octopus men, devouring them until they were nothing. The idol retaliated, summoning a 300-meter-high tsunami in a terrifying display of raw power. The Earl just laughed and snapped his fingers, which made the blood moon flare like a supernova, turning the tidal wave into mist, and with a final gesture, he sent the moon crashing down like a meteor. The idol shattered, and this time, the sand couldn't reform, causing it to collapse into a pile of lifeless dust. Bellator and the guards stood frozen, eyes wide, because they couldn't fathom how a mediocre lord like me had summoned such cataclysmic power. The Earl turned to me and warned, The 7 deadly sins are remarkably vengeful, so do be careful, before he vanished into a rift, leaving me to my thoughts. A moment later, the pile of sand shifted, and a man with black hair and cold eyes crawled out. Bellator, get out of here, the man shouted. I stood still as the city lord scrambled toward us, breathless, prompting me to ask, Father? It's over, my lord, Bellator explained, eyes still wide from the Earl's display, and added, The young lord handled it. My father looked at me, then at the destruction, and asked, Handled it, so you, and with what artifact? A one-time consumable. I lied smoothly, and though he looked skeptical, since he knew his son was supposed to be a loser, the evidence of his survival was right there. My father clapped my shoulder and said, Sarad, you've grown, before adding, but the city is still bleeding, so let's go purge the rest of these cultists. As we returned to the city, the cheers were deafening. My father entered the council hall, his eyes icy, leaving the elders to stand paralyzed and dripping sweat because they betrayed the Lord, and now, thanks to me, the man who could make entire families disappear without a trace was home to collect his due. The city elders were paralyzed by a mix of shock and terror, meaning they were stunned that the Lord had escaped, but even more terrified of how he might purge them for their failures. As the Lord took his seat, his gaze drifted over them like a blade, making each man flinch. His voice cold, he declared, I have forgiven you, before adding, but my forgiveness isn't free, for you need to earn it. He tossed a dagger into the air, catching it with a snap as he commanded, Find every cultist in the city and kill them, all of them, because if a single citizen dies by their hand after noon tomorrow, I'll pick someone from your family to pay the debt, so don't disappoint me. I knew these elders had been backing the cultists for their own gain, but under my son's pressure, they were now hunting them with desperate fervor. They pledged their loyalty with trembling voices, terrified they might end up on the city's missing persons list. The purge began immediately as the city guards smashed through apartment doors, shouting, Arrest everyone, and kill anyone who resists. When cultists barricaded themselves inside with blowguns, the guard captain didn't hesitate to order, Mages, level this building. Fireballs rained down, reducing the structure to rubble in seconds, with a cold precision that ensured the apartment was gone, while the neighboring houses remained untouched. The captain ordered, Keep searching, so don't miss a single one. While the bulk of the guards swept the city, one team moved toward the slums where they stopped at a tiny shack, barely large enough for one room. Kicking the door down, the leader, the legendary berserker Bellator, entered to find 3 Slanesh bishops staring at us, frozen. His mask hiding his fear. One bishop sneered, You dare come alone? Bellator stepped aside, revealing me, and I countered, You're the ones who dared enter my city, so that's a you problem. They gasped, Impossible, so how are you free? Drawing my blade, I said, My son saved me, as the air shimmered and the battle exploded into chaos. High above the city, my son Qin Feng sat on the roof, unbothered by the thundering sounds of war, buried in his books because he was obsessed with the lore of this dungeon. For him, knowledge like the origin of witch's power was the real treasure, fueling his growth. By the time night fell, Bellator reported the results, stating 1 bishop was dead and 2 were fleeing. But Qin Feng didn't even look up from his pages. 7 days had passed since we arrived, prompting the system to announce, System, player has survived 7 days. Dungeon bonus rewards granted. Qin Feng finally closed his book, letting out a long breath as he noted the dungeon had been full of twists, but had gone smoothly enough, causing his senses to begin to fade as he prepared to leave. Bellator started, Lord, but Qin Feng's consciousness had already drifted away. The system stated, Congratulations player, for you have cleared the lost history fragment No. 13, earning the S-rank reward, Sword of Slanesh, with the special effect, Guardian of the Faithful, as your level increased to 41. Back in the real world, Qin Feng stared at his panel and asked, extra attention from the Lord of Slaanesh, before sighing and thinking, are the 7 deadly sins just that petty? He shook it off and checked his new ring of Slaanesh, S-rank, which granted plus 30 to all stats and the skill. Slaanesh's Shockwave, 15% health damage to enemies within 40 levels, with a 60% chance to induce confusion, prompting him to mutter, not bad, for it's giving main character energy. He walked to the Shadow Sect's base, finding Arya sipping coffee, and asked, as a head deacon, should you really be slacking off with the scriptures? Arya rolled her eyes and replied, I don't want to be like some certain historian who asks me for help because they didn't study. He smiled and conceded. Fair point. She squinted at him, fox-like, and remarked, you reached level 41 inches 2 months, so you're acting pretty arrogant for a newbie, meaning you could be the pride bishop of the cult of original sin. He answered, no jokes, for I'm heading out to train. Arya grabbed his sleeve and said wait before adding, since you're level 41 you're coming on the next mission because we're wiping out the humanist sect. Qin Feng paused, then stated, right, so where's the elder? Because I have a problem. Looking proud, she said, if it's trouble, I can solve it. He replied, I think I've been marked by the Lord of Slaanesh. Arya stumbled back, her face twisted in pure disgust, as she cried, why are you around such dirty things? So move, for I'm taking you to the elder. The elder, mid-prayer, nearly jumped out of his skin when he saw the mark and explained, the 7 deadly sins are creatures of chaos, so this isn't something I can fix, meaning you'll need a true god's intervention. Qin Feng muttered, great, so more work. Meanwhile, news of his level 41 status rippled through the other guilds, causing Lei Yu to stare at his underling, trembling as he noted, we're barely level 20, and he's 41, meaning this game is broken. He added, where's the balance, because if we fought him, we'd need a literal army, proving this isn't a game, it's a disaster. On the other side of the map, Wang Longxing was busy giving a victory speech after clearing a goblin camp, declaring, we are the strongest, so no one can stop the Dragon Guild. An underling whispered, Guildmaster, Qin Feng hit level 41. Wang Longxing's face flushed red, his fists clenching until they turned white as he growled, I will surpass him, for I have to. Deep that night, outside the humanist sect's estate, hundreds of shadow-clad assassins waited as Arya stood beside Qin Feng and instructed, the barrier is down, so kill enough of them to break their resistance, and keep to your level since the bishops are for the elders. Qin Feng laughed and countered, you've told me that 10 times. She answered, better safe than sorry, because I don't want to have to save you if you get reckless. Qin Feng accepted the system quest and followed her into the dark, where Arya moved like a scythe through wheat, decapitating cultists before they could even scream in a way that was brutal, clinical, and fast. I copied her movements, my own blades, finding home in the shadows. Suddenly, a shrill scream pierced the night, prompting a furious Qin Feng to think, which idiot made a sound, as the task failed successfully. The estate lit up, and voices shouted, intruders, so sound the alarm. Chaos erupted as thousands of humanist members flooded the yard, led by a floating figure in gray robes, a bishop, clearly over level 90, who waved his hands to release an invisible pulse that forced every assassin to reveal themselves before commanding. Kill them all. Her voice tight, Arya warned, that's his mind-bending ability, so don't look at his head, or you'll start seeing friends as enemies. Qin Feng teased, you're just worried you can't beat me if I go crazy, right? She snapped, stop with the jokes, you lunatic. I murmured, I'm only holding back so I don't break you. While beside me, Arya gripped her dagger, her eyes locked on the chaotic skirmish ahead. Suddenly, dozens of figures descended from the sky, and though most radiated auras around level 60, a few were shrouded in complete mystery. Their leader pointed toward the humanist sect's forces and commanded, purge these vermin. In unison, the high-level casters raised their hands, causing thunder, fire, ice, and earth to converge into a massive storm that drowned out the moonlight, while bolts of silver lightning roared like dragons, slamming into the thousands of cultists below. Sneering from the air, the humanist bishop asked, you think this is enough? Before he waved his hand to redirect the lightning toward the attackers. A massive, translucent shield materialized, absorbing the blow effortlessly, and then the high-level professionals unleashed their own arsenal. Pathetic, the bishop roared, batting aside fireballs and ice spikes as if they were toys, while the battle turned into a meat grinder. I scanned the battlefield, looking for the man I'd tracked earlier, until I spotted the black-robed man standing directly in the back ranks. Target, Carlos, Illusion Swordsman, level 67, whose kit was terrifying, featuring Illusion Sword Dance, Dream Domain, and Floating Thought Sword, meaning nearly every hit could inflict confusion or pull victims into hallucinatory realms. He was a solo and team fight nightmare, so if I let him keep casting, we'd be debuffed into oblivion. I tugged Arya's sleeve, advising, that's him, so let's take him out, or capture him, if we can. Arya tilted her head, giving him a look that made her flinch, which prompted me to tease, level 67, so that's crazy work, or are you scared? No, I just have a way of hiding my level, but I'm a total glass cannon, so I can't handle that monster, she whimpered, though her eyes remained sharp. Stop acting, I said, adding, we're going in. We dissolved into the shadows, surging toward Carlos, who sensed us too late, for as we emerged, he swung his blade to unleash Dream Domain. A wave of psychic pressure rippled out, pinning my limbs, though Arya slipped through untouched. Armed with Floating Thought Sword, he blocked Arya's strike, sparks showering the air, but triggering Blur Trap. I turned the ground beneath him into a viscous mire, locking his feet. He slammed his sword into the ground, pulling us into a 100-meter-wide psychedelic field. Visions of gluttony, lust, and betrayal swirled around us, but since we were top-tier assassins with iron wills, we ignored the scenery and focused on the man. I triggered Blood Revenge and Death's Requiem, appearing behind him as my dagger carved a red line across his back, and though he spun with his blade whistling, I was already gone. I fired a Fate's Shadow Blade from the gloom, which he parried, only for Arya's dagger to slice through his hamstring. We danced around him, dismantling him bit by bit. Enough! Carlos roared, readying another wave of illusions, but because I was done waiting, I sent a white thread from the ground, tangling his ankle and dragging him flat. I didn't give him a chance to recover, catching him midair, and as he fell, I drove my blade through his throat to trigger Fate's verdict. He exploded into debris, leaving Arya to just smile, her eyes as cunning as a fox's when I asked how she'd help weaken him, prompting her to giggle. Secret. When the dust settled, the humanist bishop was a smear of meat in a crater, meaning the cost was high, but the mission was done. The system prompt read, quest complete, 78 cultists and 1 bishop purged. Reward, 22% authority over the reality descent zone. Elder brought me to the estate's ruins to meet Valens, the city lord, a silver-haired man who looked ancient, his face a net of wrinkles. So, you're the newcomer who exposed the plot, meaning you've got potential, he said. He tapped his screen, gifting me an exclusive privilege, reality descent zone authority, meaning anyone I protected in the Tianyao city territory would be shielded from city-based threats, which was power on a level I hadn't expected. I logged out with my mind buzzing, hurrying to the room next door, where I pounded on the door until a sleepy voice drifted out, asking, "Who is it?" I answered, "It's Qin Feng." The door swung open, revealing the landlady, Liu Yuegui, in pink silk pajamas that were slipping off her shoulder as she mumbled, "What do you want?" Clearly, still half asleep. I warned her, "The game is descending into reality, meaning monsters will be everywhere, so you need to activate your hidden class immediately. But did you order a game pod?" She pointed behind her, allowing me to step inside and stop dead, because her room was a shrine to anime figures, and in the corner stood a full suit of plate armor, clutching a giant greatsword. My landlady was a massive nerd, and when she turned and saw me staring, she scrambled to block my view, her face burning crimson. "Don't bother," I chuckled, adding, "I saw it all." "You," she cried, pulling her collar up, furious, but I just maintained a calm smile as I transferred the hidden class qualification to her pod. As I turned to leave, she spoke up, her voice small, and asked, "Why? Why be so nice to me, since this hidden class must have been hard to get?" I walked over and brushed her messy black hair back, answering, "Just something I wanted to do." She went stiff, her earlobes turning bright red, but I cupped her face, staring into her wet, startled eyes. "Excuse me, landlady," I whispered, and then I leaned in, pressing my lips to hers, while she didn't pull away but met me, her small tongue tentative. She was breathless when we finally parted, asking, "What are you? Why?" "You need to get into the game, because time is running out," I said, and then I kissed her again, lingering on the taste. I couldn't get enough of it, making me wonder if maybe she'd cast a spell on me. Once she was logged in, I followed suit, finding my private messages blowing up. One message read, "Boss, did you hear? Because someone got 0.8% zone authority, and it's all over the forums that the game is descending into reality." I ignored the panic-stricken pleas, choosing to only message panic. "Focus on your level, because once the breakthrough phase ends, the feedback into reality begins." I added, "It's not a game anymore, meaning the next 2 weeks are going to be chaos, so keep your head down. For our world, this is the end," I said, leaving panic, on the other end, to go silent after reading my message. They replied, "I'll do my best to get stronger." "Good," I said, closing the chat and exhaling as my breath bloomed into a white mist against the cold moonlight, signaling it was time to train. I bypassed Tianyao City, heading straight for the Forest of Longevity, because with the day of the descent looming, I had to maximize my strength. In this world, weakness is a sin, and I refused to be a victim. Inside the silent forest, I became a phantom, my dagger flashing from the shadows to leave bone-deep scars on every beast I touched. Thousands of iron-horned bulls stampeded in a panic, but there was no escaping the Reaper, meaning by the next dawn, only a few dozen remained from the herd. I sheathed my blade, grabbed a bite to eat, and saw a message scroll across my vision, stating, "Arya says the egg you stole is about to hatch." When I returned to the Shadow Sect, a massive shadow hawk with jet black, metallic feathers was perched on the cathedral roof. "Not bad, right?" Arya preened, adding, "I trained it well." "Impressive," I replied, and when I reached out, the hawk bowed, its purple eyes filled with a loyalty born from the ritual we completed during its hatching. I mounted its neck, and with a single leap, we tore through the air like a black lightning bolt. "So rude," Arya called out, adding, "Not even a thank you?" We cleared Tianyao City in seconds, and when I whispered to the hawk, "Take me home," it let out a piercing cry and banked toward the forest of longevity. But this wasn't a nostalgic trip, because it was a slaughter. I stood on its back, raining down fate's sword songs, until anything that caught my eye became a smear of gore, since I needed the raw, endless experience points. I didn't stop there, because I conquered the Bone Mountains, the Death Crypts, and the Despair Forest. I named these places myself, uncovering secrets buried for eons. In the Bone Mountains, I found a spine that shifted into any weapon I willed, growing in power alongside me until it became my soul-bound blade. In the Death Crypts, I faced a mountain of stitched-together corpses that shook the earth with every step, forcing me to sacrifice a rotation snake charge just to put the abomination down. Then, there was the Despair Forest, which looked tiny from above, but once I entered, it became an infinite labyrinth. I flew for what felt like 10,000 years. I exhausted every technique, every trick, and every bit of knowledge I possessed, but the forest remained absolute. For 3,000 years, I went mad, tearing down trees and shattering the earth in a blind rage. When that failed, I retreated into silence, poring over every book in my inventory for another 3,000 years. Nothing worked, but eventually, the madness died, the desperation faded, and even the hope of escape vanished. I became like a monk, facing a wall, observing my own heart, while another millennium passed. When I finally opened my eyes, the sapling beside me had become a titan. I closed my eyes again, and in that split second, the forest dissolved into nothingness, proving that in reality, only 1 second had passed. I moved on, meaning I stopped hunting fodder and sought out beasts far above my level. 20, 30, 40 levels higher, it didn't matter. I didn't even use skills anymore, because a simple flick of my wrist ensured the strongest monsters in the world fell. Then, the sky turned to blood, triggering the announcement. Global announcement, large-scale dungeon descent initiated. The sun vanished, replaced by silver dragons weaving through heavy, ominous clouds, while above the clouds, golden silhouettes manifested, revealing themselves as the gods of the myriad worlds. What a lush, ripe land, one boomed, adding, "I want the eastern territory for my slaves." "I'll take the west," another chuckled, explaining, "The souls there have a delightful flavor." They bickered over our home like vultures over a carcass until a sigh cut through the air, declaring greed, malice, and vanity. "So you call yourselves gods, when you're just demons with better PR." The gods froze, staring at the mortals standing before them, a man with no divine glow, no holy power, and a presence so faint they'd missed him entirely. "A mortal," one sneered, adding, "How cute. So how did you get here, insect?" I didn't argue, choosing to just flick my dagger, which caused the god who spoke to explode into a million chunks of meat. The sky went silent. "Kill him," they shrieked, no longer acting like deities, but like blood-crazed monsters. It didn't matter, because 1 minute later, the sky was a rain of gold-blooded gore. Only 3 remained, the god of the blood moon, the tiny girl who'd once trapped me, and Arya. She stretched, smiling at me, and said, "You found me." I asked, "Are you the god of shadows?" "I am, because I wove your fate, Qin Feng. Though I never expected you to break the loom," she replied. I didn't answer, choosing to just send a plume of black smoke back toward her, which was the power she'd given me, as I commanded, "Take it back." I stepped through the void, ignoring Arya's shout when she asked, "Where are you going?" I answered, "To end this." Beyond the barrier where the two worlds bled into one, I slashed the air, triggering the system. Warning, player performing illegal actions. System will detach. I didn't care, for with a wave, I ripped the game system off my soul. I didn't need a cheat code to exist anymore. With one final strike, I severed the two worlds and sealed the breach. "And that's the end of the story for tonight," I whispered, tucking my daughter in. Daddy, you didn't tell us how you married Mom, Mom 2, Mom 3, and Mom 4 yet," she cried. I rubbed my temples, defeated by her rapid-fire list, and replied, "Maybe later, kiddo." She nodded and was asleep in seconds. I walked outside, looking up at the familiar quiet night sky. Everything was over, which was nice. I glanced at my phone, noting dozens of notifications and thousands of messages from people I'd known in a life that felt like a lifetime ago. Book finished.